Hello everyone. If you are new to my channel, then consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do it, thanks. By the way, I also have a Luffy fan fiction channel. If you are interested, the link is in the description. A New Life by the Ethereal Lord. After a shocking discovery during his battle with Kaguya, Naruto gets transported into the DC universe with an unlikely companion in tow. Now he has to adapt to a world of caped heroes and villains, one of whom he may even know. I don't own anything adios.
Naruto's Pav, did you get anything? She asks as I open my eyes. Yeah, I got quite a bit out of the cores. I can't believe how tired I sound. I mean, I expected that using the rinnegan shirato to obtain the information in the memory cores I stole 2 days ago would be a bit draining, but for me to actually feel tired? Damn. Mind sharing? Well, first thing to know is that I don't have a clue who created the damned androids. The person was able to completely erase him or herself from every aspect of the memory cores. That or they simply didn't allow the cores to obtain even the slightest shard of information about themselves. Kaguya says. It's a very intelligent way of looking at the problem, and it actually has me feeling a lot more cautious of this mysterious inventor, and I tell her that. It may seem like I'm just expecting the worst, but if I remember correctly, that's exactly why you brought me into your secret plans, to give you another perspective. She's right. Even with the Indra portion of the chakra fully integrating into me and giving me a deeper insight into the darkness within people, it's still beneficial having her here to throw in her own angles. I take a deep breath and then let it out slowly. So, we're dealing with a person. Or persons. Yeah, we could be dealing with people who have the intelligence and the technical know-how to create an android that can battle on the same level as Red Tornado with the processing power to exceed the Leaguer's ability, resulting in a win for our mysterious party. However, whoever did this had to have planned very far in advance, allowing them to safely deploy their weapon with the absolute surety that only Red Tornado would respond. However, she continues, they had to have known of the creation of the team. I mean, how else would it have been able to take on 5 of them with such utter ease? Whoever designed it, they must have been nearby, which would explain why the android left when I showed up. It had no understanding of the stranger's abilities, so it was recalled and upgraded with even better processors and predictive AI. I finished summarizing what we currently know of the android that was once Mr. Twister. However, the most disconcerting thing, at least to me, is the purpose of the whole attack. Twister was never meant to obtain Tornado's memories, he was simply designed to corrupt the Leaguer. So the designers intended for their android to turn the Leaguer over to their side, after which obtaining the memories would have been a breeze. Kaguya frowns. This was a very well thought out plan. One that inadvertently forced the team to be revealed, if that wasn't a secondary goal from the beginning. Damn it. I honestly want to go into a cursing fit, but I'm actively restraining myself. That is exactly what I've been dreading. Without knowing exactly how dangerous Cadmus is, we can't tell if they had a hand in this, and this world has too many companies that are capable of crafting the android that aren't even Cadmus. I thought you forced that filthy scum to forget your presence at the Sumdak facility? I did. However, without any knowledge of what goes on in his deeper enclaves, I can't tell if he's got a way to retrieve the memories. My chakras integrated further, and I now know that what I did that night was really crude. The mind has the ability to retrieve lost memories. All that is required is a trigger. And you think this trigger may have initiated a recall? It's not impossible. Well, that puts a new spin on things. You're telling me. I groan as I drop back onto the ground and uncurl my legs from beneath me. Sitting in the lotus for such a long time has definitely put a bit of a strain on my back, and doing all this thinking hasn't been any help either. Damn, I just hope some of my new plans will pan out. I might be new to this world, but certain principles are trans-dimensional, and Jiraiya taught me one of them. It never hurts to have an information network. Line break at the moment. Tika White was wondering exactly how it had come to this. A few hours ago, she'd been about to take off for the night when her friend Angie had called in, pleading with her to stay back for her shift as she was ill. After a few moans, groans and good-natured insults, she'd agreed and stayed back at Card Sharp's, manning the bar for her blonde friend until the bar closed and she was off for the night. Her luck, however, had turned sour when she'd been accosted by some thugs who'd, in a very cliché move, dragged her into an alley. A random stranger would probably be wondering why she seemed so lucid when on the verge of being raped. She wasn't some psycho bitch that had rape fantasies or some such shit, of that she was certain, but the truth simply was that she'd geared her mind up for this ever since she'd gotten a job in downtown Gotham. For all the hype about the Bat of Gotham, it was a well-known fact that the Dark Knight was not some metahuman that could blitz all around like the Flash. Since most of the criminal elements of Gotham attacked the more highbrow areas, the Bat was most often stuck working those areas, leaving the dark alleys for the lesser-known scum to operate in. If you were going to work downtown Gotham, you'd have to be prepared to face the scum. Excuse me, is everything alright in here? Her mental ramblings were broken by the new voice. It seemed like the thugs were also quite pissed, judging by the fact that they'd temporarily left her to face this unknown, granting the girl her first look at the person. Whoever it was had taken advantage of the low lighting in the alley and was standing in such a way that the shadows themselves added a layer of concealment to their features. All that was obvious was that the person wore a hood. In the time it took her to process these facts, the enigmatic person had dealt with the thugs. Excuse me, miss? Tika almost rolled her eyes as she stood up. These hood-wearing vigilante types were all the vogue in downtown Gotham ever since it was discovered that the area wasn't always patrolled by the Dark Knight. It was the custom to thank said vigilantes via hard currency. You can drop the whole courtesy act and go straight to saying how much you'd like. She snapped at the vigilante when she noticed him peering a bit too closely. The fuck do you want? I'm sorry, I just thought, do you, by any chance, work at Card Sharps? He asked, once again keeping the polite act up. Tika just folded her arms across her chest. What, you're gonna hike the price up if I said yes? The guy just chuckled, much to her ire, before pulling down the hood, speaking as he did. I thought I recognized that voice. Hey Tika. Taken aback for a few seconds by his knowledge of her identity, she gasped when her eyes adjusted to the shadowy darkness, allowing her to recognize enough of his features. Michael. Yeah, it's me. He smiled as he stepped over the bodies strewn across the alley to get to her side, pulling off the gray hoodie as he went. I'm glad my schedule got bumped a bit. She huddled into the warmth of the hoodie he draped across her, shaking. When did she begin to shake? Shoulders. What? Work delayed me a bit, so I couldn't drop by at the usual time. I was actually heading up to the bar to see if I'd catch Angie before she closed when I noticed. He sniffed at the unconscious thugs, them. I didn't know you could fight. How about we head over to your apartment and I regale you of my mighty combat prowess? I promise to keep the exaggeration to a minimum. Line break. I was wondering when you'd get here. Michael Whalen rubbed the back of his head sheepishly as he sat beside the figure reclining on the roof of Tika's apartment complex. Sorry boss, but it took a bit longer than I'd anticipated to get Tika to relax. Then it took even more time for her to get to bed. Not surprising considering that she nearly went through a pretty traumatizing experience, her jaded outlook notwithstanding. The boss shrugged, though not call. She'll get better with time. That's good to know. The boss sighed. Have you done it? Michael frowned and shook his head. Sorry boss. Much as I understand how vital Card Sharps is to our growing network considering its links to Gotham's underworld, I'm still not comfortable with simply implanting our suggestions into resisting minds. And if I'm uncomfortable, I know you are. The boss sighed, blowing out a few locks of his blonde hair out of his eyes. True. And the suggestion implanting technique does work better on an unresisting mind. Maybe you should pull a jiraiya on her targets. A feminine voice put in. Tempting as it is to shag every mark on my list, Chloe, I would prefer to avoid that kinda representative. Well fuck you too, Michael. The newcomer, Chloe, smirked as she sat beside the boss. She was a beautiful woman, created as a fusion of Naruto's feminine transformation and the personality of his old friend Ino bar the whisker marks. How goes your work? Geez boss, no hello. The girl arched an eyebrow playfully before sitting up straight. I've got enough sources in various brothels combined with our new auditory input ceiling matrices sprinkled about in every room and all about the lounges. Once I'm alerted of any new developments, I'll be able to tap into any conversation and listen in. I've also got enough subordinates to ensure that the chances of missing any intel is severely diminished. And the Hiraishin formula? Incorporated into the listening matrices. Well look who's going strong. Michael raised an imaginary glass and toasted the blonde female mockingly. Good going. Chloe just raised her glass as well. I'll drink to that and to your incredible incompetence. I'm not even in the mood to deal with your squabbling today. The boss sighed tiredly. I've got a ton of things to keep track of, and that's before I head back to the team to explain why I wasn't a part of the mission they're on. The other two blondes winced. Dealing with two squabbling blood clones versus dealing with a team of squabbling teenagers. Yeah, we'll shut up now. Good. So where's Hitaki? The slightly pained looks on both clones' faces morphed into wide grins as Michael spoke up. Believe it or not, he's having the time of his life. I believe it. The boss snorted. He gets to work in a fighting ring as the fastest route into the criminal underworld. And he's based off mine and Kakashi's personality template. Of course he'd enjoy his mission. Plus, he gets the illustrious job of finding a publisher for Icha. Chloe looked a bit put out at that. So how's the progress on that? He found someone. Isaac Rowling, owner of a small-scale publishing firm that's almost been run out of business by a new, larger firm. Kaguya's in talks with him about selling off 59% of the company's shares to us with an option to stay on and help run the day-to-day operations. And he's being a tad adamant, but only because he doesn't want the company to be known for selling what he called soft porn. Kaguya's working on him and she guarantees that he'll crack by the end of the day. I'm guessing that Shiho and Shikamaru have gotten the equipment to set up our digital center? Michael asked. They're sure that the space they've created in their new apartment will be sufficient for the necessary purposes. Chloe yawned as she got up, stretching as she went. Well, now that we've been briefed, I'll be off. I've got a busy night ahead. Later. Michael stared at the beautiful blonde as she leapt off the roof and blended into the shadows. You know, boss, I actually feel bad for you. Should anything happen to her, gaining her memories will be disconcerting. You mean fucking weird. He snorted before waving a hand lazily. Ah well, I specifically factored in a string of instructions to ensure that more hands-on experiences of any of the blood clones doesn't make its way into my head. Ero Sennin would be ashamed. Michael grinned as he finally stood up. At least keep the girl-on-girl scenes. And expose myself to the feeling of being penetrated? Not happening? Ah well. Later boss. Line, break. Hitaki Kakashi was typically a laid-back man with an almost apathetic outlook on life. With his face perpetually stuck in his favorite novel and his perpetual lateness, he struck most as that guy who just wasn't interested in anything. Until you saw him fight. A prodigious shinobi of his time, he was a devastating force to behold on the battlefield, able to tear through hordes of enemies, often including those with more than even his experience in combat. And that was prior to him obtaining the infamous Sharingan. It had been a no-brainer, Naruto's decision to base a blood clone off the man's looks with a healthy dose of his personality as well. Well, the lateness was drastically reduced and only used to annoy certain targets. Come to think of it, wasn't the Kakashi's modus operandi? Naruto shrugged from where he sat atop the rafters. He was at the location of Kakashi's next fight. A sparsely decorated warehouse that was well populated at the moment with spectators of the final round of whether the clone won tonight or not. It had already been approached earlier on by the manager about a way to make a little bit on the side. The clone had left the offer hanging till the end of the night, though Naruto didn't know why. The blonde's eyes, enhanced by chakra, roved over the throngs, watching to see if he could connect any of the faces with any names Chloe provided for him. Angelo Delgado, the actual head of Iceberg Lounge's security team, and Marcella Papadopoulos of Channa's club. Must be a slow night. The blonde watched as Kakashi strolled into the cage with his face firmly planted in his novel as the announcer introduced him again as the White Fang. Then, just as the announcer started on the challenger, Naruto felt his eyes drawn to a spot a few meters away from the cage. With his enhanced eyesight, he could easily tell that the object of his attention was female as she wore nothing to hide her body. Her face, however, was hidden beneath the shadows of a hood. Something about her seemed familiar, something he wasn't sure of at first. Her energy signature feels familiar. He mused as he kept his eyes on the girl. Kakashi's currently facing off Donna's clone, so that's not it. So where? Ah, the girl on the Sen team that struck at Sumdak's facility. The moment he realized the connection, he focused even more on the girl, noting how she, in turn, never once took her eyes off the cage. She's studying the fighters. Naruto noted with a hint of amusement. A potential employer? He'd have continued mulling it over if he hadn't, at that moment, received a message via clone memory from Kage asking for his presence at the publishing firm she was working over. The blonde shrugged mentally, deciding that Kakashi would have to deal with the hooded girl as he saw fit. Just before he teleported to Kaguya's vicinity, the blonde sighed, thankful once again for his infamous luck at games of chance. Winning those huge Friday night pots at various casinos had been how he funded his growing information network. I'm not even paying people yet or having to worry about transport costs, and this still costs a lot. Color me impressed, Ero Sennin, you made it look easy. With that final thought, he was gone with only the barest flicker of light signaling that he had even moved. Line, break, you're a much better fighter than I expected. Kakashi eyes smiled as he pulled his defeated opponent up. And I mean no disrespect by that. The girl laughed tiredly as she allowed him to help her out of the cage amidst cheers and jeers of the audience, equal parts of both directed at her. Sure sounded like that. My bad. I meant that considering the grunts that I've gotten used to going up against in these fights, you were a refreshing breath of an actual challenge. My ribs still hurt from that time you laid into me with those kicks, and I'm certain I've got to end my arms and shins from blocking you. I never even got to focus on my book when you got going. A laugh tore itself out of her lips before she could clamp it down, and for a minute, she persevered through the pain in her equally beaten chest before it wound down and she could speak, amidst gasps and wheezes. No funny stuff. Ribs also hurt. Sorry about that. The man replied amidst his own snickers as he maneuvered his way to the back room to relax. They just crossed the barrier restricting the non-staff entry when the manager of the fights walked up to them. Hell of a great fight out there tonight, you two. Swung about both ways so much it was totally unpredictable who the winner would be. Kakashi just shrugged as she pushed off him to stand on her own. Great for you, hell of a lot of pain for us. The hidden meaning of that statement was clear. Get to the point. The manager did, extending 2 envelopes to the fighters, the larger to Kakashi. Your winnings. Also, you've got a possible client here. Says she's in the market for a spot of guard duty. Top-notch payment. Kakashi turned to the girl who just stared back, both sighed. Lead the way. Kakashi added tiredly. If either of them spent so much as a moment resting, they'd be unavailable till morning, possibly later. She's right this way. A few minutes later, the trio stood before a quartet of red-cloaked people, each with a hood pulled up over their eyes, with the shortest of them standing slightly ahead of the others. The two parties eyed each other closely, though no overt gestures were made, until the figure at the front spoke in a distinctively feminine tone. "White Fang, Darkstar, I'm glad you chose to hear me out. You'll have to forgive our seeming lack of interest." Kakashi yawned tiredly. "We're really tired." The girl's hood rippled gently as she nodded. "I'll get straight to the point. INL would like both of you to help me with a job. Your primary objective will be escort and protection, though I may add a few more objectives as we go on." The masked clone sighed, though a tiny grin formed on his mouth. "Fine. Guess I'll have to complete my book later." Mission complete. Line. Brake sirens blared in the distance as the Star City police raced to the location where, according to an anonymous tip, a group of Yakuza enforcers were stuck in a block of ice. On a rooftop 3 blocks away from the site, the man responsible for their apprehension stood, staring at the lights of the city unflinchingly, even as a person walks out of the shadows and wraps their hands around his shoulders. "Wonder what's got the Emerald Archer looking so lost. Kid issues, I'm afraid." The Green Arrow smiled slightly as he slipped an arm round her waist and planted a kiss on her forehead. "Glad you could make it. The team's out right now and I wasn't needed back home," Black Canary replied. "So tell me, what's eating at you?" The Archer sighed. "Like I said, it's the kids, though I definitely shouldn't be calling them that to their faces. Artemis and Speedy. What's up with them? To understand, I'll have to start from the beginning. You see, ever since we found Roy, he hasn't been himself. It's like he's been consumed with a near-compulsive desire to become a member of the League. Honestly, it got to the point where I was wondering if he wouldn't go off on his own." Here comes the confusing turnaround. The blonde heroine commented. "Yeah, about a month, maybe month and a half ago, he actually did drop under the radar for a week. 9 days to be precise. When he returned, he seemed changed, significantly calmer and more focused. You know the first thing he did when he saw me? Something out of character. Not completely so." Arrow smiled as he shifted her to his front and gently rested his chin in her hair. "He apologized. The same kid that's adamantly stuck to his opinions of Artemis all this time actually apologized for being, in his words, a stupid moron. And right in front of Artemis too." Canary laughed at the way her partner painted the imagery. "I'm gonna hazard a guess and say that Blondie didn't just let it slip?" Her words, if I recall correctly, were, "So glad you finally realized that," and he laughed at that. Definitely a more mature Speedy. Wait till you hear this. He explained that his drive to join the League was born out of his fear of being kidnapped again. Really, to him, if he became good enough to join the League, then it meant that he was good enough to never be caught off guard and taken again. Though unseen to him, Canary's face scrunched up into a frown. That's pretty shaky logic considering the fact that any member of the League can be abducted if enough forethought is put into a plan. My thoughts exactly, though I didn't tell him then. She agreed. Countering his belief at that point could have broken him. Again, my thoughts exactly. Anyway, he also said that he'd ran off to try and survive on his own, but that he ran into a snag midway that made him realize that he still had a bunch to learn from me. He's back for now, but he made it clear that he fully intends to push for a spot on the League. A semi-apprenticeship? Arrow hummed his agreement. Honestly, it's a much better deal than I was expecting. A bit odd, yeah, but I won't look this gift horse in the mouth. And Artemis? Role reversal. He replied, and the blonde heroine easily heard the tiredness in his voice. This was weighing on him more than she had guessed. Now she's the one doing the distancing. Just before Speedy left, I noticed she'd suddenly have something to do whenever we went out, or how she'd always choose to go solo if we had to split into 2 groups. She's likely busy dealing with her own issues, you know. She wants to find her sister, wants to prove that she's got nothing more in common with her father than the blonde hair and similar fighting style, and she has to take care of her mom. Canary said gently. She's got all this to think of while the most her school friends have to worry about is what boy thinks they're cute this week. He received a sharp slap to his palm that rested over her navel. I'll have you know that girl problems have expanded much beyond that, Mr. Chauvinist. Arrow just shrugged. You'll have to forgive me for being old-fashioned, but I've had a lot on my plate recently. True. So what's your plan from here on out? See, that's the thing. He sighed. I got no plans. Tell me to go up against a Yakuza prostitution ring and I'll have plans drawn up in moments, yet I'm totally wigging out at what to do about my protégé, as confusing as it is annoying, honestly. The duo said nothing for a while as one mulled over the issue and the other simply took comfort in the woman in his arms. Artemis is undoubtedly looking for her sister, right? He grunted in agreement. Which means she'll need a bit more freedom than you can give her while still having access to tools and possible help, right? Where are you going with this? Have her join the team. Canary smiled softly as she turned to face him. She'll have your support, a team she can relate with, tools she can easily use, all while we can supervise her, and the team gets an additional ranged attacker like Maelstrom and I discussed. The blonde archer arched an eyebrow. Already discussing team additions with him? And possible team strategies, training styles and more. He's actually more of a gem than I suspect Batman expected. He's been pretty open with the team so far. Willing to lead or follow when necessary, contributes without being overbearing. Hard sell much, Green Arrow said with a mischievous twinkle in his eye. Cause it seems like you're trying to play. Say matchmaker and I'll whistle in your ear, Canary purred, loudly. Backing up now. Better. The blonde smirked. Anyway, with this arrangement, you'll get the chance to have Speedy all to yourself while having an eye or four on Artemis. Case solved. How did I survive so long without you? God only knows. I'll let Batman know about this. I'll be sure to collect. Line, break, recognized. Shard, B08, Maelstrom, B09. I'm back bitches. An exuberant voice drew Calder's attention from the console he sat at to the figures now emerging from the Zeta tube. And I brought goodies for everyone. Do you have to be so loud? A tired yet regal voice groaned. It must be 2 in the morning and whoever's in here would be asleep. Princess, Naruto. Calder smiled as he stood. Welcome back. Yo Calder. Naruto grinned as they stood before him. What are you still doing up? I was going over our performance on the mission to Santa Prisca and the information we acquired. And how'd it go? The Atlantean teen shrugged. As well as can be expected for what can be considered our first mission. It could have been worse, though, and I owe you for ensuring that the issue of the team leader was rectified before we left. They bickered, didn't they? Kagaya asked with an amused smile while Naruto snorted. Unsurprising, really. I know Donna, Raven and maybe Megan are easy followers, but between Connor's anger, pride and Wally's short attention span, they're gonna be a while before they'll become a seamless unit. You say that like you aren't one of us, Calder pointed out. The blonde apologized for the slip. Between taking care of Kagaya and my earlier life, I've gotten a bit used to solo missions. No worries, my friend. I have faith that soon enough you will see us as more than just a team. This time, it was the white-haired princess that scoffed. We're well on our way to that. Why do you think we're here? Calder smiled. I had wondered about that. Well, Kagaya yawned tiredly. I'm off for the night. Both of you can debrief or whatever until whenever you like. Good night. Good night, princess. Later, Heim. Naruto waved at her retreating figure before pulling up a chair and slumping in it. I beat. Your training was this tiring? Calder asked as he pulled up a second seat. Remind me to take you through it one day. Naruto replied with a weak glare. He'll remind me to run the entire team through it. Might actually be a bit helpful. The blonde paused after saying that before sagging into the seat again. But no, that's not the only thing. Like I said, I've got a few things to do to ensure Kaguya's safety, and setting them up is proving to be just as strenuous as actually running them might be. And you remain adamant that the team can't help? Like I said to you, Canary and Batman, I'm a blank slate to this world's database. That means I can run these setups totally under the radar. The team, heck, even the league will benefit from these, but none of you fit the bill, so to speak. The statement ended in a yawn. Both remained silent for a while until Calder nodded. Then I choose to trust that you will remain as open with us then as you have been to date. We all carry our fair share of tales best left untold. Again, both were silent until Naruto requested for the debrief Kagaya had mentioned prior to her leaving. Calder took his time explaining the full details of the mission to the offworlder. By the end of it, the blonde Uzumaki hands was sitting up and had his chin in his hands. It was an excellent call having Raven and Donna waiting in the wings. Indeed, it is conceivable that without their sudden presence, we might have been unable to seize control of the helicopter and Sportsmaster may have escaped with the shipment, Calder conceded. Still, this Sportsmaster did escape to report to his superiors. Naruto stated, and if your guesses are right, then we may be going up against the group in charge of Cadmus. It certainly seems that way. The Atlantean agreed as he typed rapidly into the computer. Robin was able to run preliminary scans on the new formula and run comparisons between them, the data he had on the formula used in the Sumdak facility. He got information from Sumdak, Naruto interrupted, getting a nod from his teammate. It was called the blockbuster formula. Anyway, comparisons between that, the new one found at Santa Prisca, and the blood from the creature Superboy fought showed that the Santa Prisca product was a much more stable one that traded the full power of the enhancements of the original blockbuster formula for slightly reduced physical strength but the ability to willfully activate these enhancements. The League have taken over to ascertain if it will be a single-use drug like Bane's venom or a permanent one. They also need to know if the users retain their own minds or if they become mindless berserkers. Naruto added. Though I doubt that very highly, since if our enemies wanted berserkers they'd have stuck to the blockbuster formula. Also, we need to know if this action ties this Cobra cult to Cadmus as major allies or if they were just pawns in this convoluted game we found ourselves in. Calder's eyes widened a bit. I did not think of that. If they're just pawns, then perhaps Sportsmaster contracted them to synthesize this new formula, acting as both supplier and buyer. A fair trade-off in the sense that Cadmus isn't linked to this new formula on the surface and Cobra get both new territory and control of the original venom before it might be phased off the market. You truly have a deeper insight into these sort of things, the Atlantean stated admiringly. In the words of one of my many sensei, dig till all the facts are laid bare, then search for the motives behind each action. Then search for the driving emotion behind each motive. That is the true essence of looking underneath the underneath. He sounds very paranoid. He actually seems laid back on the surface, but that paranoia is what keeps one alive in my homeworld where shadows were more comfortable than light. It's the same with covert ops in any world. Naruto yawned again as he stood up. We'll tackle these later. I need to rest. I will retire to my room as well. Calder agreed as shut down the computers and both walked away. Calder, thank you. I do not understand. Why are you thanking me? 2 days ago, you stood up to the rest of the team on mine and Kaguya's need to be absent for a while. She may not say it all the time, but Kaguya is grateful for your assistance in ensuring that the whole thing wasn't unnecessarily blown out of proportion, something Wally and were geared up to doing. Then you owe thanks to Donna and Raven as well. They were as helpful as I was, perhaps even more so. I know, I'll be sure to thank them when I see them. Line break, Director Desmond. The shipment has arrived from Santa Prisca. You made a good call, boss. Tara and I received a call from Sportsmaster. The second shipment was destroyed by an unknown unit. The man in question, recently promoted by the board, waved dismissively. The second shipment never truly mattered. We obtained what we needed from Santa Prisca. Good work, Tara. Kennedy. Get samples to Dr. Crane. We have a few test subjects waiting. Got it, boss. Understood, sir. Desmond nodded to himself as two of his most trusted hands in the entire operation walked away. The entire system was moving smoother than ever since the Cadmus shift, and those two were a boon. Tara possessed geokinetic abilities and was extremely efficient in her day job post of being his secretary. Kennedy, his new chief of security since the Sumdak blowup, was a damned near godsend. The young man, in his late 20s, was devoted to the cause, didn't push for anything above his pay grade yet showed curiosity in the matters he was privy to. He wasn't afraid to question authority if he knew he could contribute positively, and he was fully hands-on, taking days off to ensure smooth running at other facilities and to make sure his men were constantly alert. We need more like him, he thought to himself as he walked into a special section of the facility. One of the occupants, a young woman of mixed Indian and American heritage, swiveled her chair to face him and, upon recognition, stood up to greet him. Director. WOU. Sumitha, how's the progress? The now named Sumitha turned to the second occupant. Behind a nearly imperceptible barrier sat a young boy bearing similar features to the recently released Project Kerr, down to the clothes the released clone had worn during his education. Unlike either Match, who was simply uncontrollable, or Kerr, who was mostly docile until his premature release, he responds to all my interactions quite well. He isn't unthinking or absurdly docile and understands that he is in a position that most would deem unfavorable or captivity. He accepts that we need him to provide a future in the instance that the Kryptonian loses his mind or is permanently retired. As such, there is little chance for freedom talks to persuade him to leave us. Excellent. Are there any drawbacks? Upon hearing this question, the female's smug expression changed into a more hesitant one. Unfortunately, there is one. And Desmond prodded. If it was a debilitating drawback, the whole thing would have to be scratched and redone. He exhibits a fear of crowds and, well, new faces. Desmond stopped short. Then, he blinked. Twice. Well, that's odd, considering his makeup. It is. Sumitha agreed, relaxing a bit since her boss hadn't thrown a fit. However, should he be unable to grow out of it, I believe we can use these fears to create a new character mold for him. When the board succeeds, we can have him hide these fears under claims that he seeks devotion to his job, not glamour. I am certain the media can be persuaded to see things from his perspective. An excellent idea, Sumitha, one I am certain the board will accept as a contingency. Do work to ensure that he gets over these fears, though. Complacency is not tolerated. Understood, Director. Kaguya's paw. My eyes snap open as I feel a damp material slide across my forehead, its coolness counteracting the heat my body has generated during the night. I trace the hand to see its blonde-haired owner staring at me with those azure eyes of his. Morning, Haim-sama. Even if my eyes were shut tight, I'd still be able to hear the smile in his voice. Uzumaki Naruto. My protector, my caretaker, my friend. It's still a bit overwhelming that he's able to forgive me, but bit by bit I feel him drawing me out of the despair that nearly broke me. I sit up slowly, feeling the joints in my arms and back pop as I move. Naruto. Good morning. Have you been up long? Long enough to have freshened up and snagged a plate of cookies from McGann. With milk. He smiles as he gestures to the table behind him. Breakfast in bed. You're learning fast. I manage to avoid stuttering as I try to tease him so he doesn't notice my undoubtedly reddening cheeks. I've been told that I'm a quick study, he replied with a grin as he goes to bring the light meal closer. He's wearing a simple black t-shirt with highlights of his beloved orange at the seams, a pair of denim shorts and black running shoes. Somehow, the casual look coupled with his typically carefree features works amazingly for him. Canary's around at the moment and she wants us to have a morning session, so we'll need to hurry. It's why I didn't get anything heavy, he says as he returns with the tray placed on the bed between us. Ah, alright then. I snag the first cookie and bite in. Rinnegan is one hell of a cook for someone who's just starting out. Sure, she may burn them as much as she gets them, but when she gets a meal. Damn. Any news over the night? It's been over a week since we worked on the budding information network. Nothing new has cropped up, but I still consider it prudent to ask. Judging by how his body tenses just a bit, I know I'm right to have asked. A bit. Kakashi's working with Donna's clone, she goes by the name Stacy now. They're to work with the rogue group we encountered at Sumdak, though Kakashi isn't deep enough to know the mission. He replies. Kennedy alerted me to the upward flux of activity between Desmond and his chief scientists. Apparently, they're trying to find something. Michael and Chloe shared word that a group known as the League of Shadows have been moving a bit too much in the light for their moniker. League of Shadows? Yeah. According to Shikamaru's digging, the Shadows are a group of trained assassins who are led by a figure known as Ra's al Ghul. They're into assassinations, kidnapping, extortion. A group of despicable beings. I hear my voice come out as an angry hiss. We will need to keep our eyes on these Shadows. He nods in agreement, particularly since the man that tried slipping away with that shipment is rumored to have ties with them. This sportsmaster, he nods. Well, that brings in a new angle. I was thinking the same. Perhaps it is this League of Shadows that runs Sumdak? Well, Cadmus? His line of reasoning certainly isn't wrong, yet something feels a tad off. We don't have sufficient information to infer anything yet, so we'll keep our minds open. But yes, it does sound like a plausible thing. I've got nothing more to say and neither does he apparently, so we decide to just enjoy Rinnegan's cookies. A few minutes later, the door opens and Black Canary steps in, dressed, as always, in her costume. Good morning, lovebirds. Naruto chokes on the cookie he's about to swallow, and even I feel a slight rush of heat to my cheeks before I squish it down ruthlessly. That twinkle of mischievous joy in her eyes tells me that she's just joking. Good morning, Canary. I greet calmly between casual munches of a cookie. How was your stay in Star City? I make no attempt to hide the slightly victorious curl to my lips as I notice her seem a tad abashed. It hadn't taken long for Naruto's network to piece together certain details about some leaguers. Thank you, Shikamaru, for unearthing that little tidbit. Touché. Her slightly predatory grin has me mentally backing up a step, but I notice that there was no denial. Shock, yes, but certainly no, we're not lovebirds, Rand. So what should I presume, It's shocking how dominant her presence seems all of a sudden. To you, that would have sealed it. Naruto, finally getting out of his shock, slips in with a light laugh. You, on the other hand, never seemed shocked that we knew. Embarrassed, yes, but shocked. Big no, are we to presume, then, that Canary-sensei actually wanted us to know? Silence again, for all of a minute, before she sighs and smiles. You recover quite quickly, Naruto. He has the decency to bow politely. Thank you, sensei. Alright, you two, training starts in 30 minutes. Naruto, you'll be in charge today. We're implementing that plan? He asks with an arched eyebrow. The blonde heroine smirks. Yup. I'm confused. What the heck are they talking about? Apparently, my bafflement shows on my face, so Naruto tells me. All of a sudden, I can wait till training begins. Line, break, so, is anyone else wondering why we're all here? Wally asked in between bites of a chocolate bar. Together with the rest of the team, he was standing at the main access point to the training field. During the week since the Santa Prisca incident, they'd come to learn that the top-down entry to the training field Canary had used was only supposed to be used should the team need a sudden mission briefing while they were training. She just used it that time for the sheer badass factor, a reason he could totally agree with. You mean besides training? Rachel replied in a bored tone, never taking her eyes off the novel she was reading. Second, we're not all here. Kagaya and Naruto aren't here. Now that you mention it, I haven't seen them all day. Calder noted. Did they leave the mountain? The hiss of the pneumatic doors sliding open had them turning to see the subject of their talks waiting in the center of a grassy plain. I've been busy here, thanks to a certain blonde heroine, setting up today's challenge. Naruto's smile was completely disarming, making some of the quicker members of the team instantly wary. Today's challenge pits all of you against me. Connor arched an eyebrow. We get to beat you up? The blonde in question rolled his eyes. Crude way to put it, but yes, you get to beat me up. Best thing I've heard all day. But you didn't even let me get to the big prize. Wally's interest was officially piqued. There's a prize? Naruto nodded rapidly, his grin widening. Winner gets 2 of the Real's infamous blank tickets, both with VIP access cards to the party included. 4 simultaneous gasps were heard from Wally, Megan and Rachel. How the heck did you get one of those? Wally asked in a rising voice. Those things are ultra rare and only released twice a year. The whisker-marked shinobi, bodyguard, waved flippantly. I've got my sources. Forgive me friends, Calder broke in, looking completely baffled, but what exactly are these blank tickets? The Reel is the go-to website for all things movie-related. Rachel explained with an eager look on her usually schooled features. Once every 6 months, they offer up 4 movie tickets. As their name implies, the tickets are blank, meaning you get to use them for any movie of your choice until the next blank ticket draw, continued. And then there's the matter of winning an all-expense-paid trip to the Reel's New Year's Eve party. Megan squealed as she thrust her hand up into the air. Oh, I am so going to win that. Donna, who had remained silent, grinned confidently. Well, now that I understand what the hype's all about, I am definitely in. As the rest of the team dissolved into bickers and squabbles, they never noticed the tiny smirk on Naruto's face. Line, break up in the control room. Black Canary sported an identical smirk, one noticed by her companions. I'm G-thing we don't, Wonder Woman asked as she, together with the rest of the proprietors and the trainers, watched the team prepare for their challenge. Interestingly, the Dark Knight had not shown up yet, even though he was known for being quite punctual. He's got them exactly where he wants them, was the simple reply from the Canary. Line, break, so, remember, get past me, grab Kaguya and move her outside the yellow ring to win using whatever means to win. Naruto yawned as he watched them prepare themselves. Oh, and one more thing. The blonde smiled beatifically at them, his eyes crinkling lightly at the corners as he unleashed a focused blast of killing intent on them. Come at me with the intent to kill, else you'll likely end up in the infirmary. All the teens shuddered as they felt the vile feeling strike like lightning before feeling it roll over them like a wave. They were terrified, and the terror only grew as they felt the tense atmosphere suddenly dissipated like it had never been there at all. Let's begin. Wally was the first to react, surging forward as fast as he could, using action to beat the fear inside. At this speed, I've already won URK. The rest of the team watched in morbid fascination as Naruto casually grabbed the speedster by the throat and slammed him into the ground before kicking him back to their feet. I believe I told you to come at me with the intent to kill. All forms of playfulness vanished from his visage and he glared at them balefully. Is that really the best you can do? Without a word, the rest of the team charged at him, with Connor leaping to cover the distance between them and coming down with what could have been a ground-shaking punch. If it had landed, Naruto, instead of moving back, stepped forward, grabbing the Kryptonian's arm and, with a quick spin, hurling him back, directly into the line of Rachel's spells. Taking a single step back, he dodged Calder's first sword swipe while casually picking batarangs from the air behind him and flicking them over to Donna, who was conveniently positioned such that the instant the flashbangs went off, his Atlantean opponent was blinded as well. Taking advantage of Calder's momentary distraction, he smashed his forehead into the dark-skinned youth's forehead and slammed a kick into his chest, sending Calder right into Connor. Reaching out to his left, he grabbed a concealed Megan's foot and used her to force to back off, throwing any more batarangs before tossing her into him. Then, he was faced with a recovering Donna who lashed out with a precise series of strikes at him, intending to take him down while Rachel took potshots at him whenever she had a chance. Dodging a particularly powerful punch, the blonde moved to the offense, lashing out with a series of bastardized Juken strikes that, instead of aiming for Tenketsu, were all focused on striking nerve clusters. Skilled warrior that she was, Donna was able to contort her body to dodge the first 3 before getting hit by 4 more. She crumpled to the ground, her nervous system suffering from temporary paralysis at various locations. A powerful kick sent her over to join Calder and Connor. Disappointing. Naruto shook his head. Sorely disappointing. Oh well, at least now I can go on the attack. The cheerfulness of the blonde coupled with the realization that he'd stuck primarily to defense during the first few minutes of their engagement had the team shivering subconsciously. Things were about to get really painful. With a flex of his knees, the blonde shot forward, arrowing toward before veering off and barreling past Raven and Wally to grab Megan. With a solid grip on the Martian and the speedster and magician off balance, the blonde decided to switch things up a bit. Weaving a few single-handed seals, the Uzumaki drew upon the tons of training his clones had been pulling off in the Kamui dimension to manipulate and merge 2 elemental energies into one. Sweden. Sensatsu Suisho. A quick foot stomp created a thin layer of ice that rapidly flowed over to S position. By the time the Dark Knight's protege realized that he was stuck, he was already surrounded by a dozen icicles. Blunted, certainly, as the blonde didn't want to kill anyone, but they would certainly hurt. Wally yelled from his spot on the ground. With quite a burst of speed, even for him, the boy launched himself toward his friend and just barely knocked him out of the danger zone before the icicles converged. Naruto, in the meantime, had already moved again, engaging in a very one-sided hand-to-hand fight with both Calder and Connor. The 2 boys were definitely under pressure as their opponent used Megan's body as a shield, preventing them from going full throttle without having such a limitation. Abruptly, he blasted backward, spinning once to gain momentum to hurl the Martian back into Raven before the magic user could complete her spell. At the same time, he bodily slammed into Donna, who had tried to get to Kaguya behind him. "Sorry, pretty lady," he giggled, sounding quite like a kid in a candy store. "Can't get Hime-sama." Again, utilizing the extremely efficient fighting style his team's sensei had taught him in his own world, the blonde grabbed onto her shoulders, flipped over her head and hurled her straight into the wall behind her. Without wasting a single motion, he dropped into a sweeping kick, simultaneously knocking a blitzing Wally off his feet while picking out 2 batarangs from the dozen that flew overhead. With a deft sleight of hand trick he'd perfected back in his full-on prankster years, he slipped one into Wally's shirt and threw him into, watching with a smirk as both collided into each other. The icing on the cake was watching a sudden gas cloud erupt from the shirt and both boys passing out a few seconds later. With a quick glance to confirm that neither Atlantean nor Kryptonian clone was ready to attack, the blonde performed a seal-less shunshin, appearing behind Raven in time for him to flick the batarang at her cheek. It only grazed her, with the flat side to boot, but when the little black projectile erupted in a cloud of smoke, she'd had no time to prepare and was swiftly knocked out. And then there were 3. He smiled ominously at the heavily breathing duo of Calder and Connor and the completely shaken visage of McGann. Then he sighed. "The challenge is over. Line break." "It is?" Martian Manhunter seemed confused. The blonde had the entire team beat completely, yes, but that didn't mean he had to just cut training cause he'd gotten tired of it. "I must admit to being confused as well, Canary," Wonder Woman added. The blonde had completely pulled apart the team with a combination of tactics, skill and his odd power set. Interestingly, he'd opted not to go for the golden cloak he'd donned during the war yet retained a high degree of skill. This was proof, not that she ever had doubts about it, that he was more than just a powerhouse. Why cut the challenge now? The blonde heroine's full attention was trained on the happenings within the training field. This wasn't about them measuring up to him or physical training. This was a mentality test. When they failed badly, it's something we'd discussed over the past few weeks when he'd ask about the league. Apparently, we're lacking something integral that he wants to incorporate into the team. The Amazonian princess arched an eyebrow, and that is simultaneous alpha alerts from Green Arrow and the Flash. Cyborg's voice came in urgently over the comms. "Something big." "We're on our way," Wonder Woman replied. An alpha-level alert meant a full-on threat to the League and Earth itself. The fact that it came from the Flash as well as Green Arrow pressed home the degree of urgency. Line break Naruto's pod 30 minutes. That's how long it's taken for the 3 hit by Robin's knockout gas to wake up, not counting the extra 10 it has taken them to clear the fog out of their heads. That's 30 minutes of me dealing Westrained but highly enraged glare, Calderam and Donna's pensive stares and McGann's fearful glances. I'll have to decide which has had the most emotional impact on me. Pensive stares I'm used to, so no problems there. It's between annoyance at Connor's childish behavior, I won. Get over it, and sadness that I caused such an innocent girl like McGann. Dear God, those soulful brown will be the death of me, such pain. At least the sleepyheads were up so I could get to the point. Well, that was oddly satisfying. First, antagonize them. Use their own emotions to throw them off balance so they wouldn't be able to think straight. Anybody else think that was satisfying? No replies, but I noticed that both Connor and, surprisingly, seemed to be getting close to the blow-up point. Huh. Looks like the Dark Knight's protege has quite a lot of pride compacted into that little frame of his. This will be fun. A quick glance at Kaguya shows that she's already picked that little tidbit up. Now let's see. Besides me flooring each of you, at least twice and oh so easily at that, can anyone tell me what the objective of today's challenge was? As expected, Connor rises to the bait first. There was an objective that didn't involve you trying to feel good about yourself. This is gonna hurt him, but I had to do it. He needs to face the truth about himself. They all do, but Connor more so than anyone else. He needs to see himself for what he is and decide if he wants to remain chained to an old designation or if he has the drive to become who he wants to become. So I put up a mocking sneer before goading him. Trust me, Brad, I don't need to beat up kids and a cheap knockoff clone to feel good about myself. The rest of the team gasp. McGann seems ready to cry, and I feel like an utter heel seeing the accusing look in her eyes. Damn it, Canary was right. This would be hard. And I guess they've had enough. Yes, I did call you a cheap knockoff clone, and I did call the rest of you kids, because you just acted like children. This time, both Wally and blow up at me. Connor seems. I dunno, calmer. I think he's having an epiphany or something, but I won't dwell on that excessively. Not yet anyway. Enough. A hint of the commanding persona I developed during the war at home leaks out into my tone, causing the teens before me to fall silent. I said what I did because it was the truth. The entire test was less a physical challenge and more a mentality-probing one. Kaguya steps forward smoothly, deciding to take the wheels for now. Good, she's better at this being diplomatic stuff than me anyway. The challenge you all faced today was one designed by Naruto, with the permission of the Black Canary, to see if you had an integral component the League lacks and to help incorporate it into you if you didn't have it. Well, forgive my sarcasm, but what could we have that the League lacks? Asked snarkily. What both this team and the League lacks, from the challenge results, is a coherent sense of teamwork, I answer. It takes a moment for this to sink in, but when it does. You think the League lacks teamwork? Asks between bursts of laughter shared by Wally. Oh, that is so rich. You don't even know them, how can you? He never said they lacked teamwork. Raven speaks up, the first to do so apart from the trifecta of knuckleheads. He specifically said that they lacked a coherent sense of teamwork. That shuts them up real quick, and I nod in appreciation to Raven. The League consists of powerful individuals who have grown used to singular combat. Few of them had ever fought in unison with a larger group prior to the events of the Atlantean Surge, as the media refers to it. However, being exceptional combatants that they were, they adapted on the fly to create a haphazard form of teamwork. It worked for them until a point during the war when the linchpin of this teamwork, theirs, Superman, was taken out. We reviewed the media footage and have come to the conclusion that they were lucky to have won that fight. Their strategies were all shattered by the removal of a single variable, Superman. They're completely silent now, drinking in Kaguya's every word. Today's challenge was designed to see if you had it in you individually to work together as a team even when the interests clashed. Kaguya finishes and I step up to continue. Out in the field, the enemy will try to turn each person against the team. They will try to break us apart and try to use varying tactics to draw one out against others or the whole against the one. A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Calder quoted. But if the stronger links protect the weaker, the chain remain unbroken. Succinctly put. I agree. I specifically decided to act the role of the villain. First, I pit you all against each other by offering an irresistible option to sway you from your team. Yes, Wally, the tickets are fake. When you failed that test, I chose to see if you could defend each other outside combat scenarios. I verbally attacked Connor, yet none of you stood up for him. While it is good to allow one's teammates to fight their own battles so they don't become over-reliant, certain battles must be taken on as a group. But what about Sumdak? We worked together, didn't we? Wally argues. No, this time, it's Donna that speaks up. At the facility, we simply fell in line with the chain of command. We followed Naruto's orders because he exuded the most confident aura. Like the League, we created a haphazard teamwork of our own. But we failed the test. Megan sounds so scared it's almost painful. She's like Hinata all of a sudden, afraid to meet anyone's eyes, afraid to speak up too loudly. Afraid of failure and the rejection it will cause. There's a deeper reason for her fear, something in her eyes that just screams a need for acceptance. In a way, she's like I was as a kid, desperate to be accepted into a group yet fearing rejection for being different. This is going to hurt. You did. Yup. That near imperceptible flinch cuts into me as thoroughly as Anko's twin Tonto did during flexibility training. God. However, as I said, this simply means that we'll be working on team training from now on as frequently as we do regular trainings. I'll hammer out details with Canary, but I think we can have everyone put in rotating groups of 3 per week of advanced training so we all get to know how to adapt to each and everyone's abilities and skills. Why not just have the whole team train together? Raven asks. For the first time since I handed them their asses, smiles and speaks without a hint of sarcasm. We're to be a black ops group specializing in infiltration, information gathering and exfiltration. With those terms, the larger the team the greater the likelihood of getting caught. I nod. We'll likely have a standard setting though. Say, a heavy hitter, a ranged support and a close-range specialist, but the teams may be dictated as much by the mission type as well. Guess we've got our work cut out for us, don't we? Wally asks, sidling up to Megan's side. I call being on Miss M's team. I scoff at that. I will enjoy taking his dreams away from him. Line, break calmly enjoying a big belly burger on a roof 700 meters away from the target. Kakashi watched as the young girl who had employed him scoped out the target building a final time before the sun dropped below the horizon. About 10 feet away, Stacy, Donna's clone and his fellow employee, stood straight, entire posture reeking of military discipline and the opposite of his slouched, relaxed and lackadaisical one. On their far side, a lanky youth in baggy blue jeans and a dark green hood fiddled with a cube and a multi-tool. We'll move an hour after sundown. The girl stated as she turned to her team. Both of you will take care of the outer guards. Gizmo and I will head in to find what we came here for. Pardon my asking. Kakashi swallowed the mouthful he'd bitten off before she'd spoken. But shouldn't we head in beyond the midnight mark? We could, noob, but Star Lab's security system is designed to shut out any unauthorized entry attempts from 2300 hours to 700 hours. Their security system is also nigh uncrackable. As such, our best bet is a swift move in and out while they still rely primarily on their human security. Kakashi nodded. That should work. Of course, should anything go wrong, you'll get what you want while Dinah and I play they Fall Guys. The dark-haired Gizmo sneered challengingly. Got a problem with that? It doesn't matter if he has a problem with it. The girl cut in. That's the way it is. Should any problems arise, we'll work to get out of the vicinity, and the moment we're clear, we'll send a signal so that both of you can make your own paths out. If you do, head back to the rendezvous and we'll leave together. You'll have 30 minutes leeway. I suppose that's acceptable. Kakashi shrugged. Would I say Stace? The Amazonian shrugged. Works for me. Good, now if you don't mind, Gizmo and I need to finalize our plan. The silver-haired man shrugged and walked over to the far wall with the clone. He knew their de facto leader only wanted to tell the tech head to cool off the aggression, so he had no reason to listen in on their conversation. He'd already obtained the reason for the heist anyway, so there was no pressing reason to do so anyway. Now, to figure out what they'd need with the facility's notes on instantaneous transportation. Line break 4 hours. It had taken the combined efforts of Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Black Canary, Green Arrow, Captain Atom and the Martian Manhunter a total of 4 hours to deal with a single android. It would have been hilarious if the implications hadn't been so dire. Someone out there could, theoretically, build an army of those monsters and the League and the world would be doomed. That thought, possibly more than the fight itself, had Canary shivering. The damned thing deserved a whole new classification of its own. How's the shoulder? She looked up to see the stoic expression of the Dark Knight staring at her. Are you human? She asked in return. Everyone else showed signs of fatigue. Captain Atom was visibly drained, as were the Martian and the Scarlet Speedster. Green Arrow, like herself, was hunched over and gasping, and even Superman and the Amazonian princess were breathing hard. Yet here he was, the most human of the lot and the one who had continuously pushed the android's boundaries to test its limits, standing as usual with not even a stray gasp to betray the toll the fight had on him. I've contacted a few sources. Wayne Tech has 16 trucks en route for transporting the parts. The Flash has contacted Star Labs and they are prepared to receive them. Cyborgs set up a roster of League members who will be on duty during the analysis and final transfer to the archives. Sounds good. Canary huffed as she stabilized her breathing. Except you don't seem to have any plans for the protection of the parts between here and Star Labs, which is stupid. And you never act stupid. The cowled head inclined for the briefest of moments, a movement the blonde heroine noted. I want you to head back to the team. They'll handle this and I'll send the mission briefing, together with whatever else we've gotten by then, across. Canary didn't bother arguing. Her whole body had agreed the instant he'd offered a chance to get off the field and relax. And how do I get back to the base? As you know, in the past weeks since the activation of the base, Cyborg, Flash and I have been creating a network of teleportation platforms in a range extending outward from the base. The closest is about a mile from here. I'll have Flash drop you off. Well then. She exhaled once more before straightening up. I'll radio in when they're ready. The Dark Knight nodded. And Canary? She paused to hear him out. Get that shoulder checked out. The heroine rolled her eyes. Yes, Dad. Line break 4 hours? Wally gaped at the on-screen image of Batman. It held 8 Leaguers off for 4 hours? I'm not sure if I should be awed by its incredible battle capabilities or terrified, added in shock. Definitely terrified. Canary grimaced as her shoulder throbbed again, very terrified. Indeed. The android possesses the ability to replicate the powers and abilities of its opponents and utilizing them in an extremely efficient manner, the Dark Knight clarified. Who made it? Naruto asked with narrowed eyes, and does it bear similarities to the android that attacked us at Happy Harbor? While the android that referred to itself as Mr. Twister does share the abilities of a Leaguer, analysis of this android says that we're dealing with a different player. This guy. Cyborg spoke up as a new image popped up beside the Batman's, Professor Anthony Evo. But Ivo's supposed to be dead. Protested, to which both Naruto and Cyborg shook their heads, though it was the mecha human that spoke. Supposedly, with villains, it's rarely ever a certainty. So what are we to do? Calder asked. The team is in charge of protecting the parts as they are moved to a secure location. Canary will show you the quickest way of getting here. You have 15 minutes to prepare yourselves. With that, the screen darkened. We need a plan, the young Atlantean stated. I unfortunately do not have experience with this kind of missions. Neither do I, Donna added, voicing similar comments from the females on the team. Well, I'm a clone. Wally here's too impulsive to think anything up, and judging by the Santa Prisca debacle, better solo. Connor wrapped up before turning to Naruto. Naruto? Indeed. You have the greatest combat experience amongst us and are uniquely suited to a mission like this. Calder agreed. What should we do? The blonde didn't answer immediately, choosing instead to close his eyes and think over it for a few moments before replying. Cyborg, can you provide a baseline dossier of the Leaguers that fought this android? Nothing too revealing, just their generalities. I can. Please do so. We'll also need a video showing the android utilizing the abilities it duplicated. Can I ask why? We need to know if it can utilize abilities to an equal, lesser or greater degree than the original wielder can. the blind replied. Equal. Canary supplied the answer. Whatever powers it duplicates, it utilizes to an equal degree as was utilized upon duplication. That makes things easier. The blonde sighed. Raven, Magan, Kaguya, you three will have to stay away from the android at all costs. Raven and Kaguya because we don't want it duplicating either of your abilities, and Magan because you are currently the most fragile on the team bar Robin, who will be coming along for the mission as he will be an excellent support fighter should the android be pieced together, as well as lacking further abilities that can be turned against us. Isn't that hypocritical, though? Donna asked. You have a ton of abilities, any one of which would be detrimental against us should the android duplicate them. The blonde grinned slightly. Recall that I took you all out almost without utilizing any of my abilities? I'm certain that I can combat this android without utilizing any of my abilities as well. And Calder? Connor asked. Unless the android can suddenly create tools and equipment, I doubt its abilities to duplicate Calder's abilities. That's good to know that the bases are all covered, but we don't have a concrete plan yet, Wally pointed out. The enemy is in pieces, Naruto shrugged, and should this mission go well, it will remain in pieces. Creating a concrete battle plan is essentially pointless. The many variables involved in battle certainly make it so. Well, with that covered, the rest of us will suit up, Calder stated. Meanwhile, Magan, Raven and Kaguya will fly over to the battlefield and trail us from there just in CA. With that, the team nodded and headed off to prepare. Line, break, Connor. Are you alright? Naruto asked over the comms, though he expected no reply and, indeed, received none. The raven-haired teen had seemed pretty torn up over the all but total rejection his source material had shown towards him and had been surly since the mission had begun. Upon hearing of Batman's plan to utilize only 2 of the dozen trucks to transport the parts to their destination, he had immediately opted to stick with the clone. Together with Wally, who was currently flanking them on a bike a few hundred meters out, moving parallel to them on a dirt track through the corn farm, they made up Team Beta with Alpha being Calder and Donna. Concealed by a unique, wind-based jutsu, the blonde was seated atop the speeding truck, the eyes of the team for the mission. Come on Connor, talk to me. Leave me alone. The blonde, now raven-haired, as was his modus operandi during missions, Uzumaki sighed tiredly. Superman wasn't harsh in his rejection, but even simple oblivion to another's desire could trigger deep-seated feelings of rejection. One only had to see Hinata's reaction to his youthful obliviousness to know that. The Kryptonian hero had gone a tad further than that with his claims of being caught unawares and, between the sudden knowledge of his clone and the sudden knowledge of there being a team of young heroes being thrust into the warfront, sanctioned by Batman, no less, the big man had said that he couldn't handle such and needed time to think. Naruto scoffed. At the very least, he could have agreed to meeting the boy before taking off like a damned pussy. With another sigh, and God, was he doing that a lot recently, the blonde decided to speak to the boy. Connor, I know how you feel, great. Not only are you a bodyguard, you're a psychiatrist too, just wonderful. I'm not a psychiatrist Connor, but I do know exactly what it's like to not be acknowledged just because someone thinks you're either a mistake or just a weapon. He could sense the young boy's sudden spike of interest, tempered by the sense of betrayal and rejection he'd just been through. What do you mean? You see, as a child, I was special. I had massive potential. In a village specializing in creating warriors, I was born with the potential to be a cut above the standard. Unfortunately, circumstances around my birth ensured that people would grow up hating me, both for my being alive and for my potential. I met a guy who lived a similar life. He was on the brink of being a monster when I met him. What happened to him? He became my friend. I showed him how I avoided the gaping maw of hatred that surrounded me. Silence. Naruto could feel the boy struggling within himself. If he was to break free, he needed to ask the question himself. If he couldn't, chances were that he would fall. Unfortunately, trouble kicked in at that moment in the form of a swarm of steel gray, vaguely simian shapes approaching in the distance. Superboy, Kid Flash, we have incoming. Southeast, 400 meters and closing fast. Any clue what we're up against? The speedster asked. A quick burst of chakra and the fully matured Sharingan spun into view. Monkeys. Robotic monkeys. Anyone else think it's an odd coincidence that we're attacked by flying robot monkeys while shipping an android? Superboy grunted. Kid, radio Robin. Let them know what's up and have Bird Boy figure out how they're tracking us. Naruto ordered as he began saturating the air with his chakra. Superboy, prepare yourself. I'll try to knock them out, but a few may get by me. Kid, stay on the bike unless there's a reason for you to show up. Like if the driver needs a quick evac. Got it. Both boys replied before the comma went silent. The simian swarm, now about 100 meters away, suddenly split into 4 groups, 2 speeding up to overtake the vehicle while the other 2 scattered and converged on the truck. Not on my watch. The blonde whispered softly as, with a single hand seal, he unleashed the winds he'd saturated with his chakra. Futon. Mugan and Satsuha. The S-ranked silent assassination wave technique was a favorite of his when faced with hordes of zetsus and nothing to stop him from letting loose. It essentially turned the very air around the targets within a field of his chakra-saturated wind into a superfine blender, shredding targets near instantly. These monkeys were no different. Unfortunately, they had heavy reinforcements who'd stayed within the cornfield and he didn't have the time to set up the silent assassination wave technique. So he did the next best thing. He began unsealing and hurling wind-enhanced kunai at the targets, going straight for a single shot between their large green eyes, his sharingan working to ensure that he kept them all in sight. Maelstrom. Shit, they're tunneling in from beneath, lasers. Extremely busy keeping a bulk of them away here, Naruto replied with a grunt as he lobbed a trio of kunai at two monkeys that tried to vault over their companions. It's a good thing I had my clones inscribe some seals on my weaponry. Just then, a violent explosion came from within the truck, blowing the truck door out with a smoking Connor crumpled within. Shit. Naruto swore as he deactivated the sharingan and jumped down to grab the boy and help him up. You okay? Ringing ears. I'll survive. Let's go. With that, both charged forward, Connor covering the distance to the truck in a single leap and Naruto providing a hail of cover fire. Just as Superboy landed, though, the bus swerved erratically and the blonde noticed three robotic tails flying out of the driver's cab. Kid Flash. Get the driver out of there. Stat. On it, leaving that duty to his teammate, the blonde caught up to the truck and, some a pair of kunai to his hands, began attacking the enemies that swarmed the bus. However, with the bus still swerving erratically and Superboy being pummeled repeatedly, the blonde decided to call the Kryptonian back. It was a lucky call as, not even a second after he jumped, the roof of the truck was blown apart, the concussion throwing the mid-air boy off course. A dozen robots flew into the air with the android parts. In that instant, the blonde was split. Save Connor or go for the parts. Damn it! He swore before unleashing a burst of wind chakra from his feet, propelling him into the air to catch the boy. Ma Maelstrom. The boy shook his head groggily. What happened? Choice between you and the robots, I went for you. Naruto grunted as they landed. In the distance, the monkeys made off with their loot. Miss Martian, Team Beta needs an extraction. Line break. The android had an extensive GPS tracker built into every limb. Robin stated as he brought up the results of his hack. Even if we'd taken it apart limb by limb and transported it that way, we'd still have been found. Naruto grunted from his seat in the bioship, having already guessed as much. The whole team was in the bioship, Megan having picked Team Alpha soon after Team Beta. Now, they were working on a plan to get the android back before it could be pieced together. I'll go ahead and ask the obvious. Wally drawled, did you hack them? I did. Robin replied as he pulled up a map on the bioship's holographic display. The parts are all here. Judging by the movement speed, I'd say they're on the 7 p.m. train from Gotham. Evo must be trying to piece his crap together again. Connor growled, still pissed at being caught in an explosion, twice. Undoubtedly. Naruto pinched the bridge of his nose. I'm still in charge of the team strategy, right? Yes. Calder replied. In that case, Robin, find me an open space, possibly a field within easy reach from the train. Megan, head over to the coordinates of the parts. Connor, Wally, Donna, Calder and I are going to try to stop it from being assembled, but should we fail, we'll be playing quite possibly the most dangerous game of tag with the android to GE finds. Once there, the rest of you will back off and leave me to handle it. The outburst of shock was as expected as even Megan nearly stalled the ship just to gape at him. Are you crazy? That thing has the abilities of 8 leaguers, yelled. Yeah, and you can't utilize any of your abilities else they'll be used against you, Megan added. The outburst continued for nearly a minute until they realized that neither Kaguya nor Naruto had spoken, simply staring at each other intently. Gradually, the noise quieted until only the thrum of the engines made any sound. Are you sure? Kaguya asked quietly. The blonde smiled. Trust me. The white-haired princess stared at him for a moment longer before sighing. Then it is settled. Wally blinked. Wait, that's it? She says it's settled and so it is? She's the only one that can stop me. Naruto shrugged. However, I want all of you to trust me. Just as I trust that you will play your parts, I want you to trust that I will do the same. I've seen you do quite a lot, Raven admitted, but this seems much. I know, and that's why I'm asking you to trust me. The bioship fell silent as the team struggled to decide. Line break. Remember guys, it's got the powers of 8 leaguers, 5 out-and-out powerhouses and 3 of the most skilled fighters in the league. Naruto warned as his hair shifted to black again, matching the rest of his outfit. Staring at each of his teammates that were about to jump out with him, he conveyed utter seriousness yet complete trust in their abilities. If it gets assembled, call out and do not hold back. The rest of us will be with you as soon as possible. They all nodded before jumping out, each landing on a cabin as it passed per their plan. Donna moved about as stealthily as she could, taking to hovering where she could to avoid creaking floorboards. Within minutes, she scanned her cabin top to bottom. Nothing here. Aqualad here. Same in my cabin. Checked 3 times already. Nada. Maelstrom. Nothing. They all paused, waiting for their final teammate when a crackle of static buzzed their comms. Shit. Head to Superboy. Now, Donna was off like a bolt, flying out of her cabin and then rushing over to the Kryptonian clone. Suddenly, she was pulled out of the way of a flying Superboy by her spiky-haired teammate. It's been assembled, he whispered to her as the android flew out of the cabin in pursuit of its prey. We're doing it. With his message passed, he launched himself forward, like an arrow out of a bullet with that strange running style of his. Glancing at Calder, who nodded to her, she took off as well, following her squad leader as he'd called himself. Within seconds, they caught up to the android as it laid into Connor with devastatingly powerful blows that would have killed even the average metahuman. Maelstrom struck first, circling round to face the android before flicking his kunai at it. It seemed like an inconsequential move, but the addition of the unknown variable had the android calling on the density shifting of the Martian Manhunter to simply let it sail past, allowing her to ensnare Superboy with her lasso and tug him out of the way. In the meantime, Maelstrom raced away from the now charging android, slowly but surely leading it to their trap. Accessing. Flash. The now black-haired Uzumaki grunted in pain as the android sped up and shoulder-checked him. Just before it could continue its assault, though, Kid Flash pushed it away and continued the game. This time, it was Aqualad that saved the speedster from getting smashed by Superman's strength after the boy's legs were taken out by a disorienting blast from Canary's cry. A water whip had pulled him away even as the android was pushed back by a hammer strike to the chest. We're up. Superboy grunted. Damn it, strong. I'm gonna tell Maelstrom, next time, between me and the parts, he should head for the parts. If all goes well, it will be reduced to scrap again, she replied as she dropped him and flew forward. She didn't want to think of the possibility of things not going well. Line, break, they're getting closer, Robin stated through teeth-gritted intention. He turned to his companion. Are you sure about this? His companion arched an eyebrow. Thought we were over this? Excuse me for being worried. He shot back just as Superboy landed, rocking the ground as he took off an instant after he'd landed. Behind him were Troya and Maelstrom, the first flying, the second racing toward them. Aqualad and I are here. Kid Flash gasped as he landed in the safe zone with the Atlantean. Let's kick it. Robin's companion, a clone of Maelstrom, nodded before disappearing in a puff of smoke. Up front, Connor took a final leap and cleared the prepared field. At the same moment, Troya veered off while Maelstrom, hotly pursued by the android, landed right in the middle of the field, ducking a swing from the android and spinning to come face to face with the machine, swiftly lifting a hand to just below his sternum, folding fingers until he had his index and middle pointing at his jaw in a gun-like fashion. Ninpo. His voice rang round the clearing. Shishi engine. Line, break. I smile as I hear the android's words, unable to duplicate. Of course it would be unable to duplicate that. The 4 purple flames barrier required an already prepared sealing matrix and 4 people or 4 sources of chakra to power it. My use of a hand seal was just an action of simple misdirection for the android and its creator, who would undoubtedly be watching this fight. That was the real reason I decided to split the girls off from the rest of the team. With the android's attention on me, they would be free to hunt and apprehend the creator with ease. The clearing is silent within the walls of flame as the android simply stares at me. Taking advantage of this moment of calm, I move my hands to my back, creating 2 truth-seeking orbs and shifting them into their short staff forms. At the same time, I feel the natural energy I'd tasked a clone with absorbing merging with my reserves. With that, my preparations are set and I'm ready for the fight. Confirmed alpha priority, specimen acquisition. If it wouldn't have given me away, I'd have laughed. Genius inventors ate so predictable that it's quite laughable. This Evo character is no different. Having created a machine capable of duplicating any abilities, encountering one that it can't has piqued his interest. By ordering his creation to bring me in, he's limited the extent of damage it can do to me. Wonderful. With this little gamble having paid off, I blast forward, carefully keeping my speed close to what I displayed previously. The android accesses Flash's speed and closes the distance faster, but I can easily keep track of it in Sage mode. We clash with a rumble, the ground cratering around us, its arms trying to push through my block. Too bad it's utilizing Flash's speed. Superman's strength would have helped more. I disengage from the stalemate with an arm and try to jab it with a staff, but it swiftly retreats. No matter, I have it on the back foot now, an advantage I press continuously by attacking non-stop with the staves. It tries to keep up but fails, taking repeated hit to the chest and arms. Acing. Martian Manhunter. I slip through the android and am instantly reminded of my fights with Obito, that hacks-using bastard. Accessing. Black Canary. Dear Evo, should you ever need to create this thing again, I advise you to have it learn to keep its mouth shut. That split second of warning is enough for me to create a pad of natural energy around my ears before the blast of sound sends me flying. Twisting, I manage to land on my feet, but a second after, The android appears by my side and I only catch a snippet of its words. Man. That means either the Kryptonian or that Amazon, neither of which would be good if I get hit. So, I bring a hand up and reform one of the Gudadama into a shield that takes the brunt of the punch. Definitely out, bringing my second staff to bear even as it reforms into a Chikuto. The android is quick enough to retreat, but I bring the shield to bear, slamming into its chest plate before combining both weapons to create a scythe. I press the attack again, forcing the android to lose ground as I use the scythe's length and curved reach to harry it continuously. Accessing, oh hell no. I snarl as I pump in more chakra to my arms to speed up my attacks and keep it from attempting any further ability switches. I'm beginning to feel the strain though, as I've never been pushed so hard without tapping into Kurama's chakra. Unfortunately, I can't risk that, not in this fight. As I spin to bring the blade of my scythe to bear, I switch it out, opting for a lengthened glaive instead that bites deep into its raised arm block. Without wasting a second, I yank it back and reverse my spin, the weapon reforming yet again into a staff that slams into the android's chest plate and extends, pushing it back into the ground. I have no time to pause for a breath, though, as I blast forward to press my attack again, the staff splitting into equal halves for each hand. At the same time, I activate the rinnegan and call upon the powers of the shirato for an instant, scanning the android for any structural weaknesses. Nothing. I sigh as my eyes revert to normal. Not surprising considering that it went up against both Superman and Wonder Woman in slugfests earlier in the day. Guess I'm gonna have to be more creative. It's just beginning to rise when I crash into it, sending it back into the ground as I flip back and flick a whip around its neck and yank it into the air. Pulling the whip back to free it, I launch into a spinning attack, flicking the whips against its chest plate with every strike sending it further into the sky. Then, I snap both whips around its arms and yank it downward. At the same time, I jump, twisting to bring my feet to bear and channeling a tremendous amount of chakra to the soles of my feet. What I'm about to try is a messed up version of Ba-chan's strength technique. I'm really hoping I don't blow my legs apart. As it comes within range, I turn the whips into shackles with short iron bars that I'm holding. Then, I slam both feet into its chest an instant before releasing all that pent-up energy. The blowback sends me hurtling into the ground, every tenketsu from my waist down screaming furiously at me. I have no choice but to work through the pain as I stagger to my feet in time to watch the android plummet into the ground. Instead of rushing over though, I decide to stand my ground for now, watching for movement as I feel the chakra in my legs settle back and ease off the pain. It's better this way, than rushing in with all but numb legs. As expected, the android rises to its feet making me wonder exactly what the hell it's made of. However, two things catch my attention. First, it's armless. Like, both arms have been ripped away from the shoulders. I look down to see said body parts still intact in the shackles of the reformed Gudadama. Second, the annoying red light in its eyes that indicate its working status are gone. At that moment, I receive a transmission. Yo Maelstrom, we've got Evo and he's given the deactivation code, you there? It's Robin. Dear Cammy, have I been waiting for that call? Well, it's about damn time. Naruto's paws sitting on an outcropping on the mountainside. I feel the power of nature wash over me as I immerse myself into it. Once again, I feel the spirit of this world crying out to me, pleading for my assistance to wipe the blight that humanity has become away from her. I understand why. When I first accessed the power of nature in this world, I was pulled in so deep that, in a way, I became the world. And I could feel the death. Not of the humans themselves, plenty as that was. No, I felt how they were, oh so gradually, killing off the world itself. Destroying large swaths of forestry, introducing devastating chemicals into the world and so much more. If I hadn't been trained, I would have succumbed all too easily. Hell, even with the influence of the Sage Toad's teachings it had still been difficult. It's much easier now though, and I utilize the energy of nature to power the seal inscribed on my upper back. It's a small but very useful seal for communication between myself and my clones. Of course, they're less clones and more people of their own now. The seal that had created them had utilized my blood as a base genetic library for drawing up their body form while I used chakra to alter their actual appearances. A touch of nature-infused yang chakra had granted them awareness while the addition of yin chakra stabilized their mental faculties. Unlike Shikamaru and Shiho, the actual, disguised shadow clones, Kakashi, Michael, Chloe and Kennedy are essentially people of their own. Yo boss. You there, Kennedy? I feel myself grin. Looks like the mind link seal worked as we wanted it to. Yes, finally, we can speak in person. Yup. So, what do you have? Alright, here's the deal. The android you took out definitely had ties to the Cadmus board of directors. I let loose a string of colorful curses that would have Hinata's blush going nova. You're sure? I overheard Desmond talking about the inferences of the Amazo data. I thought I misheard, you know, maybe it was something related to Donna and her people, but then I was called in to analyze the data they had. It included footage of you and the team going up against the android as well as your final stand against it. Well bloody fuck. I'd hope we could stay hidden from them a bit longer. Sorry, but you're definitely on their radar now. Aggravating as it is and pissed as I am, there's nothing to be done about it. I'll have to be a hell of a lot more cautious now. Well, I believe I told you about Project Durzad? You mentioned it, yeah. What's the deal? From what I got, it's another Kryptonian. Not sure if it's a clone or not, but from what I got from Banerjee, it has some behavioral quirks. Nothing she can't work through apparently, but they're there. Well, they sure as hell have a fixation on having a Kryptonian under their thumb. It makes a lot of sense too. From what I've been able to garner, Superman and his female counterpart, Supergirl, have damned near limitless potential. Having a copy or 3 of them would be a boon. Alright. Keep your eyes and ears peeled for me, will y'all? No problem, boss. Keep your eyes open too. They could be up to anything. I'll try to get higher up the ladder. Watch your back, man. Got it. Later. I sigh as I feel the connection on his end cut off and I stop channeling energy into the seal, now letting it just flow around me. Annoying as the revelation about the android is, I'm not too surprised. Kagaya had considered it a possibility when we spoke of it, and though neither the Batman and Canary had hinted at such possible ties, I believe it might be on the table. I'm a tad pissed off, personally, that I have no way of knowing if the Twister android was connected as well. On the other hand, something about the seemingly unending Kryptonian projects has me baffled. If that android truly possessed Superman-level strength, then something is undoubtedly wrong with Connor. He has never shown anywhere near the level of strength the android did, neither has he shown any more abilities than his strength and durability. I know Superman's abilities are shared by Supergirl, so they are not exclusive to him alone. Perhaps it is as a result of Connor being younger? Maybe, except that throws in a whole new line of thought that's just as bothersome. Donna's clone is the same age as the original, so why exactly is Connor a younger version of Superman? Control issues with the adult clone? Or did they just alter his genetics to make him younger? Why would they do that? And just how damned advanced are these guys that they've got access to everything from genetic manipulation to high-level robotics? Just as I'm about to fall deeper into the spiral of questions, I feel a hand rest gently on my shoulder, followed by an almost tentative pull on my nature-enhanced chakra. Can't let that go on too much longer. Line break. Steadily making her way up the jagged mountainside, Raven, or Rachel as she was called when not in costume, wondered for the umpteenth time exactly why she wasn't down there with the rest of the team. Honestly, even Kagaya had agreed to take time off and go swimming, and Lord knows the white-haired princess could be a bit uptight at times. Yet here she was, off to her meditation spot. And for a damn good reason too. She countered the despairing thoughts. She paused to tuck her spellbook into the back of the waistband of her shorts before grabbing hold of a ledge and shimmying up over it. How many teenagers in the world can say they managed to escape their crazy demon dad and have to constantly shield themselves from his presence so he doesn't find them? Heck, how many teenagers in the world can even say they've got a true as fuck demon as their dad, crazy or otherwise? Far as she knew, the answer to that remained one: herself. And, whether that number changed or not, she not only had to shield herself as constantly as possible to escape his grasp, she now had to do it to ensure that her new friends, family, whatever they meant to her, and she wasn't exactly sure what that was, she had to ensure that she protected them, and that meant she couldn't ever let him find her. It was to these thoughts that her mind was fixed when she made it to her spot, a flat outcropping rock situated on the side of the island facing away from Happy Harbor that presented a beautiful panorama of the ocean. She spotted it about a week after they first came to the island, and she'd been using it ever since, the view it granted giving her a sense of peace she'd only ever felt back on Azarath. Today, though, seated at the very edge of the outcrop with his foot dangling down and the other folded under and both arms resting behind him as support pillars, was the blonde enigma known as Naruto. From the very first time she'd encountered him, she'd known he was powerful. His energy signature dwarfed most people she'd ever encountered. Heck, it dwarfed even some beings she'd encountered. His wasn't the largest, ranking somewhere in the middle of her top 10, but without a doubt he possessed the most powerful life force she'd ever encountered. He was like a wellspring of never-ending vitality. And it was so welcoming. Where some of those she knew had energies that felt cold, ruthless even, his felt like the fire in a cabin hearth, inviting one in for warmth after a cold day. Yet, for some reason, she didn't fully trust him. It may have had something to do with the fact that she knew something wasn't straight about his relationship with Kagaya. They weren't lying per se, but they weren't being truthful either. At least, not completely. And who am I to judge? She thought with a self-deprecating shrug, her mouth twisting into a sardonic smile. It's not like I'm totally honest with either, to say nothing of the team. With a slight shake of her head, she abandoned those thoughts and deliberated over whether to join him, leave and return later, or to find another spot. Meh, fuck it. It's more than big enough for both of us anyways, she decided as she walked forward, careful not DS. Plus, I found it first, so I get dibs, she added, giving into her childish side. Finders keepers. Honestly, she was even tempted to stick her tongue out. All of that lasted till she was about 10 feet from him. All too jarringly, she felt herself ensconced in a feeling of such utter calm that she had to stagger back a bit to regain her senses. "The hell?" she gasped as her breathing stabilized. "I've never felt that kind of calm before, not even on Azereth." After a few moments to regroup, she tentatively crept forward again. Just like the last time, she felt it, an ensconcing feeling of such utter calm. Now that she was prepared for it, she could feel herself relax, just slipping away as the calm took over. The first time, she'd been like the man in a darkened room suddenly seeing the light of a new day. It had scared her, but now that she had at least some understanding of it, it was beautiful. She, in an almost trance-like state, placed a hand on his shoulder to further increase her connection to that calm. And felt it shatter a few moments later as a hand lifted hers off, the calmness fading away so quickly that in seconds, it was like it had never been there. She looked down to see where her hand was still held lightly by that of the blonde, who was now staring at her with amusement in his eyes. Any longer and the petrification would have started. Wait. Petrification? What? Swallowing to lubricate her suddenly parched throat, she tried to speak again. What do you mean by that? Petrification? The amused look grew to become a grin. Oh, the usual. Turning an organic material into an insoluble salt. Only in this case, you'd be the organic and the insoluble salt would be stone. Not sure what type though. She was totally baffled. What? You may not have noticed it, especially since you're just coming off that high, but most of your hand's already numb. Ah. So that was why she couldn't feel her hand. Instead of talking, she closed her eyes and opted to deal with whatever euphoric high she'd just gotten on. When she opened them, the blonde's amused look was replaced by a more impressed one. Wow. You got over that pretty quick. For someone untrained, that is. Now, without that feeling dulling her senses, her eyes sharply narrowed in suspicion as she stared at him. What was that? Of course, the blonde chose that same moment to go off on a tangent, talking of how perhaps her training in magic had somehow helped in flushing the senjutsu days, whatever that meant. Judging by how he hadn't let go of her hand and how that amused look had crept back into his eyes, she just knew he was messing with her. She didn't like that. Not one bit. I said, she ground out between clenched teeth, feeling her magic pushing at her, eager to be let loose. What was that? Woo. Okay. I was just messing with you. He raised both hands in mock surrender, casually ignoring the waves of, well, not killing intent. No, but certainly an intent to do great bodily harm that rolled off her in waves. No need to get pissed. Rachel sucked in a deep breath before letting it out slowly. He was right. There was no need to get pissed. A desire, yes. Certainly a want, definitely not a need. Better now? He asked. Yeah, she breathed once more to clear away all traces of anger. Much better, thanks. He smiled and leaned back, relaxing on the rock as she sat beside him, close enough to be seen as friends but far enough for all comparisons to stop at friendship. So, what are you doing up on this lonely rock? I came here to. She'd paused in the middle of her sentence before glaring at him and punching him lightly in the shoulder. Bastard. I'll have you know that I knew both my parents and they were happily married before they birthed me. Okay. Asshole then. He arched an eyebrow. Any reason for the sudden slew of insults? Or is that the typical female mood swing I've come to expect from Kaguya? She scowled at him with no real heat behind it. You know exactly what you did. You did it when, Wally and I first met you. He seemed confused, but she knew she wasn't imagining the tiny smirk at the edge of his mouth. I forget. What did I do? You're trying to hide whatever it is you did by casually diverting the conversation to a different topic. Instead of looking bothered, he beamed. Impressive. I just knew you were an incredible Miss Badass. I thought you'd have forgotten that. Talk, she snapped. Okay, fine. Geez. The blonde raised his hands in mock surrender. What do you want to know? What did you do just now? And what did you mean by petrification? Back home, I learned how to immerse myself in the energy of nature. From there, I can choose to absorb a portion of the energy for a bunch of uses, but most times I just immerse myself in it to relax. And the petrification? Well, as relaxing as immersing myself in natural energy is, the energy itself isn't all that stable. One of the risks associated with doing that, according to the beings that taught me, is petrification. A chance for one to turn himself into stone if the energy is drawn in too quickly or if one's own energy is unstable. Understanding began to dawn on her. So when I touched you, you somehow began to draw in part of my nature-infused energy, leading to a destabilization of your own energy and the beginnings of the statue of Raven. Oh, there wasn't much more that she could say now that she realized just how close she was to being rid of all her worries, permanently. So, what are you doing up here this beautiful day? The blonde asked with a smile. Came to meditate, she replied. I got a few spells I want to get down. Speaking of, about those spells of yours, Naruto turned to her, now looking a bit more seriously. I've noticed that you seem to be able to create various effects with them. The dark-haired girl lifted a shoulder in a half shrug. Mind telling me a few more ways you can use them? You know, besides long-range assaults. The question had her stumped for a bit as she tried to figure out a way to answer him without giving too much away. In the end, she settled for telling half-truths. I've got a few spells for temporarily removing fatigue, some area of effect spells for medium-scale damage and others for manipulating landscapes. The blonde certainly looked impressed and had no trouble saying so. Well, as of right now, you're the most versatile on the team in terms of support abilities. What about you? She asked. Your abilities definitely outstrip mine in versatility. It was true, based on what both had seen of each other's abilities, but Naruto chose not to give an opinion on that, instead going for a different tact. As much as Kaguya and I are a part of this team, my primary priority is to her, something Donna and Calder already understand. As such, while we will be present often, we may not be there for some missions, and so the team must be prepared for such eventualities. So I'm your replacement. You're an integral part of this team, he stated firmly, and you can be rest assured that your place here will never be taken. Though her face remained impassive, Rachel felt a small part of herself relax at the blonde's assurance. She quickly shook it off to ask why he'd brought up the matter in the first place. Well, I had a few ideas on how to ensure that you could always work as efficiently as possible on missions. The offer intrigued her, so she decided to hear him out. Well, you would have to stay away from the center of the field, for the most part being a ranged support fighter, but imagine the shock on your opponent's face when they try to close in and you. Line break. So not only did you know, Bruce, but you actually set up the entire thing? The Batman, or Bruce Wayne since he was currently unhooded, remained impassive as he answered the angry demand of the hero before him. To his side sat Diana the Mysteria, looking just as calm as he in the face of storm. You need to understand, Clark, that the group we were be extremely difficult to pin down. The Amazonian princess explained. Their friend wound down. Frankly, I would not have been as accommodating of the formation of the group had Donna not been captured. Combined with the need for independence displayed by some of the team's current members, the need for us to have a contingency in place should anything happen to the League, it was an easy decision to make, the Dark Knight concluded. So, to expose some unknown group, you chose to throw together a ragtag team of untested teenagers. At this, both Batman and Diana's eyes narrowed. I'll have you know, Clark, that Robin has been working with me longer than Shazam has been a hero. Much longer. So has Kid Flash with his mentor. And while neither Aqualad nor Donna have been working as sidekicks to heroes, both have been extensively trained by their mentors, of which I am one. And don't even get me started on either Maelstrom or Shard. A new voice added. The three in the room turned to see Black Canary walk into the room and grab a seat to Batman's left. Those two could easily be on the League, and we'd be all the better for it. The blonde's words, however, set Superman off again, and the Man of Steel raged on until she silenced him with a single question. What do you have against my team? For a few moments, the watchtower was silent, bar the subdued thrum of mechanical power. Upon recovering from the sudden lack of momentum, the Kryptonian tried to speak before being cut off again by the Canary. Oh, I know they're not my team. Batman thought up the idea. Himself, Flash and Cyborg set up their base while Wonder Woman and Aquaman volunteered their protégés to the team. Really, I'm just a teacher in a school, but like any good teacher I consider them to be my students. So I'll ask again. What logical issue do you have against my students, as a whole or as individuals? And that, it seemed, was the problem. The Man of Steel had no logical argument against the team. Experience? The lack of it in some members was more than adequately made up for by the presence of others. Age? As stated by the Amazonian princess. Some of them had been much younger when they'd started off with their mentors. No, the only arguments he had were tied to him, one to his morality, the other to his being. And the second weighed much more. If you're worried about Maelstrom and Shard, then you are justified. Their motives are still relatively unknown, even though their actions still align with our cause. As such, your worry is noted. The Dark Knight finally spoke. However, if it is the presence of young Connor, Diana's eyes narrowed as she saw the slight jerk of a muscle in Superman's jaw, then you must figure out why his presence troubles you so much. Line break. You really have to break this habit, Connor. Naruto yawned as he watched the Kryptonian clone push off the wall he'd been thrown into. I've told you. Rage is good if you use it as a tool and nothing else. You let it slip out of your control, though, and you risk having it control you. Which is good if you like being planted face first into walls. I know I'll get you someday. Connor growled as he gently massaged his shoulder, the initial point of impact for the sixth and final wall-kissing moment of the day. And on that day I'll know I have achieved enough to proceed to level 2. The blonde grinned, drawing a twisted sense of pleasure from watching the younger teen's face go pale. Since the fight against the Amazo android, he had taken the task of improving his fellow teammates' physical stats, Kaguya included, upon himself, especially since Canary had been hurt during the initial fight. So, what was he like, your friend? Him? That's different. You usually ask about how I made it out. He turned away quickly but still radiated an aura of embarrassment. Yeah, well, maybe I just wanted to hear something new? Well, there's nothing wrong with that, is there? Naruto smiled and told Gaara's story of rage, pain and betrayal as the redhead had told him so many years back. They were just getting to Gaara's tenuous hold on sanity before Orochimaru had killed Rasa when Cyborg called for a briefing up top. Damn, I was really enjoying that, Connor huffed as they walked out of one of the training room. Meh, no worries, we'll talk more later, Naruto said as he stretched out, his joints giving off satisfying pops. I'm just wondering what we'll be up to later tonight. Well, whatever it is, I really hope it involves a target I can actually hit. The black-haired teen shrugged, prompting a smirk to appear on Naruto's face. Giving up? You wish? Just need a target I can practicalize your lessons on. Connor shot back with a snort. Learning outside the classroom and all that. The smirk never left the blonde's face though. Sure, keep telling yourself that, buddy, maybe someday. Minato? The sudden yell quieted the mountain's meeting hall as Naruto and Connor finally noted the presence of two strange faces amongst the familiar ones they were used to. Judging by the looks being passed around, Naruto guessed that it was the female of these strangers that had yelled his name, well, his father's name. Huh, she's very pretty. Little bit more lithe than Donna and her arms seem more muscular. Since she's with Canary's boyfriend, then I'd hazard a guess and say she's our new ranged fighter. Now then, why'd she call me? And then, it clicked. Artemis, you mind going easy on the yelling? Connor growled, not bothering to keep his voice down. Super hearing, remember? And since you definitely know her, mind explaining why she called you Minato? It's a story we'd be more than happy to hear, Naruto added with a glare as the two joined the rest of the team. Okay, so and Artemis looked pissed, Calder, Kagaya, Donna, Canary and her boyfriend look amused. Megan and Cyborg look confused and Raven looks uninterested as usual. Batman seems pissed too, but that's almost a default setting. Alright then. The blonde ran a hand through his hair as he looked at the assembled group, then let loose a soft string of curses in his native language. Anytime now. Artemis snarled at him. No, he should take his time. I'm enjoying this. Green Arrow smirked as he watched one blonde wilt under the glares of the other. Of course, he could tell that it was mere acting on the young man's part. Good acting, true, but acting all the same. Still, watching Artemis fly off the handle at someone else was refreshing. Alright. Deciding he dragged it out long enough, Naruto finally spoke up. First off, I am Uzumaki Namikaze Naruto. Dad was Namikaze, Mom was Uzumaki. However, cause most people think I look a lot like my dad, I tend to use his name in some situations. Like when I met Artemis, only 2 weeks into being on this world. Old habits forced me into introducing myself under an alias, hence Minato. And you didn't think of telling us? Questioned only to receive a bored eye roll. Sure, why don't you tell me who you meet at 5:20 in the morning on a jog round the block? Not to mention that I hadn't even met you guys back then. He's right. Raven shrugged, plus, it seemed like a simple mistake. Indeed. Batman decided. Now, to why we're here. Nah. A very irate blonde archer intercepted. He can't just get to walk like that, he lied. Well, while you were right, he simply protected himself. Canary put in with a shrug. Telling a random stranger your identity the instant you meet, particularly on a relatively lonely path in the odd hours of the morning, isn't quite advisable. Green Arrow fully agreed. Especially not when your personal and covert identities happen to align. Consider that a lesson. Now, if there are no further interruptions. The Dark Knight trailed off, less out of acceptance and more likely daring there to be any such interruptions before continuing. This is Artemis, she's to be your new teammate. Yay! Megan squealed and bounced on her toes for a few seconds before herself. Her cheeks burned bright red as she realized that most in the room were staring at her. Sorry. I like big families, she mumbled. Whatever else was to be shared was cut off as Cyborg raised a hand to his ear and motioned for silence with the other. Guys. Red Arrow's requesting emergency access to the base. I told him where we would be this evening and how to get here, Green Arrow stated, answering the unasked question on multiple minds. Granted, Batman ordered. Recognized, E01 Red Arrow. As soon as the Zeta Tube light show died down, the group saw the Emerald Archer's protege walk down the dais pulling off the glasses he had on. Hey everyone. Speedy, yelled by way of greeting. Dude, where have you been? Don't see anyone else wondering where they know each other from. Naruto groused quietly. Even had the whole yelling thing. Except neither seems particularly shocked about seeing the other. Donna murmured back with a grin. Much as I'd love to chat, there's serious business afoot. The newcomer stated as he slipped a data stick into their console. Dr. Serling Roquette. Pretty. Works for Star Labs under the robotics division. Wonder what's abducted 2 weeks ago, by the League of Shadows. That brought Naruto's musings to a grinding halt. What the hell do the Shadows want with? Stupid question. Why would they want a professor of advanced robotics? By the time Red Arrow finished explaining, the blonde had all but stopped breathing. If what Kakashi said he saw in just one of the labs holds true for all, then having the Shadows acquire that intel is terrifying. If they are in partnership with Cadmus, though, fuck. The only thing that managed to pierce the dense fog of plans and contingencies his brain was whipping up was the Wallman's shining moment. Line, break, any idea what's gotten over Uzumaki? Cyborg murmured to the two others with him as the team rushed to change and the guests left. Unfortunately not. Canary replied as she ran over the data provided by her boyfriend's protege. He seemed playful as usual till this information dropped. Then he seemed to go rigid. I couldn't read him after that, he just went blank. I'm not surprised. Apart from some leaguers, he'd have the greatest chance of understanding just how dangerous the shadows could be with info they gain from any research lab. Batman raised his point. He's likely running through possibilities at the moment, terrifying ones. What if they decide not to go after research but after military secrets, or national secrets like the nuclear codes? Canary was about to ask if that was possible before it clicked in her head. Grabbing the mic, she yelled for the team to head down. Line, break. The interior of the bioship was quiet but for the gentle thrumming of the chassis. In the cockpit sat most of the team, strapped in as they were transported across to their target location. Calder, seated behind most of his present teammates and beside the ship's pilot, tried to calm his frayed nerves by running through the plan again and hoping he hadn't missed anything. 32 seconds later, he realized the futility of his actions. As long as his mind was locked on Maelstrom's strange behavior without getting any answers, there would be no rest for him. Burdens of a leader. He sighed as he undid his safety harness and stood up. Leaning over to McGann's ear, he engaged in a quiet conversation. How long till we get there? 5 minutes, give or take a few seconds. Alright then, I'll be at the cargo bay. Checking on the others, the young Atlantean nodded. Maelstrom more than others, honestly. Okay. With that done, he walked out of the cockpit, the ship's walls irising open and shut as he walked through the sections. The simplicity of its design, to him, marked the high level of its elegance. 2 compartments separated by a single wall. The pilot and passengers having the freedom of either walking straight into the cockpit or going through the cargo bay first. The bay typically, much like the cockpit's default setting, was an empty space since the ship would create storage compartments as needed. Right now, though, it had 2 perfectly round portals open in its walls, providing external views for those that stood at them. To the right stood Artemis, silent, possibly contemplating something of importance to herself, while to the left stood Maelstrom and Shard, both communicating in such quiet tones that only the slightest movements of their lips indicated that they were even talking. His targets in sight, Calder walked up to them, pausing about 6 feet from them and coughing gently to maintain all appearances of manners. He'd come to know these two quite well over the past few weeks, and he knew that both had acutely developed senses, Naruto more so than Kaguya, and could rarely ever be snuck up on. The few times it had happened, in the cave, he knew the blonde had only let McGann and Wally have their fun. Calder, the blonde, now dark-haired, as was his habit and costume, off-worlder nodded curtly. Is something wrong? Forgive me the intrusion, Maelstrom, princess, but I observed that ever since the briefing of the mission, you have been very terse, particularly you, Maelstrom. Is something wrong? Instead of replying instantly, Maelstrom let out a long breath and then went silent. When the silence felt almost stifling, the Atlantean began to apologize for his intrusion before being cut off by a gesture. Forgive us, Calder, we didn't mean to be rude. As we told you in Dana, Naruto and I are used to working alone and as such keeping our own counsel. Naruto took over at that point. As regards this mission, though, I've just been a bit, well, terrified of the ramifications the doctor's swarm could bring. I think I understand. Again he was cut off, though by Naruto this time. Not really. Calder, during the Santa Prisca op, you discovered that Sportsmaster, a known member of the League of Shadows, was trying to get away with the finalized Cobra serum. Now we learn that the Shadows intend to utilize this fog to obtain information. Imagine if they were to obtain information like the launch sequences to the nuclear armaments of this country. Upon seeing the horrifying possibility dawn on the younger man, Naruto placed a hand on Calder's shoulder and said, softly, now imagine them having information on how to create new, more deadly bioweapons. Start from those two and work outward. Factor in the fact that we have no idea where the fog is or its target. Then you'll understand just why I seem so terse. For a few moments silence reigned and the Uzumaki observed that Artemis had adjusted her stance to listen in a bit better. He shrugged mentally, knowing that nothing but the truth, a slightly diluted version of it at least, had been said. Just as Calder was to attempt speaking again, McGann's voice called over the comms to tell them that they had only a minute till they landed. I'll let everyone else know what you just told me, Calder stated. However, I need both of you for something slightly different. We're listening. As soon as we identify a leader among the doctor's reacquisition squad, I want both of you to take them down hard and fast. Get the location of the fog from them as fast as you can. I'll free up McGann as soon as I can so she can help. You're catching on quick, Calder, however you aren't considering something. By the time the assassins get here, the Shadows could easily have raided a few facilities. In fact, I'd do that if I were in charge of this kind of a job. Maelstrom shook his head. No, even with your plan, we still need to be preemptive. Have the doctor begin tracking the fog the instant we meet her. Once she has a location we can then make our move. The Atlantean nodded. Understood. Line, break. Hidden within the trees outside the school's computer lab, Naruto was forced to stifle a sigh. What was it with kids and stupid arguments, honestly? Even after Calder had explained just how D could be with the fog, and knowing that the young Dr. Roquette was hooked into the mental link with them, Kid Flash just had to antagonize Artemis, who just wouldn't back down. Back home, such behavior would have resulted in the squad leader taking the offenders home physically broken before Tsunade stepped in, docking their income for half a year while they served as janitors for the academy. And that was if the mission succeeded. Abruptly, the mental chatter faded to a gentle hum and he felt a slight nudge of the mental link. Maelstrom, are you okay? You've been really quiet? McGann, we need to be quiet so the doctor can work. Oh, I sectioned off this line so I could talk to you without adding to the chatter. Alright. I've been quiet because missions like these require silence and constant vigilance so we don't miss anything. Oh, you really have a lot of experience at stuff like these. Joys of the job, I suppose. Well, I just wanted to be sure you're okay. And with that, the voices gradually returned, just in time for him to hear the doctor go off on a frustrated rant as to how distracting teen speak, echoing in her head, was before mouthing about her brilliant science. Doctor, your science is currently in the hands of a criminal organization. To them, it is a weapon. He stated curtly, the cold, hard fact shutting the woman up as firmly as his dispassionate voice had. Now, can you track it? No harm will come to you. I promise. Aqualad added, his words mollifying and cajoling her to speak. I can. Though nothing more was said, he felt the Atlantean's tension a few seconds later. Everyone be ready, we're on the grid. Found it, it's somewhere in Philadelphia. Miss Martian. Reconfigure the ship for non-Martian piloting. Superboy, Robin, head out. You'll likely be behind the attack, but see if you can capture their on-site manager. If I may, Aqualad, I'd suggest that we move the doctor onto the ship and we all stay here. It was a testament to how strange the suggestion was that no one said, or thought, anything. Explain. If we send a unit out, we'll be stuck chasing the fog. If, however, we have Robin and the doctor. I have a name, on the ship, using its more powerful onboard systems to work, then we may be able to expand our options. Expand our options? How? Robin asked, his curiosity piqued. With you and the doctor working together, we have at least two options. Regain control over the fog via hacking into its processors or creating a virus to destroy it completely. You want to what? Destroy your fog? He stated dispassionately, and frankly, I believe that's our best choice. We need to work on the theoretical belief that they're already working on cloning your project. You may think the important things are in your head, but a team of professionals will usually crack an already created work faster than you'd expect. Heck, even if it isn't destroyed, the shadows retaining the blueprints is extremely dangerous because they'd have more time to recreate and then advance your work. Destroying it allows us to cut them off at the knees and then you can recreate it with much better security measures. I have to admit, that does sound more logical than simply chasing them, Artemis said. I don't recall you being allowed to talk, newbie, Kid Flash snapped. Enough, Aqualad snarled. That is impolite, kid. Artemis is right. Maelstrom, we'll go with your plan. Robin, grab a laptop for Dr. Roquette and hook it up to the ship's onboard processors. Raven, Superboy, head out with them for protection. As soon as you're in, take the ship 1,000 feet up. That would be the safest route to take. Donna agreed. Alright then. We already heard the plan, so let's move. The shadows will be here any moment. Too late. They're already here. Shard stated, and Naruto could have sworn he heard a note of grudging respect in her mental voice. About 200 feet out. 2 male, 1 female. It seems like the girl wears the pants in this relationship. Alright then. Miss Martian, camouflage the bioship and get it to the roof. Then return here and impersonate the doctor. Robin, get your team to the roof and proceed as planned. Maelstrom, Artemis, take the leader. She may hold valuable information. Shard, continue as you were. They may have backup. The rest of us are to apprehend the other two. Maelstrom, the girl's headed toward you. At her current heading, she'll pass 10 feet to your left in about 30 seconds. Artemis, that's about 40 feet northwest of the gate. Heading out. On it. Artemis stated. With the new directives received, the shinobi moved stealthily across the distance, mentally blocking out the sounds of all but Aqualad, Artemis and Shard's voices. Unlike the few opponents he'd had to go against in this world, this was someone who had apparently trained in the arts of stealth and assassination. He doubted she'd be anywhere close to his level, but, considering the stakes tonight, he decided to take no chances. Less than 15 seconds after he'd arrived at the specified location, he saw his target melt out of the shadows. She had a lithe body, more so than Donna or Canary, that had him believe that she was more of a hit-and-run fighter than an up-close combatant. Her face was concealed by a mask of some sort with long black hair flowing out the back, and strapped to the sides of her green-clad waist were a pair of sai. With only the slightest of sounds that could easily have been taken for the wind blowing through the leaves, Maelstrom drew 2 senbon and flicked them at the girl, one hiding in the shadow of the other. As he'd expected, the girl was capable enough to draw her set and knock the leading senbon out of the air. Unfortunately for her, very few could ever master the art of shadow weapon concealment like he had, and so even fewer expected it. The second senbon hit home, embedding itself into her left upper arm. She yanked it out swiftly, but it was of no use. He'd never have the aim of Haku or Tenten, but, thanks to Anko and her poisons, he likely wouldn't need to. She dropped to the ground 6 seconds after the senbon struck, and just in time for Artemis to run into the clearing, arrow already drawn and half knocked. After watching for a few more seconds, the shinobi decided that the blonde archer's reaction to the assassin's person could be questioned later. They were on a mission. A short shunshin teleported him to her side, prompting her to jump a foot back and pull the arrow back to full draw. Impressive. You moved from half alert to fully prepared in less than 2 seconds. And your arrows pointed right at my head. He appraised as he bent to pull the mask off the girl's head. She was a pretty thing, with her angular features and slanted eyes. Too bad she'd gotten in with the shadows. "Am I Maelstrom?" The archer caught herself before gasping out his name. "You scared me." "Then you shouldn't be out on missions," he replied a bit harshly as he scooped the drugged girl into his arms and stood up. Then, he sighed. "That was unnecessarily harsh. I'm sorry. What I meant was that you were, and still are, on a mission. You can never, under any circumstances, let your guard down. You just saw an assassin slump and your first reaction was to close the distance. What if she was faking in an attempt to kill you? You think you'd have been able to react fast enough to stop her?" "Well, yeah," she shot back. "A few seconds later, maybe, then, probably not. Hence my first reaction to your comment on me scaring you," he stated. "On missions, your aim must be on achieving the desired end result. As such, your focus must be on everything that can derail you from that. And since I have no idea where the derailment can come from, I have to keep my guard up constantly," Artemis finished. "Exactly." Maelstrom nodded before switching to the mental link the team shared. "Calder, we're done here." "Good. I was just about to call in." The Atlantean replied almost instantly. Donna and Kid Flash took out the large attachment while Megan and I subdued the second one. "So where to now?" "Question her where you feel comfortable at. Being the leader, she may be more knowledgeable than the 2 I have here. She should at least have an idea who sent her and where they are." "Alright then. I'll have Artemis join Shard on the roof for added surveillance." "Understood." With that clear, he pushed back the mental link and turned to Artemis only to see the archer looking a bit put off. "Artemis?" "Geez, now he notices my presence," she replied with an eye roll. "You realize that the mental link works for the group? I heard you, Maelstrom. We all heard you try to blow me off." His brow furrowed in confusion as he laid the assassin on the lawn. "Why do you think I tried to blow you off?" "Really, I'll send Artemis to the roof for added surveillance. Shard's more than capable of doing that on her own. And you know that. So it's very possible that you're just blowing me off because you're pissed like the wallman at not getting another guy to join your band." Much to her ire, the shinobi didn't respond. Instead, he seemed to freeze for a few seconds before looking up at her. "Cleared your chest yet?" "You weren't even listening to me." "Oh, I was. Just wanted to know if you were done with your little anger-fueled rant. Are you?" She glared daggers at him but remained silent. "Take that as a yes then." He muttered, more to himself than to her. "Well, Artemis, I'd like to be straight with you. I do not despise your presence as Kid Flash does. As regards blowing you off, I simply felt it would be safer to have an extra pair of eyes on the roof. The decision to stay or leave is yours." He shrugged as he turned to the prone girl before him. Quick as a flash, he cast a false surroundings illusion on the insensate girl, then prepared to administer the antidote of the sleeping drug he'd hit her with. "I'll need you to be absolutely quiet now," he said to the archer before slipping the antidote-coated senbon into the assassin. Nothing happened for the first few seconds. Then, abruptly, the girl's eyes snapped open. However, the eyes seemed unfocused. "Report," Maelstrom commanded. "I failed, master," the assassin replied concisely. The blonde put in a false growl before asking her how. Her illusion-addled mind swiftly worked to provide a cover story. "Did they follow you?" Maelstrom asked. At the same time, he called on the team leader. "Calder, be sure to note down the next couple of words." "No, master." "How did you get here?" The assassin's brow furrowed in confusion. "Master? I want to know your route to ensure that you were not followed, girl," he replied snappishly. "Forgive me, master," the girl replied humbly before rattling off a series of directions. "Maelstrom, I have the directions." "What now?" "Robin should be able to work out the location by reversing the directions," Kid Flash said. "Alright then. Maelstrom, secure your prisoner and leave her outside the gates. I'll alert local security on the presence of these criminal elements." "Got it," he replied. He then pulled out a roll of ninja wire and set to work. "How did you do that?" "Do what?" He asked without taking his eyes off his work. Get her to reveal information like that? Artemis shot back with an exasperated cry. I know the shadows, they're trained extensively to resist non-consenting information extraction methods. Once again, the shinobi took notice of her slip-up but said nothing of it. As you said, they are trained to resist non-consenting information extraction methods. The drug I slipped into her system creates an illusion that I can mold to my will. By taking her memories and crafting an illusion that puts me in a position of power that she actively recognizes, her mind is deceived into releasing the information with her consent. He answered, yet again muddling truth with lies to hide the full extent of his abilities. Artemis, though she'd seen him work, still seemed a bit skeptical. So, what, you could ask her for anything and she'd tell you? No, he grunted as he secured the loose ends of the wire with an intricate series of knots that would drive the regular person near insane to undo. No being in the illusion as a figure of authority, I could only ask questions that lay within my area of influence or that her mind is familiar with whatever she sees me as asking. Take my question of her root. Though it was within an area of influence I could ask, it likely struck her as a strange question, hence her hesitation. With the girl secured, he carried her and headed toward the gates. Sounds impressive. It is not without its flaws, he replied. Now please join Shard on the roof. We need to know our next move and to that we must speak to those in the ship. I will join you quickly. The blonde archer seemed ready to argue as was her nature before sighing, nodding and reversing her direction. Line, break, so Robin, doctor, any good news? Calder asked as he boarded the bioship with the rest of the team. Aqualad, great. I was just about to call in. Robin exclaimed as he swung away from his console. Good news is that we've hacked our way back into the fog's systems. It's not perfect but we can cause some chaos to slow them down. The virus is about 63% done. Roquette added as she typed away at the laptop in front of her. Once ready, we can upload it and it will trigger the implosion command I embedded into the nanobots, destroying the fog. What about the information they've already obtained? Donna asked. Is there any way to destroy it? That's the problem, Robin said and turned back to his console. Whatever network they've got, I can't get in. I've tried everything, from worms to Trojans. Heck, I've tried methods I created myself for hacking. Their firewall is good. We can only get the fog because they haven't integrated its systems into their network. Have you tried slipping through the backdoor link connecting them to the fog? Kid Flash asked. First thing I tried. Nada. In that case, we'll work with what we've got. Aqualad stated. Do you have a location for the fog? They're en route to the next target. Wayne Tech. Robin answered. We can be there a few minutes after them if we head out now. We will. Cyborg was able to locate where the fog transmitted its acquired data to. It matches the location we were given. As such, Maelstrom, I need you to work with Shard, Artemis, Kid Flash and Wonder Girl. Aqualad ordered. Your primary objective is to shut down their data stores by any means possible. Secondary objective is to take down as many shadows as possible without losing any teammates. Understood. How do we get there? I've cross-checked the location, it's along the way to where we need to be. We can drop you off. Robin paused as he pulled up a map of Bloodhaven and zoomed in to a point. Here, top of this apartment complex, 200 meters out. It will do. Maelstrom nodded. We'll head back to that spot and await extraction when we're done. Miss Martian, head over to the drop zone. Well, this is odd. Shard frowned as she scanned the target location, prompting the others to gather in close. Kid Flash, what do you see when you look at the complex? The speedster seemed confused. What do you mean? What do you think she means, genius? Open your damned eyes and give the complex a once-over, Artemis snapped at him. I don't recall asking for your thoughts, Blondie. And I don't recall Shard asking for either of your immaturity. Maelstrom barked, forcing the two to a terse standoff. Now, Kid Flash, switch to infrared and count off how many bodies you see in there. The brunette speedster, upon hearing his squad leader's order, huffed and broke of the glarefest he'd been locked into with the blonde archer and activated his goggles' infrared filter. The building seemed to match what we're seeing, 3 rectangular warehouses arranged in a U-shape, 3 trucks in the open space. He reported. I'm counting 64 heat signatures that match typical human ranges shared between the buildings equally along with one that could be a large computer databank at work. It matches most of what I've seen, Shard stated. However, I see a large, oddly shaped structure sitting smack dab in the center of the large space. Any ideas what it could be? No idea. Kid Flash replied. Maybe you're seeing something that isn't there. She is. Maelstrom agreed, and that's the problem. Silence reigned for the next couple of seconds before Maelstrom spoke again. Alright. Our priority here is their network databank. Considering who we'll be going up against, we'll need to split up into 3 groups. One to infiltrate the base and deactivate the databank and the other to act as a very loud and flashy cover for the first group. Thus drawing the bulk of their attention away from our primary objective. Donna mused. It could work. I take it I'm with Kid Flash. The shinobi nodded. You are. Artemis and I will head out first and then you'll make your move 10 seconds after I give the signal. What'll the signal be though? Dawn amused. Since they'll have to maintain radio silence in there, the signal could simply be a series of static in an agreed pattern. Kid Flash suggested. Maybe a pattern of 5? Maelstrom nodded at the idea. Simple but effective. If comms get jammed, though, I'll send Shard a distress signal of our own. I'll be the lookout. Shard replied. Should anything come up, I'll let you know. Maelstrom nodded and pulled out a flash drive. Robin and Cyborg designed this drive. It contains a virus that will chew through whatever data is stored on their systems before triggering a total system meltdown. It's a simple, plug-and-play device, so Artemis, you'll be in charge of getting this plugged into the databank while I take point and weather any attacks we face. Artemis, however, seemed to take this as a slight to her own capabilities and crossed her arms across her chest with a glare leveled at him. I'm more than capable of weathering any attacks I face. Do you have to be so goddamn difficult? Kid Flash snapped before being silenced by Donna's hand on his shoulder. Judging by what I've seen of you and by Canary's comments, you certainly are a capable fighter. The team's leader spoke calmly. However, not to sound conceited or anything, I am a more capable fighter. I could give you examples, but instead I'll let you see me work so you can decide yourself. He took a few steps away from the edge of the building as he spoke. Until the end of this mission, however, you will follow my lead. And, having said his piece, he streaked forward, snaking an arm around the defiant blonde's waist an instant before he leapt off the edge of the building. After watching the shinobi clear the distance to land lightly on the fence closest to the building on the right, Donna turned to her companions, a hint of a smile on her features. I find myself believing that she will be impressed. Kid Flash scoffed. That stubborn thing? Not likely. $5 say I'm right. The Amazonian grinned challengingly. You're on Naruto's pod the instant my feet leave the edge of the building. I summon the wind to encase us in a sphere that spins fast enough to bend light rays around us, effectively rendering us invisible. By this time, we've reached the peak of the jump's arc and are now rapidly descending toward the warehouse on the right. A little nudging with chakra and the winds carry us closer to the fence and I latch onto it. A swift check shows that none of the topmost windows are shut, so, with a quick rebound off the wall, I dive through the nearest and cling onto a rafter. Climb on. I whisper to Artemis, who quickly shimmies up. When I'm sure that she's stable, I pull myself up as well, letting the swirling winds around us go. On an unrelated side note, I'm actually impressed. She'd just been an unwilling passenger on what had to be an odd flight and not once did she even squeak. Where are we? Though her voice doesn't even waver, the question explains why she was so calm. Her eyes had been closed the entire trip. About halfway down the building to the right. I reply as I watch the patrolling shadows on the lower levels of the building. We need to head down and make our way to the central warehouse. Well then call in the distraction. I shake my head as I map out a mental route of our movement. We need to be close enough to the central building, maybe even the data banks for the cover to be effective. They aren't stupid. The instant the distraction begins, they'll send reinforcements to guard the banks. We need to be ahead of those. She purses her lips and says nothing more. I use the silence to crunch numbers and smooth out our travel plan. Alright, I'll need you to follow my lead and trust whatever I do. What, grabbing me along for the ride's not good enough? She whispers, the question carrying quite a bite despite its seemingly playful tone. Too bad we haven't got a time to spare. I think I've got one or two, jiraiya, responses that would really get under her skin. Ah well. Just let me deal with the guard below us before you land, okay? With that, I drop off the girder and, moments later, bring down a patrolling shadow with my weight. Then, I push off the poor idiot I landed on and send him deeper into unconsciousness with a few jabs at specific locations. A few more and his muscles are locked stiffly. He'll be like that for the next hour or so, by which time we should be done here. A subtle glance up shows that Artemis is about to make the trip down, so I swiftly activate the rinnegan and scan through the guy's mind for relevant information about this place with the Nintendo. He's a grunt, but he'll do. So, what's next, oh great leader? Artemis asks as she lands beside me. Now, we roleplay. I reply as I stand. A quick transformation and I look exactly like the guy the first just took down. I'll be the shadow and he'll be the hostage. The scowl on her face shows what she thinks of my plan. Artemis was pissed. The thought that the cute-looking guy she'd met a few weeks ago had casually led her on with a fake name was one reason. The fact that he was on a team she was unwillingly being shipped off to by Canary and Arrow was another. Pile on the perception that most of the male teammates considered her inferior to the prime sidekick choice of Speedy, and she was seriously considering dropping out of the whole hero gig. It was only the thought of bringing her sister home to their mother that spurred her on. Although even that doesn't feel like enough motivation right now, she thought with a pronounced scowl as she was jostled forward under the blank glares of the patrolling shadows. Damned bastards enjoying this way too much. The man behind her, matching the appearance of a shadow, was one of her new teammates, Naruto, or as she'd known him, Namikaze Minato. He'd asked her to watch him work mere seconds before forcing her into a situation where she'd been all but forced to watch him work. So far, she was jolted out of her thoughts as he grabbed her hand, forcing her to back up into his chest. Play along. The murmur was so quiet and well-timed that for a fleeting second, she wondered if it had been her imagination. A tiny nod, concealed by her seemingly defiant movement away from him, was her response as she used the movement to take in a quick glance at her environment. They stood before a cordoned-off section of the central warehouse. Directly in front of them stood three figures. A formal-looking couple, a blonde and a brunette, facing the transparent wall, and a stocky man with a grizzled appearance that faced them with impassive eyes set into a granite face. Her captor spoke to the grizzled man. "Master, I found her attempting to sneak into the facility." The master said nothing at first, simply staring into her eyes until he found whatever it was that he sought, Green Arrow's latest sidekick. "I'm no one's sidekick," she cut in venomously. Perhaps a bit too much, she thought, but it played along her role so she didn't bother herself too much about it. It wasn't like anyone cared anyway. "Where are weapons?" "They are with my leader of my patrol," the disguised maelstrom replied, sounding so submissive that, for a split second, even she was convinced. "Forgive me if I have committed an offense, Master, but I deemed it necessary to minimize the risk of her escape." Upon hearing this, the blonde archer snarled angrily, again playing her part. The master, after a few moments of thought, turned to the silent couple and bowed deeply. "Lady Markov. Mr. Kennedy. I believe we are about to be attacked. I request your assistance to protect the databanks while I prepare our defenses." Behind her, Artemis felt Maelstrom tense for the briefest of moments upon hearing the names before relaxing again. Did the names mean something to him? "We will do as you requested," the female replied in a bland tone that gave away nothing but her gender. "Leave your man with us," the brunette stated in a carefully controlled tone, "and send in reinforcements." "As you have commanded." The master bowed again before leaving via a concealed side exit. The instant he was gone, Artemis activated the tiny comms device Maelstrom had carefully strapped to her knuckle by rubbing her thumb over it. The static it generated was the signal, silence. "How did you manage to catch her?" the woman, Lady Markov, asked without turning to glance at them. "She had just taken out my partner when I walked up to her," was the smooth reply as a tremor rocked the facility. "Probably the black-clad Amazon making her entrance. She was occupied trying to tie him up and I used her distraction to my advantage." "And the patrol leader simply let you bring her in, Kennedy, this time?" "He acted as he saw fit." Silence again, save for a few muffled grunts and groans. "You deserve a commendation," Kennedy said as he turned, revealing a rugged face with deep-set blue eyes. He was unsmiling, but Artemis took that to be his default until further notice face. "Your swift decision-making will be rewarded to foster more of such." Artemis noticed something as the man spoke. The disguised Maelstrom seemed to be getting more relaxed as the brunette man spoke on. Then, quite suddenly, her body jerked as Maelstrom swiftly pulled her to the side. A quick glance at the spot she'd just been forced to vacate revealed a brand new feature, a spike whose tip occupied the same spot her head had just left. "Your senses are enviable, Lady Markov," the master stated, inclining his head as he walked out of the side exit, followed by a dozen shadows. "To have sensed their entry from here. Stick to the plan," Maelstrom warned quietly as his disguise seemingly bled off him and he handed her weapons over. Then, in a louder tone, he spoke to the couple. "He's right. Those senses are admirable. May I at least know how we were found?" "Easily," Markov replied shortly. "Surrender and your deaths will be swift. Maybe some other time." He smiled before blurring away, heading toward the master. At the same instant, the older man and Kennedy dove forward, Kennedy in the lead. Artemis, on the other hand, was busy fending off the other shadows, relying solely on hand-to-hand combat as they never gave her an inch of space. The fight seemed balanced, with neither side gaining an advantage over the other until Markov struck. Naruto's paw. The instant I'd heard the old man call that girl, Lady Markov, I'd known we were fucked. Kennedy had told me that the blonde had incredible talent at manipulating the earth and was even capable of sensing and differentiating people based on their walking patterns. He still hasn't been able to figure out her range, but that didn't matter, not when we were standing right in front of her. As such, it was no surprise that she tried to kill Artemis and I. Now, in the midst of a fight with the old man and Kennedy, I'm wondering why she hasn't struck out again. On an unrelated side note, I've got to find a way to thank Kennedy after this. The crazy guy's been intentionally fighting out of sync with the old man to disrupt the flow of the fight in my favor. When she finally strikes, the only warning I have is a slight rumble in the ground. I react instantly and create a bubble of wind chakra beneath my feet and releasing it a split second later, the miniature explosion sending me straight up just before 4 spikes shoot out of the ground to impale the spot I would have been had I stayed behind. With the slight reprieve I have, I turn to see Artemis constantly being placed on the defensive by her opponents. Time's wasting, though. The fact that Markov knew we were coming and stood casually, Watching the data storage systems in the cordoned off section makes me believe that they've made provision for the data to be transferred from here to another location. That absolutely needs to be stopped. With the decision made, I appear by Artemis' side with a shunshin and grab an incoming fist. With a slight twist, I hurl the shadow back at another of his group before jumping forward and taking another out with a palm strike that likely shattered his jaw. Get going, I say as I unseal a pair of chakra conducting short staves. I'll deal with these guys. I streak forward without waiting for her response, and I'm able to knock out 2 more shadows with strikes to their temples before they're able to react. As I'm about to move to my next targets, I hear 4 twangs and, almost instantly, 4 shadows drop to the ground from the blunted arrows striking their foreheads dead center. TCH. Stubborn girl. Now I'm left with 4 generic shadows, their master, a powerful earth manipulator, and Kennedy. I allow the tiniest smirk to cross my face. Even with me holding back to avoid my skill set getting into the hands of the enemy, this will be way too much fun. The moment Artemis activated the comms device cum signal beacon, Donna leapt right into the air in a feat similar to Maelstrom's. Then, with a bit of aid from her flight ability, she angled herself in the direction Shard had said the strange object was located, crossing her forearms in front of her to bear the brunt of whatever impact she would be receiving, and rocketed toward it. She had no idea exactly what she was going to hit or even when she would hit it, she just trusted the white-haired offworlder's word. Those words were verified as she felt the hairs on her arms stiffen an instant before she tore through whatever object Shard had seen. The instant she felt no resistance against her arms, she spun in air to smash into the ground beside one of the trucks around the now destroyed object, setting loose a powerful tremor that reverberated through the compound. Something rubbed her the wrong way about this though. Maelstrom had spent the past few days teaching them to read their environments and draw likely conclusions, and this fell right into the first lesson. There was no sign of alertness. No rush to find out the cause of the obvious disturbance of the statusectomy. Or at least, expecting, her train of thought was cut off as Shard barked a harsh command at her over the comms. Sparing not even a second, she leapt up again, flying about 15 meters straight up before daring to glance down again. The sight before her confirmed her suspicions as she watched the lumbering blue creature, Blockbuster, smash its way out of the truck while hordes of shadows poured out of the buildings. Looks like the ruse worked. Kid Flash's smirk easily carried over the comms. I'll take the foot soldiers, you keep Blockbuster busy. Understood. 2 things happened in the next second. First, a yellow blur sped into the facility, disarming the shadows as it went by. The second was more attention-grabbing as Donna dropped down like a stone to ram a ground-shaking punch into Blockbuster's noggin. Landing a few feet away from the blue creature, Donna watched as it staggered back 1 step before roaring in rage and charging at her. Kid Flash, on the other hand, had just wrapped up with the rabble, having used single, high-velocity taps to the base of the skull to knock them out. Now, his eyes were locked solely on the blue monster as it traded punches with Donna while he waited for a chance to get into the fight. "It's a plug-and-play device," he said. "Just plug it in and watch it go to work." Artemis hissed as she snuck around the storage room, searching for a single USB port. Did he consider the Shadow's paranoia? Nope. Definitely not. Moron. It was honestly quite frustrating. The League of Shadows' paranoia had made them build the storage facility without any access ports save for those at the central console, the very same console Green Arrow's newest protege was having difficulty finding. Follow my lead and decide for yourself. TCH, arrogant ass, only deep-seated instinct and hard-earned reflexes had her whipping her head to the side a fraction of a second before an object likely a shuriken, her mind swiftly offered tore right past her cheek. Even with her swift reaction, she was too slow to completely avoid damage, as evidenced by the thin line the weapon left in its wake. "I'll weather any attacks," he said. She thought angrily as she ducked into a shadowed section of the room, straining her ears to pick up any sounds. "Well, fuck you very much, ya bastard." For the next few minutes not a sound could be detected and the tension in the room was almost palpable. Knowing that she couldn't wait for her attacker to find her, Artemis shot forward, diving for an enclave between storage banks. The moment she'd rolled into the new spot, she swiftly pulled a strobe arrow out of her quiver and snapped the arrowhead off. Now came the difficult part. To throw or not to throw? If I toss it, there's a chance that they might try to find the strobe. On the other hand, they're likely expecting that, so they might ignore this and just try to find the source of the throw, particularly if I make it sound like it was thrown. Both choices seemed solid and each had its advantages. In the end, she chose to walk the path less trod. She'd probably have been a lot less likely to choose that option if she'd known that it was exactly what the bastard would have chosen. With a slight upward flick, the strobe was in the air. As it tumbled down, she turned her back on it and prepared to move. The arrowhead struck the ground and activated, sending out pulsing beams of fluorescent light in all angles. Artemis didn't move. Her ears strained to pick up any sounds. There, the shuffle of feet. After taking a few more seconds to deduce their target location and where they'd started moving from, the blonde archer shot off, aiming for the opposite corner of the room. She was gambling on a hunch. that the shadows had first formed a perimeter around the central console before her ruse had dragged them away. If she was right, the blonde might have sufficient time to plug in the USB before the shadows returned. On the bright side, her gamble had paid off and she'd been led to the central console. Her luck, though, ran just short of the condole being fully deserted as she spotted one of the black-clad assassins standing at the console. About 2 feet to his left was a row of ports. At least he hasn't seen me, she thought as she formulated a plan to deal with the obstruction. Reaching into her belt, she pulled out a smoke pellet and the USB, then from her quiver she quietly pulled out a blunted arrow and a grapple arrow. Working quickly with skilled fingers, she deactivated the grapple's spring and pulled the triple prongs out wide enough for the USB to fit in snugly to be held by the prongs. Then, taking careful note of the exact location of a port, she carefully knocked the modified grapple arrow and, with a flick of her thumb, she sent the smoke pellet rolling to rest just to the left of the shadow's feet, right between the assassin and the port. A second later, it exploded, releasing its payload. Natural, self-preserving instinct made the assassin jump away from the smoke in the direction of least obstruction, exactly as Artemis had planned. Like a well-practiced choreography, she stood, turned and released the USB-carrying arrow. She didn't wait for the smoke to disperse, knowing that now that she was out in the open, she was running on limited time, and immediately knocked the knockout arrow and pulled back on the drawstring. No quarter draw as with the modified arrow. This shot would bear the force of a fully drawn drawstring, she decided as she tracked her target. The instant the shadow stopped moving, she released the arrow. It was another perfect strike. She would have stopped to check on the USB, but her instincts screamed for her to duck. A mental instruction she heeded, instantly dropping into a split mere milliseconds before a sword cut through the air above her head. Damn it, she growled internally as she quickly brought her legs together and rolled away to spring to her feet. Her opponent was a generic assassin from the ranks of the League of Shadows, so she had a fairly decent idea how to deal with him. Smooth as greased lightning, she loosed 2 knockout arrows at him, followed by an immobilization arrow. Each looked alike, save for the immobilization arrow's slightly bulkier frame. As expected, the assassin blocked the first 2 arrows with his sword and, not expecting any difference, blocked the immobilization arrow. Hook, line and sinker. Artemis smirked as she shot a 3rd knockout arrow at the shadow's forehead. You guys really need to switch things up. After a final glance at the now smoking central console, Artemis walked out of the storage room, her part of the mission complete. In all her years of fighting and having gained experience from various opponents, Tara Markov had to admit, at least to herself, that the man she was up against was definitely a top-tier warrior. Likely somewhere between Sportsmaster and Deathstroke. Wielding those twin staves of his, he had repeatedly sliced her earthen projections into pieces those few times she'd actually been able to get close to hitting him. And that was with Kennedy constantly forcing him to fight on the defensive the entire time. What made it all the more galling, though, was the fact that she knew he could do better. The data obtained from the Amazo android had hinted at that, and the man had confirmed it when, the instant the blonde archer had made her way into the storage room, he blurred forward and taken out all 4 shadows and their master within moments. It was only Kennedy's quick reaction that had saved her from a similar fate. As if reading her thoughts, he blurred away from Kennedy, headed toward her. Her geosensing ability gave her a split-second warning that she instantly took, throwing up a barrier of spikes around her as she split the portion of ground she stood on and began levitating it, and by proxy herself, as fast as she could. To her utter shock, she watched as the black-clad hero, for what else could he be, latched onto the tip of one of her spikes with one-hand acrobatic display, pulled himself over the rising barrier to launch a kick that connected solidly with her side, knocking her off her platform. Working through the pain, she softened the earth at the point she expected to land, only to be snatched out of the air by her partner a moment before one of their enemy's staves stabbed through the air where her chest should have been. Cover fire, Kennedy said tensely as his feet touched the ground. Without hesitation, she called up all the fragments of earth around her and sent them to converge on their foe's last known location. Taking advantage of the moment of reprieve, the two quickly moved to stand back to back, their senses stretching to find him. He's toying with us in a manner not even Sportsmaster dared, Kennedy murmured. He kept poking me with his staff. The part of Tara that was still a young woman and not an enforcer of the light cracked a smile at the double entendre her partner had just dropped before the enforcer squished the thought. He's trying to prove just how superior he thinks he is. Well, I have to say it has been an interesting fight against both of you, the man stated as he brushed off some dust from her attacks. Unfortunately, I've got places to go and people too. He arched an eyebrow as an earthen spike burst through his chest in a shower of gore. Done throwing a tantrum? Good. Catch you later. And with that, he blurred away, leaving not a trace of his presence behind. Kaguya's pov, it doesn't matter how many times I've seen it already, watching him fight is breathtaking. Even now, with most of my mind focused on Donna and Wally's fight against Blockbuster, a part of my attention is on him. He's already taken out most of his opponents, leaving him with just 2, a male and a female, both of whom are making plays off each other to level the playing field. Package delivered. Artemis's voice rang out over the comms. Meltdown in progress. KF, grab Artemis and head back to the rendezvous. Princess, play rearguard. Shard, get in touch with our pickup. While the others work on extracting themselves from the building, I switch frequencies to link up with Calder. Shard, confirmed. We're done here. You? Just dropped off Dr. Roquette. We should be with you in about 10 minutes tops. Alright. We'll wait at the drop. A sudden spike of killing intent behind me is the only warning I have to instant switch my focus from the warehouse up ahead to the building I'm standing on. I spot a small, disc-like object flying toward me from behind the rooftop access where a man's crouching. With my options being to either stand there and take the hit by what is likely an incendiary device or directly engage my attacker, the choice isn't really difficult to make. With a pulse of chakra I release the resistance seals Naruto had been using to enhance my speed in the same instant I blast forward, projecting bone spikes from my wrists as I sidestep the disc to continue my charge. Whoever it is behind the hatch obviously hadn't considered the possibility that I'd be able to react to his attack fast enough to attempt a direct charge and so is caught unawares as I close the distance to begin attacking. Interestingly, his reflexes are impressively swift as he is able to parry my initial jabs at his head and groin by redirecting my weapons to miss their mark by mere millimeters. He tries to take advantage of the missed strikes by lashing out with an elbow at my exposed midsection, but I spin away from the blow and slash at his side in retaliation. He dodges the attack as well and we both use the time to gain space and balance our stances. He's in a pair of black pants with a blue long-sleeved shirt. Over this he wears armor that reminds me of the sort worn by hockey players, including the mask, while his hands are clothed in black gloves. As I watch, he pulls a sleek, double-tipped javelin from its place on his back and prepares to resume our scuffle. At the same time I hear Naruto's voice over the comms telling the rest of our team to stay away as the rendezvous has been compromised. I can feel his presence hovering close by, watching but not interfering, trusting that I can deal with the situation. I fully intend to prove him right. You know, little lady, I'm actually quite impressed that you were able to sense my attack in time to dodge it. His voice sounds harsh and condescending, likely a man that believes himself the epitome of his own skill. I'll be sure to impart a small lesson in humility before I leave. For now, though, I need a few answers. I'm also impressed. I reply dryly as I observe his every move. Did you manage to sneak up on me? I'm sure you ask every fly that lands on you the same thing. He smirks before lunging forward, his weapon forming an intricate pattern around him as he begins the next round. While I repeatedly parry his attacks, I smirk internally, knowing that he answered my question to a deeper degree than even he could have thought. I push the creeping feelings of superiority back, though, as I continually force him to overextend slightly with each strike of his that I parry. Then, when I see a bit of space, I reverse my grip on the spike in my left arm and try to tear through his belly. With shocking swiftness, he pulls back and bends over backward until his hands touch the ground and then tries to catch me in the jaw with a rising kick. I tilt my head as far back as it can go, feeling a rush of wind as his kick narrowly misses me. He continues his movement, turning it into a backflip as I dive toward him, spinning and twisting as I usually do, bringing both spikes to bear against him. I'm pleased to note that he seems to struggle more now as trying to deal with both weapons now that I'm in his space and have reduced the effectiveness of his own weapon. Everyone, converge on the rendezvous on my signal. Shard. Our ride's a few minutes out. Need any help with him? A part of me wants to say no, to prove that I'm capable of dealing with these kinds of threats too. A part of me wants to impress him, yet I'm not certain if I want to impress the man that saved me or the man that's now my friend. Plus you do not need to impress me, Kagaya, plus he says over the comms, switching to our native language. Plus I am already impressed by the strong woman you have shown, and continue to show, yourself as. Now, do you need assistance? Plus. Oh, for God's sake, does he even know the effect those kind of words can have on a person? Yes. On my way. Take a step back please. Only a few seconds have gone by since his first question and I'm still locked in combat. Upon hearing his request, I feint a jab to my opponent's side and, as he moves to dodge, I take a single step back. Naruto's assistance is almost too simple. He just appears behind the man, already in the motions of delivering a roundhouse kick, so that by the time the man realizes what's going on, his side is practically caved in by Naruto's kick that sends him flying off the roof. Thank you. I say, trying to convey the weight of my feelings into those two words. He inclines his head just once yet I feel that he understood me perfectly. Dude, that was sweet, Kid Flash almost yells as he comes to a stop beside us. For a moment, with the way he's cradling her and she's holding him, himself and Artemis almost seem like they could be a couple. Then, as if sensing how they look, he lets her drop and she, in retaliation, sweeps his legs off the ground with a cry of, asshole. Geez KF, it's like you want her to hate you. Donna sounds as amused as Naruto and I feel. Are we missing something here? I think Artemis lashed out cause she missed the warmth of his arms. Naruto says as he holds an arm out to offer assistance to the blonde archer which she promptly shuns. Techi. Honestly you too, I smile. deciding to join in the fun. You're like a high school pair trying to hide your feelings by being snarky all the time. We just met. Wally snaps back and, as though he'd rehearsed it, Donna Naruto and I reply with a chorus of love at first right into that. Artemis says as Wally smacks his own forehead. I know. Metropolis, so, what's bothering you, Clark? Kara smiled as she slid back into her seat opposite her cousins. They were in their favorite discussion diner, a place that afforded its patrons a good meal, music and a decent level of privacy, all within a clean and moderately sane environment, and she'd just returned from a trip to the ladies' room. I did not make the trip all the way to listen to you awkwardly try to cover up the real reason you asked me to come over. The blonde caught a hint of guilt in her cousin's eyes before he averted them and tried to deny her statement. Come on, Clark. She pleaded with a soft smile as she laid a hand on his. You know, between you and I, that we suck at telling lies, and I can see how much whatever's wrong is eating at you. Please talk to me. For the next couple of seconds, nothing. The dark-haired man said nothing, allowing the tunes of an old jazz song fill the silence. It's the League. Or, more importantly, Batman and a few other leaguers. He said with a sigh. Kara, trusting that he'd already activated the silencing field effect of the League issue communicator every leaguer had, sat back and nodded for him to continue. Recently, I came to a pretty shocking discovery. Batman, with Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Canary, Cyborg and a few others, maybe even others I don't know about yet, have created a group that comprises of some of their sidekicks and a few other young people to act as a special, almost shadow cell for the League. They're to investigate leads Batman thinks aren't dead ends as they might seem. Interesting. Kara shrugged, not seeing the big deal in what she considered a light issue at best. It's not a bad idea. Clark's response was an arched eyebrow, isn't it? Honestly, I can't see anything to be worried about, Kara replied. But why don't you tell me what you think's wrong with it? Kara watched her cousin sit back and had a fleeting thought that he'd likely prepared his defense. Well, for starters, Batman should have contacted the rest of the League before starting such a thing. I mean, we're supposed to be protecting the Earth. To do that, we need to trust one another and not make decisions on our own. But he didn't make the decision on his own, Kara argued. I mean, sure, he didn't tell the League as a whole, but he did share the idea with others. Maybe, but he didn't tell the League as a whole, he countered. That could cause friction later on. To Kara, it seemed as though her cousin was taking the matter harder than others would, but she kept her cool and let him continue. Then there's the kind of missions he's having them take. I mean, they're just kids. Putting them on missions that might have them rubbing shoulders with criminals is wrong. Is it? Kara wondered. Or are you maybe projecting what you feel should be right? Then there's the choice of his team's members. Clark continued. I have no problem with Robin, Kid Flash and some others, but he has that strange man that appeared during the invasion. We have no clue what his opinions are or where his loyalties lie. And a clone of me. Kara's eyes narrowed as she stared at her cousin. So those were the real issues. Naruto's presence on the team and, apparently, a clone of his. What do you mean, a clone of you? He can't have cloned you, can he? Oh, he didn't, the Man of Steel replied with a glower. Remember the Sumdak facility bust? Well, contrary to what he said, that was his little group at work. They found a young Kryptonian going by the designation, Superboy, apparently, and it still baffles me how the facility was able to gather enough genetic material to not only create a clone of me but de-age it as well. Kara's mind churned through the information at sublight speeds. Maybe they grew him? That's not the point, Kara. He snapped, and only years of tightly leashed control held him back from smashing the table to bits. Someone out there, maybe even a whole group, has the means to not only acquire sufficient amounts of my genetic samples to create a clone of me, they potentially have the capability to do it to the entire League. And Batman knew but didn't say a word of it to anyone outside his little cabal. Like that's not enough, he's endangering the lives of a bunch of kids by putting a trained killer, of whom we know next to nothing about, on an experimental team with them. It's like he's actively baiting trouble. Again Kara found herself leaning back to relax in her seat, this time crossing her arms as she went. She said nothing for the next couple of seconds, content with just staring straight into his eyes. Finally, after what seemed like hours, she spoke up again. You've given me a bunch to think about, Clark, but the way I see there are only two things really bothering you here. The presence of Naruto on the team Batman's built and Superboy. So what's really eating at you, Clark? It was a question the Man of Steel couldn't truly answer and one his cousin planned to investigate. Gotham, the Iceberg Lounge, one of the most exclusive entertainment hotspot in Gotham, catering to the rich and the powers behind thrones. The illegal powers, often behind equally illegal thrones. This isn't to say that legal entrepreneurs couldn't enjoy themselves, though, simply that, quite often, some of those legal entrepreneurs found themselves in the presence of those who either straddled the line or were completely entrenched on the illegal side. Jade Chan was fairly legal in her dealings, though she wasn't quite certain she could say the same of her client, or at least said client's bodyguards. This is amazing. The client, a young girl that couldn't have been 18, had black hair with purple streaks that barely brushed her pale shoulders. I thought father's research into the nervet was a simple hobby or perhaps his trying to verify an old ghost story, but this proves that he was onto something. Miss Jinx, the girl's head snapped up from her perusal of the clay tablet on the table, revealing her soulful brown eyes set into an excited, youthful face. Just Jinx is fine, Miss Chan. Then Jade's fine. The artifact hunter smiled. I'm surprised, though, for something you didn't put much stock into. You certainly seem to have taken it at face value. It could be a fake. Oh, I'm certain it's at least as old as you claim. The younger girl replied flippantly. Stacy's a metahuman, and while her gift isn't particularly combat-oriented, it's the perfect match for an archaeologist, or an antiques collector. Is that so? Jade hummed with a smile as she reappraised the tall, dark-haired woman standing to the left of her client while cataloging the fact that Jinx, having admitted that her guard was indeed a metahuman whose abilities had little to do with combat, had never implied that Stacy wasn't capable of combat on her own. Interesting. Indeed, Jinx nodded as she leaned back in her seat. I understand that while you're not a cryptographer or something along those lines, you do have an understanding of ancient languages. Jade inclined her head in agreement. It's a handy skill to have in my line of work.
Agreed. So I hope you have no issues sharing your opinions on the meaning of the inscription on this tablet. The younger girl smiled pleasantly as she spoke, yet what drew the artifact hunter's attention was the sound of a page being flipped lazily.
Her eyes focused on the most lackadaisical-looking man she'd ever seen. A tall, lanky man with gravity-defying sliver-gray hair held up by a blue bandana that was adjusted to cover an eye. He was dressed in a pair of faded blue jeans and a simple, long-sleeved black shirt. He had on a mask that covered the lower half of his face and wore a pair of fingerless gloves that held a little orange book. And while his focus seemed riveted on the book, Jade suspected that should her hand so much as twitch in the direction of the dagger strapped to her thigh, she'd be pinned to the pillar behind old Blink. He was that dangerous. So, with a casual smile, she nodded to Jinx and directed most of her attention to the clay tablet she'd found. While the first section of the inscription on the tablet utilizes a symbolic imagery style similar to the hieroglyphs of ancient Egypt, the second section is of texts common around the Sumerian times. I'd hazard a guess and say we're looking at an ancient Rosetta Stone, translated from the original Nervit language to the Sumerian language. And you say it says something about an artifact lost to time? Jinx asked, trying to keep her excitement leashed, but traces of it still leaked out. Yes, something about nirvana if I'm reading the text right. Wow. Tears pooled at the corners of the girl's eyes. Dad's work, it was all real. For the next couple of moments, the music of the club took over in place of the sounds of conversation until Jinx had her emotions under control. Thank you, Jade. It's unfortunate that I can't move extensively to find more of the Nervit, but, as you pointed out earlier, I didn't put much stock into Dad's work, so I currently don't have enough to push forward with this.
The girl sighed, seemingly pained by what she would have to say next. As such, I'm going to have to call you off actively searching for any more Nervit artifacts for the foreseeable future. However, I'd like it if you could keep these findings to yourself. I'd like to honor Dad's memory by uncovering a new civilization in his name.
Jade mulled over the offer, knowing that it presented both a risk and a fairly decent chance at making a side earning. How about if I do you one up? I'll keep my eyes open while I'm about, and, should I find anything related to the Nervit, I bring it to you first. Jinx's eyes grew wide in comprehension, leading Jade to believe that the guards were performed the illegal acts without their lady's knowledge. Of course, and you get a finder's fee in exchange. Jade shrugged as she sat back, a small smile playing at the corner of her lips. Wins for both sides. A brilliant smile graced the girl's features. Wins indeed, thank you, Jade. A pleasure. The dark-haired woman smiled as she stood to take her leave. Is there anything else? That will be all, thank you. Jinx smiled as she stood to shake hands with Jade. I look forward to hearing from you. Graciously, Jade accepted the proffered hand before weaving her way through the lounge's crowd. Do you think she'll find anything? Stacy asked as she watched the treasure hunter. Oh, she will. Kakashi replied, sounding like the whole thing was barely worth his attention. She's an accomplished treasure hunter whose results speak for her. He yawned as he flipped a page. I suppose the real question is whether or not she'll find nirvana. She will. Jinx stated coolly, all traces of the sentimental daughter she'd just as soon gone from her visage. And that's precisely what we need her for. Mount Justice standing in the central command room of the mountain, Naruto and Kagaya analyzed the data arrayed on the screens before them. Any thoughts? Canary asked, noting that the duo still hadn't relaxed after their successful mission. With a sigh, Naruto, dressed in a pair of cargo shorts and a plain blue shirt, turned away from the screens. A few, he admitted before shaking his head. Nothing concrete though. Perhaps if we had more time, Cyborg and Robin could have created a means for us to access the stolen data, Calder said with a tinge of regret.
Kagaya, though, did not agree and set out to make her stand clear. It was better that we didn't have sufficient time to do such. After all, technology is a two-way street. By the same means we could track them, so also, logically speaking, they could do the same to us. K-Guy is right. Cyborg agreed. It's conceivable that I'd simply shunt the data to a safe location that wouldn't compromise us, but I opted not to take the risk.
Back to you, Naruto said. You said you had a few thoughts. Mind sharing? The blonde nodded, picked a marker and moved over to a whiteboard. Here's the timeline of events since Dr. Roquette was abducted, he said as he swiftly drew up a linear path with opposite ends indicating the researcher's capture and her return home in the present. Now, I don't know exactly when she was abducted, but reports say 2 weeks ago. That, quite conveniently, happens to be a few days after our defeat of the android. Of course, that may just be conjecture on my part, but a few things stand out.
Canary, eyes narrowed as she listened, responded, listening. For starters, how the hell did the League know exactly what Dr. Roquette was working on? I mean, I know a bit about researcher types, and I know the one constant is that they guard their projects fanatically. That they knew to snap her up just as her work hit the actualization stage implies that not only had they been keeping tabs on her, but that they wormed their way into her life to such a degree that she likely didn't realize until they kidnapped her.
That makes a lot of sense, admitted hesitantly. We had to question her to find the plant. Pointless endeavor. Kagaya countered coolly. Whoever the plant is, they'd likely have slipped away, particularly as the doctor was hardly likely to have more than a single confidant judging by her behavior while we were on the mission. Calder frowned at her words. Still, chasing this could lead to us uncovering a member of the League.
And then what? Canary asked with a shrug. If there's anything the shadows thrive at, it's long-term infiltration.
By the time you figure out the identity of the plant in Roquette's life, he or she would likely be settling into a new one. And, in the exceedingly unlikely scenario that you do catch this plant, they'd be more inclined to killing themselves than uttering a single word to aid you. She sighed as she pushed her hand through her hair and shook her head. No, chasing this is pointless. Continue, Naruto. The blonde nodded. The second thing that stuck out was how Red Arrow found her. He raised a hand to stall exclamations. I don't doubt your friend's loyalties. However, I do find it suspect that he found the doctor at a point where she had completed the fog and would be forced into making the choice between the doctor and her work. I believe the shadows manipulated him into moving their plan forward. And what plan are we looking at here? Cyborg asked. You'll understand soon, Naruto said with grim certainty. The next thing to wonder about is the timing of their attacks. At this point even I'm confused. Kagaya admitted with a frown. The timing? The blonde nodded. Judging by Red Arrow's statements on his rescue of the doctor, I believe the shadows had close to 5 hours to pillage whatever they needed from any facilities. Comprehension slowly dawned on Canary as her eyes widened. Yet they only made their first move about an hour before Speedy brought in the information he gathered. Though, didn't seem ready to buy into the theory, and he made his opinion known. They could have required the time to understand how to work with the fog. No, they would not. Calder replied grimly. One doesn't kidnap a researcher of this level of technology without constantly monitoring them to ensure that the hostage doesn't shortchange them. It is likely, more so than not in fact, that a technologically savvy person not only supervised her but also took the time to understand the inner workings of the fog. In fact, it would explain why they felt the doctor was expendable, as they felt they no longer had need of her intellect in regards to the fog. So the question now is simple, so to speak. Kagaya followed up. What the hell did they do during their free time? They reprogrammed the fog. Naruto sent Canary a tight smile, acknowledging that she was, at least partially, correct. Not so much reprogramming as it was adding a secondary set of instructions into the fog's core code. Now that the blonde's words had a picture, it was no surprise that swiftly lunged forward to grab a seat and a keyboard as Cyborg hooked himself up to the system. The fog, while still operating with the primary objective of sending chunks of data to the shadows, now had a secondary objective, stated as he pulled up his arsenal of hacking tools and began writing the code for a new program. By his side, Cyborg analyzed the script the young hacker was putting together and making adjustments where he deemed it fit, even as he picked up from where had left off. Quite possibly a more sinister objective. To plant worms into the target system's software, granting them backdoor channels into the secure research of the target facilities. With this, they wouldn't need to expose themselves via abductions anymore. Calder concluded. They'd have access to everything, from research notes to blueprints to projects of their choice. Naruto nodded. That was likely the initial objective as at when they created this plan. However, with the interference of the team during the android recall, they tacked on a second, though significantly less important objective, to draw out the team. That seems unlikely though. Canary rejoined. I mean, how could they predict that we'd send in the team? They couldn't, Kagaya answered as a crease formed between her brows. She had a sneaking suspicion that her partner/bodyguard wasn't revealing his entire suspicion to those gathered at the moment but chose to confront him in private. Instead, she continued her line of thought. The entire setup was still designed to have the fog infiltrate the systems with malware. The team's showing up was, at best, a third variable, one that they didn't put stock on. So they expected, at least, a few members of the League and made provision for such. Canary concluded. However, their plan was flexible enough for them to still work with even though we sent you guys instead. Plus, as a hidden bonus, they got to learn more about your capabilities. Exactly. Naruto nodded. We're dealing with an enemy that's capable of building strategies that allow them to accomplish multiple goals in one run. Figuring out who there has to become a priority, both for the League and for the team. Doesn't this attack prove that we're dealing with the League of Shadows? Calder asked, a question that earned him a shake of the head from both Kaguya and Canary. If taken alone, yes, the white-haired princess answered. However, the attack on Santa Prisca showed that Cobra had inroads to the research Sumdak conducted. That sportsmaster, who attacked me on the roof tonight, was there for a purchase implies that the Shadows have inroads into both. At least enough to know exactly what both were working on and how far they'd both gone. That Cobra chose to sell the first batch to the Shadows as you reported means they were given a chance to utilize the enhanced Cobra venom before it hit the market. There's a connection between those three. Canary agreed, and as Naruto said, we need to figure out how far the web's been spun and who's at the center. Happy Harbor Kaguya's Pav. I wholeheartedly agree with Naruto's yawning declaration as we stretch out tiredly after the day's events. Today has been an interesting day for sure. Well, if you need me, I'll be in the kitchen. I'm feeling a sugar craving. He grins as he walks away. What, no ramen? I ask as I follow. He can have his sugar, I'll have a mug of tea.
Nah, not tonight. Upon entering the kitchen, he heads for the fridge while I make my way over to the kettle. For the next few moments, we say nothing to each other, enjoying the peaceful quiet as we work. Kaguya, I'm fairly certain you have a few questions for me about my theories regarding today's events. Am I right?
You are. I pick up the pack of tea bags and pull out a bag. I was just about to ask you about that, really. Well, thank you for not bringing it up back at the mount. That may have caused a bit of an issue back there. He says as he adds a couple spoons honey into his glass of milk. Honey?
I keep the jar beside my mug, still waiting for the water to boil. So what's the big secret? I may be wrong but I get the feeling that Dr. Roquette may have been an accomplice in today's case. Not only that but my suspicions regarding Red Arrow's ease at locating her runs deeper than I portrayed. My eyes narrow upon hearing his words and it doesn't take a second for me to catch his meaning. You think Red Arrow's a spy? He nods as he takes a slice of cake out of the refrigerator. I know it seems absurd but
it doesn't. I cut in as the kettle begins to whistle. When I ran through a list of possible reasons for your hiding something, the possibility that Red Arrow could be a spy ranked high up on the list.
How'd you come to that? He asks, sounding quite impressed. The look on his face causes my heart to skip a beat but I suppress it in time to reply him. The points you brought up about how easily he located the doctor as well as how you seemed to remove him from the suspect list while planting an almost imperceptible seed of doubt. And what was that? You suggested that he might have been manipulated by the Shadows. I shrug as I stir a spoon of honey into my berry tea. That implies that he may have connections to them that are capable of manipulating him into taking actions that are beneficial for them. His face breaks into a wide smile that curls around the edges of the glass he's drinking from and, impossible as it may seem, brightens the kitchen even more than the glare of the light bulb. You never cease to amaze me, Kaguya.
Can the steam from a mug of tea be used as an excuse for a blush? I wonder as I take a slow sip to busy my hands. Again I wonder if he knows what he's doing to me. It wasn't that hard to put together. I say as I try to dismiss his words, and their effect, with a shrug. But now that I've confirmed it, I can understand why you chose not to tell the others earlier.
Exactly. He says as he moves over to the sink to wash the utensils he used. As for Roquette, well her behavior during the mission gave her away. How so? She seemed worried that her work was in the wrong hands. No. He shakes his head as he towels the glass dry. If you really observed her, she seemed more worried about her brilliant science not being in her hands than it being in the wrong hands. Also, while the subject of her research was another reason to be suspicious, the clincher was how she reacted to the fact that an organization of some of the most skilled assassins in the world was after her. Looking back on it, particularly through his eyes, I can definitely see how he'd come to his conclusion. However, I know that I'm supposed to play devil's advocate to ensure that we're not seeing the world through blinders, so I voice the first argument that comes to mind. She's a brilliant woman, Naruto. She'd likely come to the conclusion and accepted the fact that her death was imminent. As to her concerns about those in possession of her work, well, should she have accepted her death then it stands to reason that she felt annoyed that she likely wouldn't have anything to be remembered by. Good counter. He nods approvingly though a small frown creases his brow. In fact, I nearly dropped this theory for that reason. However, I just can't get over how calm she seemed about the sheer destructive capability her project had. If the Shadows felt so inclined, they could have had the launch codes to this country's entire nuclear armament. Or any one of a dozen other nefarious acts. Yet she simply didn't care. No, I believe she, at least, has ties to the Shadows. It's good to know that he's not just rushing into an opinion without considering the possible flaws in said opinion, but, even with my own counter-argument, I can't help but feel that he may be correct. It might be worth looking into. How soon can you have eyes on her?
I should have a few clones tailing her by this time tomorrow, and I'll see if Shikamaru from her cyber presence. Want me to wash that for you? I nod and pass him my mug. I'll let Canary know if they find something.
Might bring up a few issues on trust and privacy. I warn him, but he just shrugs.
I'll be honest, I couldn't tell her cause it could have been nothing, but I had to go with it cause it could have been something. Frankly, I think she'd be easier to convince than, say, Batman or Superman. Likely so. I agree before noticing the uneaten cake. You forgot your snack. Nah, that's my bedside snack for tonight, he says as he lifts the cling film wrapped treat and leads the way. I want to get Arrow's sentence prepped in time for our editor to check it out. Toad Sage Press is going to need a solid entry to make a name for itself, so I'm going all out on this one. Just then, his words remind me of an issue I wish to have resolved. Speaking of going all out, I noticed that you seemed to hold back a lot more than usual during the fight against Terra and Kennedy. You stuck primarily to dodging and only really struck out at the shadows when the fight first started. Why? Ah, that. He sounds amused about the question, like the whole thing was a small but well-executed prank. Well, in all honesty, I did it to fuck with them. He shrugs casually. They've already got the Amazo data, so they have a clue what my skill set should be and the possible extremes of my abilities. After all, no one could possibly go up against that thing without taking it seriously. So, to them, I'm just a really fast metahuman. Not speedster fast, mind you, but a faster than average guy who's skilled at martial arts and in possession of a weapon that can alter its shape. You still with me?
I nod. Well, since Kennedy and Terra know that, they attacked with that in mind. Now I could have turned their data upside down, but I chose not to. This way, I get to keep a few aces up my sleeve.
Comprehension dawns on me as he speaks so that by the time he's done, I understand what he aims to do. And when you use any of these aces, they're forced to reevaluate their data and head back to the drawing board on how to deal with you. At this point, we're at the bedrooms, he by his door and me by mine, so I'm able to see the slight smile on his face.
Remember earlier? He asks as he leans on the doorframe. When I said that you didn't need to go out of your way to impress me.
How could I possibly forget that? He'd had me blushing in the middle of a fight with those words. Well, you've done so twice now, and I know you're not even trying. Don't ever change, Kagaya. It's taking my brain a lot longer than usual to cone up with a response, so I just blurt out the first set of coherent words that come to my mouth. Same goes for you, Naruto. His smile grows just a little brighter and my heart seems to beat just a little faster. I won't. Good night, princess. Night, Naruto. With that, he walks into his room and closes the door, leaving me standing in the doorway and wondering how to deal with what I'm feeling.
Because I have a feeling that this is a bit more than simple hero worship.
I sit at the dining table in the safe house the team and I are resting it for the next few days to regain our strength and pull out a blank scroll and inkpot from my practice pouch. We may be relaxing our bodies for a while, but it's no reason for me to slack off on my skills that aren't so reliant on my body. That, and neither Levi nor, annoyingly enough, Rin would let me catch a break if they were to so much as suspect that I might be slacking off. Soon enough, I'm deeply engrossed in my task of improving my script writing speed, so much so that only my heightened perception allows me to note when Rangaku and Hisagi walk in. At the back of my mind, I'm aware of the kettle I put to boil. Sometime later, the wait is over, so I pause my work to go and prepare the divine meal. I'm just snapping the chopsticks when I hear a familiar voice greeting everyone. Good morning, Uzumaki-kun. I see that you're practicing your fuinjutsu. It's Rin, our resident nin taijutsu lady. Quite the personality, depending on her mood as at when you were to encounter her. With my mouth full, I can't truly answer her, so I puff out a muffled response. I should have kept my mouth shut. Nay, Uzumaki-kun, are you eating ramen again? Something about her tone sends shivers down my spine. It's like listening to a soft wind blowing on the coast but knowing that it carries the promise of a raging hurricane. I choose to keep my mouth shut. Should have done that a couple seconds ago. With a calm but determined gait, she stalks over to stand in front of me with a wide smile. Now that's no good, particularly for your morning meal. She's positioned in such a way that she's directly between Rangaku, Hisagi and I, so I can easily see the wide grin Ren sporting around her sake saucer, her eyes glimmering with barely restrained laughter. Hisagi's humor is more restrained, but there's still a tiny smirk at the corner of his mouth. Traitors. I can expect no aid from them. What do you say to some nice, warm French toast to him? I, Uzumaki Naruto, S-ranked shinobi, jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko, feel like a rabbit being stalked by a predator. But, ramen's awesome. I know it is, Uzumaki-kun, but can't you cook something else for a change? My mouth, treacherous bastard, chose to release its filthy contents, but I can't cook. Rin's visage took on a shocked look that I just knew was a fake. But that's just sad. Tell you what, from today, you'll learn to cook and cook well. As a reward, you'll have a bowl of ramen once a fortnight. What the fuck? Her grin turns decidedly evil upon hearing my expletive. You're right, monthly assessments are better. My jaw drops open in shock. Just as I'm about to rally a comeback, she smiles beatifically at me. Should we make it once in 2 months? My jaw snaps shut. In the background, I see Rangaku slapping her knee as her shoulders shake vigorously. Let's begin now, Uzumaki-kun. After all, there's no time like the present. We'll begin with a simple meal. Put some water on to boil for the tea and get the loaves of bread. I'll grab the other things we'll need. We'll start with French toast. A smile crosses my lips as I sprinkle a pinch of salt onto the egg I'm frying before flipping it over to complete the turnover. Those were the days, the guys and I tearing across the elemental nations, ripping Zetsu armies apart and forcing Madara and Obito to practically tear their hair out by the roots. The smile turns melancholic as I turn the egg onto a plate and I transfer the plate onto a prepared tray. Of us, only Karabi, Rin, myself and a crippled Levi survived. Gauther died when Obito used the human path to sever the link between his body and his soul when he was possessing a different body. Rangaku was destroyed by Utakata and Yugito while they were Obito's paths. The pain of their deaths remain as poignant now as when it was fresh and I just paused to get a grip on my emotions. Are you alright? Kaguya's gentle voice drifts over to me from the doorway. I must have walked further down memory lane than usual for me not to have sensed her approach. Done with your shower already? I ask, putting on a teasing smile as I carry the tray. I could have sworn that I still had a bit more time to set up breakfast. Before I can take more than 2 steps forward, she's in front of me and she collects the tray and sets it back on the counter. Considering the fact that I'd been standing there for just over 2 minutes, then I'd say that your walk down memory lane was a bit more intense than usual. Do you want to talk about it? I wave dismissively as I reach across and pull my own plate out of the warmer, giving myself an excuse not to look into her eyes as I reply, wasn't anything. Somehow my eyes are drawn to her face in time for me to see a flash of pain and guilt cross her features and a dark part of me feels elated at her pain. I can almost hear it as it hisses. That's right. Feel the guilt your actions.
You often tell me to talk about how I'm feeling, she says as she tries to forge past the guilt.
Unfortunately, perhaps because I'm fighting the whispers in my own head, my response is unusually curt and even I can hear the slight tinge of bitterness in my words. And how often do you do that? For the next couple of minutes, an uncomfortable silence settles between us. A first-time occurrence, strange as it might seem, since our arrival on this world. Kaguya picks at her food while I, on the other hand, can't seem to get enough to cram my mouth shut.
My plate is empty, she hasn't even eaten a third of her egg.
I sigh internally. Whether or not my words rang true, the damage done had been through the inflection in my tone. I'd sounded bitter, and bitterness is an emotion that we cannot allow to take hold. Not when the only thing we have is each other. Kaguya, I'm sorry. I pause for a few moments to let the apology sink in before I continue. I was way out of line there. You weren't. You simply said what was on your mind and, as it turns out, you were telling the truth. She cuts in, her voice little more than a whisper. Yet, for all the quietness of her voice I can hear the pain inside and I know that I have truly hurt her and so I try again. It doesn't take away the fact that I said it at a bad time. Again she stops me before I can finish speaking. What made it a bad time? It is unfair of me to keep mum about my feelings yet keep expecting you to be completely open about yours. Life's give and take, right? Nothing more is said for the next couple of moments. I've hurt her. That much is fucking obvious but I have no idea what to say to her. Line. Break the Mistira. Things really do sink in when one's bone tired. Diana arched an eyebrow as she pulled herself out of the water to sit on the pool's edge, the surrounding wisps of steam doing nothing to cover her nudity. What do you mean? It's just that I finally understand what you'd say every time you came back. Donna sighed blissfully as she submerged herself in one of the Mistira's hot springs to her chin. There's just no place like home. Glad you finally understand. Diana smiled in return as she kicked water at the younger girl's face. As for being bone tired, well, let me just say that you wore me out a bit too. Just a bit? Donna asked as she wiped the water off with a laugh. I could have sworn that I did better than that. And I should tell you that? So you'd get a bigger head? Diana asked with a grin of her own that spurred them on to even more laughter. Finally, after the laughter had died down, she sat forward, resting her elbows on her thighs and stared intently at the younger woman. Honestly, though, you have improved. And by a noticeable margin too. Thanks. Donna smiled as she sat up, just enough for the water to drop a few inches below her shoulder level. It's mostly thanks to Naruto though. His training may be brutal but even I know that it's been a boon. He's that good, huh? In truth, while Donna's words impressed her, they only served to validate all out the blonde offworlder. Now provided with an opportunity to learn a bit more about him, the Amazonian princess pounced on it. What's he like?
The younger Amazon, however, chose to take the opportunity to rib her mentor and her voice took on a lilting, teasing tone. Do I smell interest? Might the princess of the Amazons be interested in the enigmatic offworlder?
Not a cradle robber, thank you very much. Diana shot back with a smirk. What? Afraid I'll steal your crush? Don't worry, I won't be getting between a teacher-student relationship. He's got a girl. Donna shrugged dismissively before pausing. Then, at least I think he's got. Not my business really. She mumbled, internally thanking Hera that the heat of the springs had already caused her skin to seem flushed. She did not want her mentor knowing of that moment of Wally-induced stupidity. Having determined that the moment of internal embarrassment had passed, she continued. He's a brutal teacher who has seriously high expectations of his students, but he's also a kind one who helps you get to those expectations. She smiled softly, thinking of the times the blonde had sparred with her, kicked her ass and then pointed out her flaws and worked with her until the flaws were ironed out. He helped me tighten up my close-quarter fighting technique while increasing my combat awareness. We're working on how to up my speed while making plans to better incorporate my flight into my fighting style.
He seems very laid back, but he's got a head for strategies and is incredibly sharp and capable of reading situations and events. Add the two and you have Naruto, a guy who is extremely observant, really good at reading people and situations and choosing the best path to resolving issues, be it a girl hurt by someone's rage-filled words or a mission to get his charge out of a troublesome situation.
Well, if I wasn't interested before, you have definitely piqued my interest, Diana said. What about when he's not on the job, so to speak?
He's actually a lot of fun when we're just hanging out. He enjoys a good prank whether he's the perpetrator or the victim. Though he's had to be a bit more serious since Artemis joined us.
Green Arrow's niece? Diana asked, to which Donna hummed in confirmation. Why? Is her presence causing any rifts in the team? Just one. Donna snorted in amusement. Naruto is a firm believer in teamwork and, when not helping us up our individual skills, has been training us on how to work together as a team. For some reason, though, Artemis's mere presence seems to grate on Wally's nerves. It probably doesn't help that he has never managed to one-up her in any of their verbal spars and Naruto keeps teaming them up so they haven't had a reason to attack each other yet. It's usually fun to watch their interactions, but it's clearly driving both Naruto and Calder up the wall. Line, break Mount Justice. We need to make a move, team. He's not going to let up his attack. Calder shouted mentally from behind the wall himself and Magan shared, trying to corral the team into action.
We were already moving, remember? Artemis snapped angrily as she rolled behind a rock seconds before an orb of water smashed into the ground she had just rolled past.
Simple mission parameters. Sneak into the castle without being seen and without relying on Magan's powers. Halfway through and the goddamned wallman chooses to blow our cover. She knelt and lifted her hand to her quiver as she peeked past the rock at the castle, only to yank her head back as a trio of water orbs smashed into the rock in response. Great going, Wall-O. I said I was sorry. The speedster snapped back, his scowl almost audible as he raced from point to point, never given a moment of rest by the blunted earth spikes that had harried him since the moment he had foolishly broken cover. Besides, I told Miss, I make no mistakes to cover me. If she'd done her job like Speedy would've, we wouldn't be in this mess. While I'd normally stay away from your arguments, this one's on you, Wally. Raven stated, her voice sounding incensed as she held up a shield over herself and, both heavily sweating due to the heat of the seemingly unending stream of flames she held back. You knew the plan yet dumped it for whatever harebrained reason you felt justified your actions. It doesn't matter whose fault it is, Connor growled angrily as he struggled to escape the cyclonic winds that currently had him pinned. We've been bogged down in this no man's land for too long. The timer will soon go off and I sure as hell do not intend to lose. I can't take any more of those hell drills of his. Connor is right. It doesn't matter whose fault it is, we'll all suffer for it. Calder agreed, sounding more assertive than they had ever heard from him. Now, I have a plan, but it hinges on precise timing and cooperation, so whatever grudges you have between yourselves, Artemis, Wally, I would suggest that you keep them aside for the time being, or I will prove to you that being trained as an Atlantean is a form of hell you cannot comprehend. Whether it was his tone or the threat, Calder couldn't be sure, but no one even attempted to say a single word as he explained his plan. Their training exercise for the day was a relatively simple one. Naruto had taken Kaguya hostage and stashed her in the castle, giving them half an hour to sneak into his fortress. It wasn't a stealth exercise per se, though they could tell that stealth was a part of the requirements. Between planning, execution and Wally's error, they had used up about 15 minutes. Naruto had bogged them down with a slew of attacks and traps for another 10. They had just 5 minutes left. Now, Calder shouted as he ran toward Wally's position. At the same time, Magan wrenched control of 3 watery projectiles and sent them toward the source of the flamethrower Raven was faced with. The Fuinjutsu seal tag embedded in the wall was doused with the water, giving the magic users group the chance to dive out of the way. At the same time, an explosive arrow caved the wall in to ensure an end to the fire trap. Meanwhile, Raven was able to force open a path for Connor to escape the wind trap. Now free of their former impediments, the team's heavy hitters smashed their way into the field of spikes, Connor pulverizing any spikes that got close while Calder, having cleared up a bit of space around Wally, hurled the speedster out of there. With determination born of a desire to atone for his mistake, Kid Flash ran. He pushed himself as hard as he could, zipping past the watery projectiles that were shot at him and tearing into the fortress. True to his word, the interior of the fortress was devoid of any traps, granting Wally the chance to scour the building. Nothing, Beyond tacky and cliched castle decor, the fortress was empty. After a final check that still bore no fruit, Wally raced outside to tell the others of the problem. Just as he crossed the foyer, he was presented with a conundrum. He could see Naruto walking out of a building about 300 meters away. At the same time, Artemis had just, in the process of dodging one water orb, had jumped into the path of another. He could complete the mission at the cost of the blonde archer getting wet, or he could save his teammate and cost them the mission. It's only water, he reasoned as he raced toward the off-worlder duo. Naruto would never try to seriously harm us. Besides, if I saved her, she'd just blame me for costing us the mission. The instant he touched Kaguya, the simulation blanked out, leaving them in the training room. Naruto was emphatically not smiling. Congratulations team, you failed the mission. It took a few moments for the blonde's words to sink in, but the moment it did, there was a cacophony of noise that did nothing to appease the shinobi. Quiet, he snarled with such anger that they were silenced almost instantly. Do you even know why you failed? Does the answer start with a W? An irate Artemis snapped back. She was tired to the antics of an idiot. She had failed a mission. She, truth be told, simply couldn't take this. Because we had a decent plan that would have worked if somebody hadn't fucked things up. Her comments, of course, abraded Wally's already bruised ego, and the brunette was all too ready to yell back. I said I was sorry. Christ, would you get off your damned horse? Everyone makes mistakes. Enough. Calder cut in, leveling a harsh glare at the two. We failed. It matters not who caused it or how. The point is that the team failed. All we can do now is understand why we failed and know how we can rectify this in future. Calder's right. Raven sighed as she ran her hand through her hair. So let's just hear Naruto out. The shinobi's response was to nod slightly at the magic user before fixing them with an appraising look. Today's simulation parameters were simple. Get in, get the hostage, and get out within a specified time frame. Your decision, Calder, to take time out to plot your infiltration was an excellent one. Rushing headfirst into enemy territory is a potential danger waiting to happen.
As a team, your stealth methods weren't superb, but that was why I chose this kind of task for you. Now that I know where to start, I can begin to hone your stealth methods. Finally, your rally in the final moments of the simulation shows your capability to adapt to situations. He paused to take in air as his appraising look became a disappointed stare that was focused on both Artemis and Wally. But you failed. And for two main reasons.
1. His gaze, without any physical movement, pinned in Calder as surely as it had the team's troublemaker duo. I expected you guys, those pinned by the stare knew he was talking to them, to know better than to pour all your resources into a single focused rescue attempt. Particularly not one where the terms of release are set by the enemy. By the time he was halfway through, Calder and had already guessed what their flaw was, as evidenced by the grimaces on their faces, one that was soon shared by the other two. Connor, though, felt lost and voiced his confusion. It was Kaguya that answered him. You were all thinking too linearly, so to speak. In a hostage situation, you may not have a clue why a hostage is being held. As such, you need to move fast and stealthily to ensure that the hostage suffers as minimally as possible.
To do that, you have to put yourself in the enemy's shoes, try to figure out why the hostage was taken, how much time you have, how much security you will have to deal with. With that in mind, you'll realize that a single attack will rarely get you to your target, because even if you do have superior numbers or offensive capabilities, a prepared enemy likely knows those capabilities and is prepared to counter them.
As a team with Batman, you've gone up against the Joker. Naruto continued. How did Batman have you deal with hostage situations? We'd usually split up. The youngest in the room admitted. I'd head for the hostages while he took down any security, acting as a distraction. Exactly. A singular attack in rescue missions typically doesn't work for the same reason you guys failed today. Your enemy could simply bog you down in so many attacks that by the time you get past the attacks, the hostages have been moved. Or worse. Calder nodded. We will not forget this.
Ensure that you don't. Naruto emphasized. Functioning as a Black Ops unit means you'll need to move fast and smart. Never forget that. Now, the rest of you are free to do as you wish. I need to talk to Artemis and Wally.
With nods of assent, the rest of the team broke apart, leaving Naruto, Kaguya, Artemis and Wally.
Don't be too harsh on them, him. Kaguya smiled at her bodyguard, though the two could see that the smile didn't reach her eyes. It wasn't the first sign they'd noticed since they had arrived earlier in the evening that hinted at a possible tension between the two.
I'll try. Naruto grunted noncommittally, no promises. With the short exchange done, the white-haired princess walked off to join the rest of the team, and Naruto turned to the two left. I think by now you two realize that you are the second reason the team failed this mission? Oh hell no. Artemis swiftly rejoined. I followed the plan. It may have been flawed, but I followed. The Wallman, on the other hand, felt too big to do something so trivial. I said I was sorry. The speedster exploded. I made a mistake, I messed up.
Big time. She cut in with a sneer that stoked the brunette's rage even higher.
How am I supposed to work with someone who antagonizes me at every turn? You should have thought of that before antagonizing her for something completely out of her control. Naruto answered dispassionately. Wally turned to stare at the blonde bewilderedly. I antagonized her? Me? You've harbored a grudge against her from the moment she stated that she was to be the newest addition to the team instead of Speedy, whom you would have preferred. The cold manner in which the blonde delivered his point served to blindside the speedster thoroughly. I mean yeah, I would have preferred Speedy, but I didn't antagonize her for it. She was the one who acted all smartass and know-it-all alike. If you'd spent even a day observing her without your rose-tinted glasses, you'd see that smartass is her default setting. The shinobi shrugged, choosing not to add in new and uncomfortable situations out of his assessment. And she never tried to act like a know-it-all. She just knew more than you expected, and you felt annoyed by that too.
While the young speedster struggled to come to terms with his words, the shinobi turned to stare just as coolly at a smirking Artemis. You're not much better, you know. The blonde archer just arched an eyebrow. Wally may antagonize you because you aren't his premier choice of a new teammate, but you chose not to present yourself in the best possible manner. Artemis scoffed. Sure. Let him act like an asshole and I should play the saint. Well, too bad, I suck at acting. I never said you shouldn't stand your ground against him. Naruto replied. But actively throwing sarcastic jibes at him didn't help, now did it? It didn't, and she knew it as well as he did, but Artemis Croc had stubbornness engraved on her genetic template.
So I should stand my ground while not defending myself. Dream on Minato. She all but spat the name he'd first given her when they had first met. And why do you even care? Since my inclusion into this team, you've let it be known that Kagaya is your first priority, so why do you care whether or not we work as a team? Cause I'm pretty sure that if your princess were to be in danger, you'd just hit the gas and get her out of there. A fact I've never once denied. The shinobi agreed with a shrug. As to why I bother with you, well, suffice it to say that I've lost enough friends and teammates. However I will do my best to ensure that those I consider to be either are well protected. With that said, he stuffed both hands into the pockets of the green cargo shorts he had on and turned to walk out of the room. I thought I would be tearing into both of you for your baseless mutual dislike of each other, but now I'll just ask a simple question.
He paused and turned to them, his eyes seemingly glowing with the conviction of what he was about to say to them. Are you willing to lose your teammates because you wouldn't work together?
Line break. Watching as he walked out of the training room, had to admit that, for the first time to his knowledge, Naruto's mind seemed to be somewhere else. Over the course of their interaction since the Sumdak incident, the Dark Knight's protege had come to realize that, regardless of how nonchalant or laid back the blonde might seem to be, Naruto possessed a degree of awareness about his surroundings that probably only the likes of Batman and Deathstroke could match. Even the few times it seemed Wally had successfully pranked him revealed the truth. He was fully aware but chose to simply take the prank for fun's sake. This was quite different. He hadn't bothered to take his usual scan of the location with a glance as he usually did, and he hadn't registered S presence at all. And it isn't because Kagaya isn't around. Thought as he watched the blonde approach. I've seen him exhibit the same awareness even without her being close by. Something's definitely happened between him and Kagaya. That was the only logical explanation for this absent-mindedness. Though the bodyguard and the princess had walked in looking as they usually did, some members of the team, himself included, had felt a slight tension between the two. Let's just hope they get it over with soon enough. Sighed as he pushed off the wall to get close to the approaching blonde. Yo, fishcake. It's Maelstrom. The bodyguard shot back, though the retort lacked any heat. I can't believe I answered you. A smug smirk shone on S' face as he fell into step beside Naruto. Told you I'd catch you again. I just needed a little moment of weakness. You just jumped to number 3 on the list. Worth it. The smirk grew. Knowing the blonde as he now did, the young teen knew that ranking so high on the prank list meant he'd be on the receiving end of a humiliating prank, but totally worth it. So, is there a reason why you ambushed me? Just wondering how long before I'd have to call Calder to help me drag those two up to the med bay. My money was on 30 minutes. An eyebrow quirked upward, clearly amused. Any takers? Raven said they wouldn't last beyond 10 minutes. Connor went for 12 if Wally ever got round to listening to Artemis, and McGann came straight out of left field. Said you'd talk to them, get them to understand something and then leave. The blonde was silent for a second or two before bursting out in a loud peal of laughter. Raven? McGann? Betting? Couldn't help a few snickers slipping out as well. Naruto's laugh was so infectious. Yeah, you must be a bad influence. Right. The blonde drawled as his laughter tapered off. Well, I guess you know who won this time. Yeah. A comfortable silence descended, one that Naruto was all too willing to simply enjoy until spoke up. So, what did you tell them? Did you also bet on what I tell them? The shinobi asked. Or is this just your dreadfully unsubtle way of fishing? Could be the second. The boy wonder shrugged noncommittally. He knew by now that the blonde would simply redirect and deflect every question he had cheerfully if he didn't come clean when confronted. Gonna share? The blonde sighed as they walked into the rec room and made a beeline for a sofa. Well, he grunted as he flopped onto the furniture. Well, Basically, I pointed out how stupid they were both being and forced them to understand the possible consequences of their actions by asking a simple question. Thanks to his vast experience in probing the blonde, knew that the bodyguard was about to share a bit more than he'd expected, so he settled into a couch, fully attentive. They've both got their flaws, those two. Wally's rash. Not reckless. The bird quirked an eyebrow. Nah. Connor's reckless, with the whole, I'm damned near invincible so I wade into the firefight, attitude. Wally, though, knows most of his limits. He just goes along with the best idea to click in his head cause he thinks he's fast enough to sidestep any surprises. To me, that's being rash. Artemis, on the other hand, can be pretty calculative, but her flaws are rooted in two places. 1. She's got pride, and 2. She's got a temper. Couple those two together and pit them against Wally's motormouth and got the message. Beyond that, though, they built horrible first impressions of each other. Naruto continued. Wally wanted Speedy over Artemis and she took him to be a proud idiot that hates her existence. That, more than even their considerably volatile flaws, set them on a collision course that they towed like mules with blinders on while swearing that they'd never interact beyond sarcastic jibes and insults. Sounds like you've been there before. A wry smile stretched the blonde's features. I was the proud idiot. The other guy was the equally proud guy with one hell of an attitude. We collided a few times but were somehow able to work as a team in the thick of things. Thing is, if issues like that aren't dealt with in a controlled environment, then, regardless of how lucky you are, that luck will run out. The blonde sighed. And in a group as large as this, well, luck tends to run out faster if it's forced to spread itself. It was only his training to control his impulses that held the bird from blurting out the question on his mind. How large was your group when your luck ran out? Hey guys, your attention's needed up top. Batman's here. Cyborg called out over the mountain's PA system. Get out of that couch, Blondie. Oh, go hack a database. The blonde scowled as he turned over and pulled an imaginary blanket over his head. That was weak, man. Even for you. The mecha human's laugh rang out. Fine. Line. Break. So the mission today's to find some old geezer who can access a really powerful artifact. Or, should said old geezer be a no-show, find the really powerful artifact. That sum it up nicely? With a bow on top. Connor scoffed at Naruto's words as he reviewed the mission briefing displayed on the screen. Not sure I want to spend time looking for an old man that likely just chose to take a few days off for himself. Perhaps that was his intention. Batman stated as he locked eyes with the Kryptonian clone. Be that as it may, though, this will be an excellent opportunity to expose some of you to magic. He paused to glare a snickering Wally into silence. As such, Connor, McGann, Wally, Artemis, and Calder will be the ones executing this mission. You leave in 2 minutes. You may be able to catch a trail if you head out as soon as possible and push the ship to go as fast as it can. You know, I can tell that you tossed in that final sentence to stall any questions. Naruto said as the rest of the team headed off to prepare for their mission. Sounds like you don't want them to know what we'll be doing. There's nothing secretive about the mission I have for the three of you. The Dark Knight replied as he brought up a new file on the computer. The image on the file was a portrait of a red-headed woman with forest green eyes. This is Poison Ivy, an eco-terrorist I've encountered a number of times. 2 years ago, she decided to seclude herself away from the world. When I asked why, she claimed that she had come to the realization that humanity would be its own end, so she had no reason to hurry. Instead, she created a veritable Garden of Eden from a barren island and chose to live there. She seems decent. Kagaya studied the file on the woman. What do you need us for? A year ago she came back to Gotham with a vengeance. It took me close to 6 hours to subdue her, and during that time, she never said a word. It was a month later, while she was in Arkham, that I pieced together her reason. A weapons development company targeted her Eden, wrongfully deeming it devoid of human life, and used it as a test site. Batman paused as Naruto rubbed his temples and swore. The assault on her Eden must have made her decide to seek retribution. Oh, for the love of... How stupid can one group of people be? Raven groaned quietly. Who the hell chooses to destroy an island teeming with plant life? What, were there no more crags and barren rock outcroppings in the ocean? I'll hazard a guess and say that she'd discovered who the bosses are and was out for blood. Kagaya stated factually. Then you came along and carted her off. The Dark Knight nodded. 3 out of the 5 will be at the Gotham by Gaslight event that's starting by 7:30 this evening. Your mission is to keep an eye on them and protect them should the need arise. The breakout at Ark, he recalled Chloe's heads up 2 nights ago. You're certain you won't need help taking down the others? The Dark Knight entered a series of commands, bringing up a list of the inmates released during the mass breakout with some names highlighted in red. I've caught the highlighted ones and I intend to get the others. Why aren't they dead? It was completely unexpected. One moment Naruto had been reading through the list and in the next it felt like he was the distilled form of all the hate in the world. Only Kagaya had experienced this. Back at the Sumdak facility's experimentation zone, and even then it hadn't been so overpowering. You'll have to explain yourself. The Dark Knight replied coolly. Why isn't who dead? Josh. Laszlo Valentin. The Joker. The blonde said, his voice never wavering from the almost casual tone it maintained. Before we moved to the harbor, I'd jog a couple of miles around the warehouse in the morning, and I remember overhearing, on separate occasions, the kind of sadistic pleasure those three obtained from hurting people. So I had to ask, why aren't they dead? If the tension in the room was simply noticeable before, it became almost tangible when Batman answered the shinobi. I'm uncertain how things are run on your world, but we don't just kill people. In spite of the obvious crimes they've committed, Naruto cut in, his tone hardening as his rage spiked. Even if the people in question take pleasure in destroying people's lives? Even criminals deserve a chance at redemption. Batman shot back. It is wrong to simply kill them off without giving them a chance at redeeming themselves. And if after more than 5 chances, Naruto rejoined harshly. Josh still killed people the last time he was out. If I recall correctly, Huss' words when he was taken in were, still gonna get out, still gonna rack up a tally. Does that sound like someone on the path to redemption? Or Valentine, who scars his victims and destroys their very being? Does that sound like a man who seeks redemption? By the end of his counter, the blonde's voice had climbed up to an almost deafening pitch, and so, by the time he stopped, the silence provided a dark contrast. On my world there are prisons. We do take prisoners, not simply butchering those who go against the law. Naruto replied, his voice almost a whisper. But there are those who have to die. A man who tortures his victims and takes pleasure in doing so has to die. A man who lives to break people and turn them into farces of humanity need to die. A man who creates chaos and revels in the carnage needs to be removed. He turned and started walking toward the exit. Or else, like a diseased limb left unchecked, they will destroy all that we hold dear. I'll go change into something decent. Tickets? I brought clothes for the 3 of you and the tickets are digital. I've sent them to your emails and I'll have a limo waiting on you at the Grand Tulip Hotel. Rooms 640 through 642. The Dark Knight grunted. Then, just before the blonde walked out of the room, if we sink down to their level then we are no different from them. There must have been someone you sought to save from himself. Something about the man's words seemed to have struck the blonde, making him stand stock still. Then, he spoke. I did. But those men, they've chosen their path. A surgeon cutting off a diseased arm does so for the good of the whole body. Don't worry, though. I won't start a campaign or anything and start killing them off. When in Rome, do as the Romans write. Line, break. A gentle tap at the door was all the warning Naruto got before she walked in. Do you mind helping me with the zipper? We're the only ones left here till Cyborg gets back and I can't find Kaguya. Raven, the blonde asked, a bit taken aback by her sudden appearance as well as her appearance. He'd always known that, like Donna and the other girls on the team, she had the potential to be a stunner, but even he had to admit that he was not expecting to be this stunned. She had styled her hair so that it no longer hung loosely around her face but now framed an expertly, yet tastefully made up, face like a shimmering black curtain. Her dress, a lavender-trimmed violet dress that fit her wonderfully without clinging to her body unnecessarily. It sported abstract, almost smoke-like patterns that were designed to draw the eye and finished it off with a pair of comfortably fashionable violet slippers. With the tiny purple gem gleaming in the center of her forehead, she seemed almost ethereal. It didn't exactly align with the Gotham by Gaslight suggested dress code but fit perfectly with her cover, where he was playing bodyguard to Kaguya's expatriate. Raven was to be the guide, said, expatriate, had funded. So what if she seemed small? Blame genetics. Wow, Raven. He breathed softly after taking in her look. You look amazing. Wally will be crushed that he didn't get to see you like this. Thanks, she smiled shyly as she tucked the hair at her right temple behind her ear. I might actually get a picture taken. I don't get to dress up too often. And you look great too. The blonde arched an eyebrow and tossed a glance at the mirror to his side. Apart from the 3-piece suit he now sported, he could only see himself as he always did. Plain old Uzumaki Naruto. Sure, the whiskers were concealed by a bit of makeup, thanks to Ino and Anko teaching his female form the art of seduction from a feminine point of view. Rather than a spot of localized transformation, and his hair was now a slicked back mass of red hair, but it made no difference to him. Clearly you aren't seeing what I am. She flashed him a grin. Pretty sure Artemis would give her bow to see you all dressed up. The blonde just snorted as he moved over to help with the zipper. I think you're dreaming. Miss Blondie still hates my guts for not telling her my actual name back then. Gee, I did not think that a bodyguard, trained in everything from cordon bleu cooking to emergency first aid and a special brand of martial arts, could be so oblivious. She smirked as he pulled up the zipper and turned her around to adjust the dress to fit better on her shoulders. The Uzumaki wiped away an imaginary tear. Who'd have thought that my cute baby sister would grow up to look so beautiful? Now where'd I stash my desert eagle? I fear I'm going to need something with a bit more stopping power than a run-of-the-mill sidearm to keep those nasty boys away. Oh ha ha. She huffed, feeling slightly put out yet oddly pleased by his comment. So, Naruto asked as he walked back to the seat he was in before she walked in, why are you really here? The question caught her unawares as she thought she believed that he hadn't figured her out yet. Don't be so surprised. He smiled easily, gesturing at the seat beside him. You normally avoid seeking me out for talks, and I know that if you really wanted to, you would have waited for either Kagaya or Cyborg. So, why did you come here? I mean. The young magic user stammered a bit before dropping into the proffered seat and sighing. I just wanted to know why you had such a negative reaction to those men. I mean, I do understand some of the points you raised, but I mean You've never been so close to someone who hates to such a degree that the air thrums with it. Naruto cut in with a grim smile stretching his features. You've never been so close to such hate that your own body tries to shut itself down to protect your mind, that it? Silence. Then, pretty much, yeah. Silence again, almost deafening in its totality. I understand if you don't want to talk, Victor Josh. Laszlo Valentin. The Joker. Hidan of Yugakure. Orochimaru, the Snake Sanin. Yakushi Kabuto. The first three names, from this world, mirror an aspect of the second three, from my world. Josh enjoys killing, Hidan basked in the pain he caused, as much to himself as to others. Valentin and Orochimaru both enjoy breaking people and turning them in to be used as they see fit. And the other guy? Raven asked quietly. The one you likened to the Joker? Yakushi Kabuto. He spat out the name with such venom that Raven almost wished she hadn't asked. Like the Joker, Kabuto thrived on chaos. Even though she could feel the hatred he carried for the Batman's enemies, it was only then that she understood why. Valentin and the other two. They remind you of the darkness of your home, don't they? The blonde laughed dryly. That obvious, huh? Not really, she admitted. I only pieced it together a few moments ago. So, what now? I don't quite understand you. I mean, what will you do now? About those men? The blonde sat back and sighed. I suppose that's a good question. Like said to Batman, I won't go hunting for them and others like them. Whether I like it or not, they aren't within my jurisdiction, so to speak. At the same time, they've left such a wake of death and pain. I guess the best I can do is to ensure that the day they cross Kagaya is the day they cease to be a threat. Line, break the Grand Tulip Hotel, room 641. Kaguya's pav watching him work is honestly more interesting than I could have expected, particularly considering the fact that he's spent the past 10 minutes drawing seals. From his description, he's creating a dual-layered stasis seal in preparation for when we bring in Poison Ivy. Apparently, his lack of knowledge about how the woman utilizes her abilities has made him cautious. The first sealing matrix, drawn on a blank scroll that goes under the hotel bed and extends half a meter out to the left and the right, is structured to keep her body in stasis, while the second, positioned to intercept the second at perfect right angles down the center, will keep her mind in stasis. And, done, he breathes as he slowly stands and leans over backward, enjoying the satisfying pops his joints make as they snap back into place. Finally. Just in time, too. Raven adds as she picks up a purple shawl and wraps it around her shoulders. The limo will be here any moment. In that case, we need to go over our plan of action. Naruto says as he seals away his equipment. I spoke to Cyborg before we left and got him to slip us two vital things. The first's a map of the location we'll be heading to soon, and, frankly, I can't see us having an opportunity to switch our gear once we're in. Cameras? I ask, though I'm certain that I already know the answer to that. A load of them. He confirms with only the barest of glances at me. All stuffed in prime spots and ensuring that they won't have a blind spot. Gee, paranoid much? Raven asks with an eye roll, and I find myself agreeing with the young mage even though I can understand why the organizers seem so paranoid. It's Gotham. Naruto shrugs and he somehow captures the truth of the matter in that simple gesture. Anyway, even with the presence of those men, we aren't certain that Ivy will show up, so I've thought up a plan that shouldn't require us going all out. And if we have to? I ask. In response, he just pulls out a plain silver cube whose surface was broken only by the protrusion of a red button on its upward-facing side. The second thing I got from Cyborg. An EMP grenade. Lights, cameras, action. Raven grinned. Line, break Batcave. Gotham, perhaps you should head out now, Master Bruce. Tonight promises to be quite interesting and I feel you should return early to rest well. After all, I do believe you haven't cancelled your meeting tomorrow with Miss O'Neill. Alfred stated as he walked into the cave. His charge, in a position that was repeated nightly, was seated before the cave's computer, cowled down, analyzing the results of the simulations he'd spent most of the previous night running. She will be most displeased if you miss yet another appointment. Why, she might just feel incensed enough to give you a bit of bad press on her blog. It was a testament to how much focus he was putting into whatever he was studying that the unmasked bat replied with a simple, "I'll deal with April." The older gentleman chose to keep his silence a while longer as he continued forward till he stood beside, and just a step behind, his charge. A passing glance was enough to tell him the subject of the night's study. Still on Uzumaki? I thought you had Master Grayson on him. I do have watching him, Bruce replied. Together with Canary's report, Footage from the cameras in the mount and the safe house they bunked in before moving out and personal interaction with him. I have a decent chunk of data about him. To Alfred, though, Bruce sounded tired, tense and just a bit frustrated. And what does it all point to? The Dark Knight sat forward and rested his chin on his palms. Prior to a discussion we had today? Nothing negative. What happened today? Suffice it to say that he is all too willing to kill some of the criminals we have here. Bruce replied. He displayed a tremendous degree of hate toward Josh, Professor Pig and the Joker in particular. What did he say? Basically, he considers them to be the gangrene on the society's limb that needs to be cut off before they infect other, more crucial parts of the society. The Dark Knight scowled as he recalled the, truthfully, very valid points the blonde had raised earlier in the day. However, he agreed to not go out hunting for them. Well, he sounds decent. Alfred shrugged. So, besides that, why the continuous and, dare I say it, obsessive analysis? Because the data points toward the fact that he has next to no personal ambition or goal beyond ensuring the safety of his companion, Kagaya. That sounded odd. Isn't that a good thing? The fact that he exhibits such a protective tendency seems like a plus to me. Alfred, even you have goals and ambitions. One could argue that they revolve around you, Master Bruce. Bruce shook his head as he typed in a command and brought up the textual format of his first conversation with the two off-worlders. You still have personal goals and ambitions. Uzumaki has never hinted toward such. What is it that you fear, Master Bruce? He admits that before they fell into our world, Kagaya was controlled in some way, leading to his having to fight her. My fear is that in a world with so many powerful and skilled telepaths she may be manipulated into working against the League. Even a child could see where the Dark Knight was leaning toward, and Alfred was well beyond such an age. You fear that he will support her in such a scenario. But, according to their words, he stood against her when such a thing happened on their world. He doesn't seem like one to ignore his own moral code to follow someone blindly, not even one he was sworn to protect. I know how far-fetched that seems, but it's a possibility. Don't you feel you might be overthinking this? Alfred asked. After all, bar his seeming lack of ambitions, even you have admitted that he has been a great deal of help to the team you assembled. Perhaps his seeming lack of ambitions is stemmed in the fact that his only goal from a young age has been to protect his princess? Bruce sighed as he sat forward and rubbed his temples. I've considered all that, Alfred. Sometimes it seems like your opinion is the right one, particularly because he has repeatedly admitted that his major motivation for training the team has been Kaguya's presence on the team. It seems pretty direct on the surface. I sense a, but, coming. Something doesn't still add up, and for the life of me, I can't figure it out. Line, break Gotham by Gaslight Naruto's POV. Watching Kagaya and Raven mingle with the people in the hall as I hover a few steps ahead of them, scanning the area for threats, when I'm really only trying to find a single target, reminds me so much of a mission Tenten, Ino and I had taken a few months before the war began. Then, I was searching for the would-be assassin of a noble Ino was posing as while Tenten played the handmaid. Of course, as with damn near every M assigned to, that mission went snafu in a flash. The assassin turned out to be the only member of the noble's court that actually wanted to protect said noble, and the wife was the ringleader of the coup. I am really hoping that I finally get a break from that pseudo-curse, because I don't want to live this new life with that threat hanging over my head. Since nothing stands out to me, I turn my attention back on my charges. Kagaya is, quite obviously, in her element as she smoothly converses with the various people around her, looking absolutely radiant in the lavender gown Batman chose for her. She's pulling people into her wake with skill even Toki couldn't have summoned. A smile here, a laugh there, a gentle touch showing interest in a conversation. She's undoubtedly an expert in this field, and she's carrying Raven along each step of the way without making her feel awkward. At the same time, she's fully on guard, her eyes never truly staying still, taking in everything within her line of sight with a methodical, grid-by-grid scan. Raven's trying to do the same, true, but I can see that she's overwhelmed by the sheer amount of detail she has to deal with. Gonna have to tell Canary about this so we can figure out how to improve the team in this. Well, since the ladies can take care of themselves, I might as well find a less rowdy place to stay. It takes a few seconds to decide, but then I spot a face that I'm pretty certain shouldn't be here. Paula Croc. Michael's neighbor. Yeah, even now I find it a bit odd how that came about. I mean, considering how big Gotham is, what are the odds of him finding an apartment just 2 doors away from Artemis's mom? Maneuvering my way around the throng, I finally make it to the shadowed little alcove and stand just a few feet away, my eyes still sweeping around the room to keep up the charade. Evening, ma'am. Evening. She sounds tired, and I can hear the tiniest bit of resignation in her tone. Like she's being forced to do something she doesn't want to, and I take that as an excuse to finally study her. She's wearing a forest green gown that stretches from just below her shoulders to her ankles. It's quite masterfully designed such that, together with the wheelchair's design, makes it seem like he's simply taking a rest off her feet. Her face, while showing her Asiatic heritage, and, beneath the makeup, I can see hints of Artemis in there. Not enough to scream, mother-daughter, but certainly enough for one to realize within moment that they are related. All of this pales in comparison to what I see in her eyes. That tiredness I heard in her voice. Make that bone-deep weariness. Through her eyes, I see that she's been through the ringer and now she's only fighting for a dream she fears may be out of her reach. It's like looking into the eyes of some of the older kunoichi back home. In fact, for a few seconds, her features are superimposed upon by Kurenai sensei's in the first few months after Asuma sensei's death. I've been told that staring at a woman in public is quite rude, she says, snapping me out of my thoughts. Though her words should sound recriminatory, she's able to say it without sounding impolite. In fact, it sounds almost like a joke. So I smile and apologize. It's just, your eyes. My eyes. She smiles and, even though it doesn't reach her eyes, it's still a beautiful smile. Sounds like you have strange affectations. It is said in a teasing tone that is meant to embarrass the target into backing off, something I've become familiar with and so it has no effect on me. Perhaps. But in this line of work one learns to quickly study others and I found that, true to the old saying, the eyes are windows to the soul. For the first time, a bit of mirth enters her eyes and seems to brighten her features. Are you a bodyguard or a shrink? Sometimes, I find myself asking the same question. I shrug. Haven't found an answer yet, I'm afraid. She hums noncommittally and an easy silence falls between us. I use the opportunity to observe Kaguya and Raven who, having made the rounds, have found a table to sit at while she hails a waiter a few feet away. I'm surprised that you aren't with your charges, she says as she picks 2 champagne flutes off the tray and offers me one. I found that staying close to the principal often helps, at the very least, it helps more than being a couple of feet away. I take a sip of the drink before replying, perhaps, but my charge didn't even want a guard. Her father insisted and she agreed on the condition that I stay out of sight as much as possible. Besides, I shrug before downing the rest of the drink. This is a pretty good spot to watch from. And the company's not bad. Even if I'm still trying to figure out why said company's not with her partner. As much as I'm enjoying this conversation, though, I'm getting a bit antsy. On Kaguya's suggestion, we'd walked in 10 minutes late allowing me to seed clones around as an early detection system. Now, almost 20 minutes since then, there's been no word from them. Of course, since this event is slated to last about 3 hours, perhaps old habits are just re-emerging. Still, I slip a hand into my pants pocket to check if it's still there. It is. I told my husband that I didn't want to come today, she says, much more subdued than before. Perhaps I didn't want to have people see me like this, but it was mostly because I did not want to have anything to do with the man he has become. Needless to say, he didn't listen. I'm not surprised by her words. While Michael is yet to figure out her husband's identity, Paula has never said anything good about the man that left her in the small apartment with her daughter. Apparently, the business partners he wishes to meet are so important that he's decided to blow the dust off his old trophy for an exhibition. Well, I'd call him an asshole, but, at that moment, the memories of a clone hit. Thanks to years of experiencing such, my mouth pretty much continues the conversation on its own while I focus on the influx of information. It was one of the 2 I had utilizing natural energy to boost their sensory perception and it had just found a hit, 300 meters underground and closing in fast. A quick glance at Kaguya shows that she has seen it and has subtly alerted Raven. Good. Miss, I'm going to need you to wheel your way over toward the exit. I say as I pull my hand of my pocket with the deck of cards I had stashed in it back at the hotel. Something feels off. A second influx of memories crashes into me. Shit, she's less than 50 feet away. I pull Paula's wheelchair down, diving with it as well. Just before I hit the ground, I see that Raven's levitated a few tables to act as a barrier for herself, Kaguya and the few others around them. As I hit the ground, the floor rumbles and an explosive retort drowns out all other sounds. Dust is sent flying about as debris rains down over us. It goes on like this for a few more moments before a deathly calm settles over the hall. Pow miss. I correct myself as I slowly lift my head to glance about. People seem dazed but okay and are only now beginning to notice the large flower bud just in front of the center stage. Panic is about to set in and I need to get Artemis' mom out of here. Then, 3 vines lash through the crowd and snap around 3 men's neck before dragging them forward until they're dangling before the bud, their feet barely resting on the ground. That's the cue for everyone to begin screaming and panicking. Right as the first scream splits the air, the power to the building shorts out and, almost instantly, a barrage of spells tear through the entrance wall of the hall, adding to the cacophony. In the few seconds it takes for the emergency lights to kick in, I create a clone that carries Artemis' mom out of the building while I pull up the half mask I'd worn beneath my dress shirt. By the time the emergency power comes on, Kaguya is already by the greatly expanded exit and, together with a clone and Raven from inside the hally rest of the crowd out. With the evacuation going according to plan, I throw away the packaging of the deck in my hands as I slowly make my way toward the spectacle up at the stage. The men are still there, their faces slowly turning blue thanks to the vines constricting their throats, but I can see that Ivy's not quite ready to kill them yet. I stop about 10 feet to the left of the bud, hiding behind a large chunk of rock that provides a clear shot at all 3 men and the flower bud. Apostles of Death's Head, a melodious voice chants solemnly as the flower bud blooms into a huge rose. Fall to the ground in the sleeping forest. Ho. Lee. Shit. The woman seating at the center of the rose like some mystical queen of the forest easily cracks the top 2% of beautiful women I've ever seen. Heck, maybe even the much coveted 1%. You three, sitting in your castles of steel girder and glass walls, chose to destroy the home I created for myself. Her eyes aren't open and her tone isn't harsh. In fact, she almost sounds uncaring even as the men are slowly dragged forward until they are forced to kneel at her feet just a scant few centimeters away from the rose throne. In your quest to increase your wealth, prestige and influence, you had already destroyed great swaths of nature, of forest grander and greater and older than you could even think of. I prepare the cards in my hands even as I create a clone that swiftly begins to gather natural energy. She's so focused on her captives that she either doesn't sense it or she chooses to ignore it. Either way, I'm prepared. And when that wasn't enough for you, you sent your abominations to my home. The rose angles itself downward as a clump of roots push up out of the ground to form a stairway for her. Every move she makes oozes sheer sexuality as she moves to stand before the captives. The time has come for you to fall. As she speaks, the vines rise higher and higher, tightening until the men are dangling in the air, held up only by the murderous plant matter. I make my move, flicking out my wrist and sending 3 cards flying out to embed themselves about halfway into the vines a safe distance from the captive men. A split second later, the cards, altered by a few seals to act like those of a character I saw in a cartoon, blow up, freeing the men and drawing the full weight of her attention onto my shoulders. I don't have anything against you, young man. She sighs, sounding disappointed by my interference. Now please, leave and let me finish with them. A single tap to my clone's shoulder and it dispels, transferring the gathered energy to me. It is enough to last about 15 minutes, enough time to wrap things up here. Her connection to nature is certainly quite powerful judging by her reaction. Very well then, I wished it didn't have to be this way. The attacks, when they come, are fast and brutally relentless. With little more than a thought, she sends vines the size of trees lashing out at me, each whipping out of the ground and doing their damnedest to either crush me or smack me into a wall. As I twist around one of them, I glance at the ground where the men were. Nothing. Ravens played her part in getting them out perfectly. As I kick off another attack, I sense that she's tunneling beneath the ground, searching for her targets. A perfect opportunity. I battle my way through the dense forestry she's using to protect herself as she searches for her prey, flicking out cards to blow open holes that I thread as I get closer and closer. Just as I break through the final barrier, a new vine tries to ram me from a blind spot. I twist around and flick 2 cards at it, blowing through it completely before continuing my spin to face her. Again I send 2 of the cards out, this time to lay just a few feet away from her. By the time she realizes what's going on, they detonate, sending her flying out of the cocoon of vines. Not sparing a moment, I land and race toward her, compressing the sage chakra into my index fingertips as I move so that, by the time I get to her, my technique is ready. Severance of the Sage's Bind. The penultimate technique available to all sages trained by the Elemental Nation's summon clans. The severance acts as a way for a sage to temporarily block out another's connection to nature. Taught to me by old man Fukasaku on Mount Myobokuzan. It was a trick we'd used on Madara early on in the war. It had worked, but then the bastard Uchiha just switched tactics and dominated Kurabi and I until Hashirama's cells reformed the link. Here, though, Ivy doesn't stand a chance. The sage chakra I pump into her destabilizes her own internal energies and renders her abilities dormant. I can actually feel her powers going into a hibernation state as her link to nature shuts down. Then, everything goes blank. Line, break Naruto's path. Looking at my translucent hand, or should I say looking through, I have to admit that this is quite interesting. A quick glance at my surroundings confirms my initial thoughts on my location. Somehow, I've been transported into a memory. Mommy, look what I found. I turned to the sound in time to see a young child, possibly 8 but definitely no older than 10. Race through the doorway to the ratty sofa a few feet away where she kneels and carefully opens her palms to show the woman in the sofa a freshly cut tulip. Without a shadow of doubt, the woman in the sofa is related to Poison Ivy. In fact, knowing that this is a memory, I'm pretty damn certain that she is Ivy's birth mother. The resemblance is so strong. However, where Ivy oozes sheer sexuality, this woman seems more like Paula. Just damn tired. She's wearing a plain blue t-shirt on a pair of faded jeans and her hands are busy knitting something. Judging by the size, I'd say the end product will be for Chibi Ivy. Well, that's a beautiful flower, Pamela. She smiles as she gently puts her knitting wear to the side and turns to focus on her daughter. She gingerly takes the flower from the now named Pamela and slowly fits it into the young girl's hair. You look just like a forest nymph. The young girl slaps her hands over her mouth and giggles happily, bringing a soft smile onto her mother's face. For those few moments, all seems good and perfect with the world. Then, like the explosive retort of a gun, The sound of a car door being slammed echoes through the small apartment. "Daddy!" Pamela yells happily and she bounces around the room like a bunny on a sugar high. She seems so happy that her father is back, a stark contrast from the weary guardedness of her mother. The door opens to reveal a young man, likely a year older than Pamela's mother, with deep-set brown eyes and black hair. His arms are toned, like he spends a lot of time lifting and pushing things, but he's also got a bit of a gut similar to old man Tezuna's. "Pammy." He smiles happily as his daughter slams into his legs like a ballistic missile. As he lifts her up, I smell the alcohol on his breath, confirming that yes, the gut's a beer belly. "How are you?" "I'm fine, Daddy." Pamela giggles again as she pushes away from his hug. "Look, Daddy, look what I found." The scene continues with Pamela laughing and enjoying her father's presence while her mother simply turns to continue her knitting. "Hey Pammy, why don't you go show Kathy your find?" her father suggests as he walks over to stand by her mother's side. "But change your clothes first, yeah? Go for your flower dress, it'll go with your find." The young girl beams happily at the suggestion and races out of the room, drawing my perception along with her only for her to stop just after rounding the bend that takes her out of her parents' sight. Sneaky little bugger, my inner prankster thinks even as the rest of my consciousness focuses on the implications of her actions. A spat is about to go down and, clearly, not for the first time. "Angela." "Welcome back, James. You didn't greet me when I came in." I was preoccupied. With what? Trying to figure out how Anderson came by today. "And I wasn't sure if you were sober or not." The response is so detached and clinically delivered that I feel like she wouldn't have been surprised if he'd come in roaring drunk. Though, judging by the time, I felt safe leaving Pamela to welcome you. A deep inhale, held in for a few seconds, then an exhale. What did Anderson want? What do you owe him? I see Pamela's arms tense in readiness for something and, right then, I see a major parallel between the two of us. We both wear masks to hide how perceptive we are of our environment. Whatever she tensed for doesn't come, and so she tentatively relaxes. "Tell him that I'll have his money ready by Friday." A dry, derisive laugh rings out of the room. "How? With your shitty job?" The laugh climbs higher in pitch. "Don't be a fool, James. You can't make anywhere near the amount you need in time. And that's not counting your little drinking problem in." "Shut up." The bark of rage shocks Pamela so much that she jerks back, races away to a small room and throws herself into a corner and begins crying such tears of pain that I'm racked by a desperate urge to gather her into my arms and console her. Then, everything goes blank for a few seconds before a new environment emerges. This time, the apartment seems different from the last one. It's bigger, for one, and seems more upscale than the last. An older Pamela, probably in her early teens, walks in with her backpack slung over a shoulder. "I'm back." Silence is the only response she gets, so she just huffs and marches to a room, definitely hers going by the style of decor, and drops her backpack. She starts walking out of the room before pausing and walking back. A quick rifle through her backpack and she pulls out a notebook before walking out again. "Mom?" "Nothing. Mom? I'm back." She walks through the apartment, searching room after room while calling out for her mother. Finally, she heads into the kitchen to drop her book before heading out the back door into a garden. It is a beautiful place, an almost surreal environment of flowers and nature, yet, the moment I see it, I can tell that something is wrong. A patch of soil seems more disturbed than the others around it, forming a small mound of earth that seems completely out of place beside the rest of the meticulously kept garden. Pamela notices it almost as soon as I do, making me believe that she's extremely familiar with the garden, possibly even its caretaker. A growing sense of trepidation fills me as she walks closer and closer to the spot, and it takes a few moments before I realize that I'm perceiving her emotions right now. Right beside the mound, hidden from direct line of sight by it, lies a knife, its blade crimson. Pamela, in a trance-like state, reaches out to touch it. The blood on it is still sticky. Suddenly, a mounting sense of horror, whether mine or Pamela's I can't tell, fills my chest as I watch her scrabble through the earth at the base of the mound. It's slow work, but she moves with manic speed, excavating as fast as she can. All too soon, a keening wail rips its way out of her throat. Looking up at her, features uncovered and staring through lifeless eyes, is Angela. I'm not quite sure how long she sits there, racked by emotions so chaotic and confusing, but the next thing she see is James pounding his fists into the ground, grief-stricken, as tears pour down his eyes. The blank expanse appears again. Then, moments later, a new scene appears. This time, Pamela, still the same age but looking so weary, is seated in a cubicle. In front of her is a glass partition, and on the other end is her father, wearing orange coveralls. Prison clothes, I realize. So what are they saying now, Dad? They still think I did it, Pammy. James sounds broken by the concept that he would have killed her mother. We may have gone through a rough patch together, but I still love your mom, Pammy. I still love Angie. I know, Dad. I know. We just had to hope that your lawyers can prove your innocence. A bitter laugh burbles out. I don't think so, sweetheart. Don't say that, she cries out, her voice racked with anguish at the very thought. Yet, hidden beneath that, I can sense that she, knowing that there might be no hope for her father, has come to accept the same. Whether or not James picks up on this is debatable, but his next words seem to hint toward such. Stay strong, Pammy. No matter what happens, you're still my flower and I fully expect you to bloom, okay? She says nothing, the sounds of her tears the only sound until he raps at the divider. Hey, promise me this, huh? He smiles at her and shows none of the fear he's undoubtedly feeling inside. Instead, he radiates absolute pride and determination. Promise me that you'll bloom. It takes a few seconds for her to wipe her tears and stop sobbing, but she finally does and nods tentatively to him. I promise, Dad, I promise. The blankness returns and, for the next few moments, I'm shown a snapshot montage of memories. Pamela's shedding tears as her father is taken away in shackles, her with a bag at what I recognize as an orphanage. She's progressively growing older now as some of the snapshots are of her in libraries, poring over books, shying away from others, graduating from senior high and, as a beautiful young woman, graduating from university. Finding a job at a laboratory that allows her to work on a field of research that she truly loves and, finally, meeting a man that she feels attracted to. Then, a new scene appears. She's walking into a laboratory with a vial of some viscous, forest green liquid held triumphantly in her hand as she exudes an aura of confident joy. Jason, I finally cracked it. The man she's talking to turns to see the grin on her face and, without asking what she means, snatches her up in a hug and presses a kiss to her forehead. Calm down, Pam. Now, what did you crack? Remember the final hurdle I needed to cross to get the growth serum to work? She asks as she holds the vial up to the light. Well, after a few discussions with Doc Holland and a couple of sleepless nights, I finally crossed it. The grin widens as she dances away from him to twirl about. So happy is she. You're looking at the first vial of Isley's serum. You're still going with that name? Jason scrunches his nose up in playful disgust, but not before I catch a flicker of rage cross his features. Can I test it? I've got that flower pot you gave me last week and the dahlia is beginning to peek out of the soil. Without hesitation, Pamela skips across to the item in question and, after carefully uncorking the vial, tilts it till 2 drops splash onto the tiny green shoot peeking out of the soil. Give it a few seconds and, as if by magic, the shoot rapidly grows until it becomes a fully grown dahlia. Pamela's confidence grows even as Jason's rage festers, though the older man skillfully masks his emotions. Pamela, this is amazing. You just found the solution to food shortages globally. Holy, I'm not even sure how to classify how big this is. He seems genuinely happy and, unfortunately, Pamela is too happy to notice the slight hitches in his breathing. This guy is going to be trouble though. I guarantee that. Do you mind sharing a drop or two for me to run a few tests on? I mean, even you know that I'm better at quality control tests. Doc Holland said so too. I've actually got some tests running at the moment back in my lab. Wonderful, even in her success-inebriated state. She's still intelligent enough to not just hand out her work. I'm heading home now since the results will be out tomorrow, so, after I've checked them out, we can go over the QC tests. Sound good? I take that back. She may be more inebriated than I'd originally thought. She basically just told the guy that's eager to get his mitts on her groundbreaking work that she would be away from her lab for a while, during which the very research the guy wants would lay there, completely unguarded. You sure you don't want to stay with it? End it together tonight? I have to give it to him, he's good? Nah. She yawns as she backpedals out of the lab. Too strung up to be of much use anymore. I needs me some sleep. The memory skips forward, showing another montage of Pamela receiving a kiss from Jason, her heading to the elevator and, later, to her car. Then, after she starts the car, she seems a bit angry, steps out and heads back upstairs. She likely forgot something. Once again, just like when she discovered her mother's corpse in the garden, something feels off. She notices almost instantly. Her lab's door is open and the lights are on. Moving cautiously, she gets to the doorframe and peeks in only to yank her head back with tears in her eyes. Jason's inside, rifling through her cabinets and notes while angrily cursing her for hiding her research journal. Apparently, he knows how stupid it would be to approach anyone with the serum but no knowledge of how it was made, particularly if he wants to become famous with it. She seems to debate with herself for a moment before angrily stomping inside to confront him. Somehow, the words only come out as a loud buzz, but I can tell that she's furious and his selfish rage is growing. He lashes out at her, striking her in the face, and she staggers back a few steps before grabbing onto a glass rod and stabbing it into his eye. Half blinded, both by fury and pain, he staggers forward, pushing her into a shelf of jars that come crashing down on her. The memory begins to fade as a sharp pain radiated out from by her side. Drawing on the last vestiges of her strength, she opens her jacket to see that the vial of her serum is half buried into her side, just between 2 ribs. Then, the memory fades. Line, break Grand Tulip Hotel, room 641. Are you sure you're alright? Raven asked, watching as a now blonde Naruto gently laid poison ivy's inert body on the bed they prepared for her. Truth be told, he had given her a bit of fright back at the hall when, after the panicking crowd had been evacuated, She went in to check on him and found him frozen with his index fingers pressed against Ivy's temples. Though she was uncertain what was going on, she had sensed that the two were alive and that her teammate was in control. Then, just as her anxiety began to peak, the two frozen figures were thrown away from each other. Where Ivy remained unconscious, Naruto had regained consciousness swiftly and had instantly ordered herself and Kagaya to take the limo back to the hotel while he worked on getting Ivy there. The drive had been nerve-wracking for her, though Kagaya had repeatedly assured her that nothing was wrong with the blonde. By the time they arrived, he had finished modifying the seal he had designed to hold Ivy. "I'm alright, Raven," he sighed as he activated the seal. The newly modified seal would allow her body to keep on absorbing nature energy, though just the barest minimum to keep her alive while allowing her to relive some of her most pleasant memories. It was the least he could do for the woman until he could hold a full discussion with Yggdrasil. The Council of the Green had a lot to answer for as far as he was concerned. "I'm just a bit tired. Temporarily breaking her hold over nature like I did, then getting her here as fast as I could while avoiding being seen was a bit of a hassle. Having to modify the seal as swiftly as you did to prevent her death must have added a bit of strain as well," Kagaya added as she walked in through the adjoining door. "I've spoken to Batman. The rest of the team is back from their mission, so he'll have Cyborg connect us to base in about 5 minutes. "Wait." Raven cut in, sounding quite confused. "You had to modify the seal you already created? To save her?" The blonde nodded tiredly. Poison Ivy's body actively requires natural energy to keep moving. It's like a combination of solar energy to a plant and crack to a junkie. When I cut her off from the natural energy, she had a negative reaction to the feeling. Like a junkie being stopped cold turkey, but worse. Her body has grown dependent on natural energy and her mind couldn't function without it, so she basically went into a coma. The modification to the seal allows her to draw the barest minimum of energy to keep her alive while allowing her mind to experience a few dream sequences. Oh, and if you're wondering why I didn't let her die, possibly because of my discussion with Batman earlier, well, Ivy showed me that there's hope for her to be redeemed," Naruto added with a shrug. Just then, the room's lights flickered twice before the TV turned itself on. The letters, "Room clear," appeared on the blank screen. Guessing that they could be heard somehow, the blonde took the initiative and answered with a clearly enunciated, "Yes." Instantly, the blank screen blinked away to be replaced by the live feed of the Mount's central meeting place. On screen, the rest of the Fate mission team stood together with Batman, Canary and Cyborg. "Can you guys see us?" Raven asked, drawing the attention of the rest of the team. "Sure we whoa. Raven, you look good," Wally exclaimed as he took in the rest of the team. "And why do you guys have a Poison Ivy cosplayer on the bed? Gotta say, though, she's really good. That has to be the best cosplay I've ever seen." "That's not a cosplayer, Wally," Raven corrected with just the barest hint of smugness to her tone. "Let's just say that our mission went well and we caught the target. How about you guys?" The wallman managed to get his fat head stuck in a dusty old helmet and inadvertently got himself possessed by an ages-old magical entity. Artemis happily chimed in. Much to the Uzumaki's pleasure, he noted that there was decidedly less animosity in her tone than before they left for the mission. What a way to prove, beyond a shadow of doubt, that magic isn't real EH. Guess the universe still has a twisted sense of humor. Naruto flashed a grin at them before schooling his features. "Alright, more gist after your debrief, Calder?" The dark-skinned Atlantean nodded before launching into a concise retelling of his team's mission. "Interesting," Batman mused after Calder's report. "Anything else?" "Yes. During the fight, and prior to Kid Flash putting on the helmet of fate, Clarion made a comment. He said that we had been touched by chaos," Calder added. Then, before he released Kid Flash, Fate made a similar comment. He said, and I quote, "You have been in the presence of chaos, yet I sense no evil in you." Intriguing. After that, he released Wally. Kagaya, from her position behind both Raven and Naruto, noticed how the young magic user tensed at each mention of the word chaos, and the gears in her head began to turn. She decided to talk to the girl first, though, before drawing up any conclusions. Upon returning her focus onto the conversation, the white-haired princess heard Naruto asking for confirmation of Calder's report, which immediately provided. "That was exactly how Fate put it," the Batman's protege said. Calder didn't miss a word. "Well, that puts a new spin on things," Canary murmured. "What the hell do they mean, touched by chaos?" "That'll be discussed later," the Dark Knight decided. "Calder, your team performed well today. You can hit the showers." It was a dismissal and everyone listening knew it. Connor, hothead that he was, bristled and seemed prepared to say something before Magan placed a hand on his chest and shook her head minutely. Quite impressively, Kagaya noted, the Kryptonian clone's aggression dissipated almost instantly and, after a final glare at the back of the bat's head, he allowed himself to be led away. A few moments later, the hall was void of the team, leaving Cyborg, Canary and Batman to continue the discussion with the blonde's team. "I'll take it that she acted exactly as predicted?" Cyborg asked, jutting his chin out toward the unconscious redhead behind the blonde. "Yeah. Naruto admitted. The plan went off almost exactly as we expected too. What changed? Canary asked. Naruto's ability to manipulate plants as she typically does, but then discovered that she has become dependent on said ability to live. Raven answered bluntly. Basically, he had to modify the containment cell he prepared for her to allow her ability to keep her body alive but her mind under. Impressive. Canary smiled. Though I just see her lying on a bed. Where's the containment cell? We're standing in it. The raven-haired girl replied with a shrug. I'm surprised that you didn't kill her, the Dark Knight stated, considering our discussion earlier. I recall stating that I wouldn't target any of your villains without reason. The Uzumaki shot back dryly. Besides, Ivy is different. How so? The blonde seemed to take a few moments to consider that before replying with a simple, she's special. Line. Break unknown location. It's not fair, not fair, not fair, not fair. Each exclamation was followed by an earth-shaking explosion as Clarion the Witch Boy and Lord of Chaos threw an epic tantrum. Luckily, he had returned to his own pocket dimension so he could go all out in there. Standing a safe distance away, Vandal Savage helped himself to a bottle of vintage wine while he watched the childish being vent his frustrations. Turning to his companion, he arched an eyebrow and asked, he's quite the passionate one, isn't he? Said companion simply lifted a paw in the best approximation of a feline shrug it could give, as if to say, it's his nature. Admittedly so. Savage agreed as he pulled out and glanced at a pocket watch he'd brought along. The Lords of Chaos have always been more inclined to give in to their emotions than their counterparts. Unfortunately, this has gone on long enough. I have places to be. The last sentence was said in a louder pitch so that the enraged magical being could hear him, which obviously worked as Clarion ceased his assault and floated back to join the immortal. Thanks for indulging me. The Lord of Chaos huffed as he grabbed the bottle off the table and guzzled it down, ignoring the second glass on the table. Ah, that hit the spot. You do know your liquors, Vandy. Certain forms of appreciation come with age. Vandal replied. So, what happened, Clarion? A furious scowl appeared on the witch boy's face. I was bested by that order-loving retard Nabu. And, to add insult to this injury, he pulled it off while he possessed a boy with damned near zero magical potential. So the primary and main secondary objectives failed. Vandal mused as the cat nimbly leapt off the table to rest on its master's shoulder. You didn't get the helmet and didn't get to test the League's resistance to magic. Things turned out exactly as predicted. The snake fucker with the god complex and his predictions can go burn in the abyss. The magical being snarled as his face shifted into a more demonic form. After we've achieved our goals, the immortal shrugged. Until then, he's with us. For the next few moments, the two were quiet, looking over the pockmarked barren wasteland that Clarion's dimension resembled at the moment. I take it that you did accomplish the third set of objectives? Of course I did. The witch boy snapped irritably. That little team that wrecked your Sumdak operation, at least, the portion I confronted, has next to no magical protection. They only have an Atlantean, a warrior too, not even a sorcerer. Pathetic. You said, the portion I faced. Why? I didn't go up against the full team. From what I sensed, though, they do have access to a magic user, either as a core teammate or someone they meet quite frequently. I sensed a faint trail of chaos around them. The magical being paused for a few moments, taking another swig of the wine as he did, before continuing. The thing is, I'm pretty sure I've felt that chaos before. It's extremely familiar, but the identity keeps slipping out of reach. That might be useful. Vandal acknowledged. Try to figure out the identity, we may be able to utilize that. In the meantime, our distraction may have to include Floronic Man. Clarion balked at that. Instead of Poison Ivy. What the hell brought that change about? Luther's plan to bring in Ivy failed. Savage stated, though the Lord of Chaos could hear the faint undercurrent of anger in the immortal's tightly controlled voice. According to Sportsmaster, who was to bring her in after she'd killed those men, she was neutralized and carted off by as yet undetermined persons. The Lord of Chaos silently contemplated the immortal's words before coming to a conclusion. Probably the ones I didn't fight. Luther and the brain share that belief as well. If it was, then we need to get to work on shutting them down fast. They've been throwing our plans askew for too long.